The anime starts by showing us the prestigious Rigarden Magical Academy, where what is valued most highly is a talent for magic, naturally. Despite this, our protagonist, Will Surfort, has no aptitude for it at all, and he's unable to use even the most basic of magics. He's only a book learner, so he's an honor student when it comes to note-taking, but it isn't something anyone admires. After all, most people believe that in this world, the supremacy of magic is absolute, because their heroes are mages. The most powerful wizards, the Magiavander, are the ones who uphold the sky. Long ago, people knew nothing of the sky, so they were trapped in darkness, and the world was terrorized by the celestial host until 5 wizards rose up against them. These wizards turned back the invaders, and they cast a seal over the sky, bringing peace to their world. The Magiavander is a title that has been passed down ever since, given only to the strongest. That's why everyone dreams of it at least once, the honor of becoming a mage. In Will's case, he made a promise with his childhood friend Elfaria, saying that they would reach the top of the tower one day to get as close as they can to the sky and become Magiavander to see the sunset that hides behind it. It was nothing more than an innocent childhood promise, but Elfaria was the real thing. With her talent, she became the youngest ever to earn the Magiavander title and left for the top of the tower. As for Will, being talentless, he's even less than mediocre, but unable to give up on the promise they made that day, he's still scrambling, even now, to achieve his dream of standing beside her. One day at the academy, his professor, Werkner Norgrim, scolds him for hitting the dungeon without permission again and going to the 7th floor solo. Despite this, he knows that Will needs those credits to become a Magiavander, which is why he usually goes to the dungeon to defeat monsters. Even so, Werkner reminds him that before he heads to the tower, he needs to advance to the Upper Institute, and to do that, he'll need writing, spell work, and praxis. He needs a tremendous amount of credits from the 3 curricula, and since he can't use magic, he'll never be able to earn spell work credits. Will clarifies that he already knows that, and that's why he's focusing on praxis, collecting credits in the dungeon. Werkner cuts him off before he can finish his sentence, and warns him that advancing through praxis alone is effectively impossible, especially for someone who can't use magic. Will's expression turns slightly sad because he knows it's true, but he's not ready to give up just yet. Werkner asks him to stop thinking about becoming a Magiavander when he may not even graduate. He also mentions that he already knows that he failed to earn any credits on his most recent exams, which means he needs to earn 4 credits by the end of the week. There are only 2 days left, so Will panics and tries to search in his notes for any 4-credit monster. Werkner casually mentions that there have been reports of a Baskerville on the 6th floor, a monster Will hasn't defeated yet. Will hugs his professor without a doubt to thank him, but they don't notice that one of Will's classmates, Cyan Ulster, heard them. Cyan immediately starts plotting something against Will because he really wants to get rid of him, since he thinks he's just a no-talent who's out of his league. Will soon heads to the 6th floor of the dungeon with his familiar Kiki to find the monster and get 4 credits. In the meantime, Cyan and his friends, Lyral Mars and Gordon Barrett, also dive into the 6th floor of the dungeon, planning to get rid of the monster themselves to steal the credits, because they don't want Will in the academy. Cyan firmly believes that a guy who can't use magic shouldn't even speak of the Magiavander, so the very sight of him offends him. They have an easy task, defeating the Baskerville before Will can. However, their plans are completely ruined when a different monster attacks them. Gordon gets crushed against the wall with a single brutal blow, so Lyral panics and screams, casting spells to try to save his life. Will manages to hear that scream, so he immediately runs to the place to see what's going on, and notices that his classmates are being attacked by an evil sentinel, a 10-credit dangerous monster. The sentinel's habitat should be deeper down, so it doesn't make sense that it came up to this floor. Cyan's magic isn't having any effect against the monster, because an evil sentinel is on a whole other level. Despite Cyan's poor treatment against him, Will decides to step in to help him, because Elfaria once told him that he was kind and braver than anyone. He actually disagrees, because the only thing he wants is to be worthy of her, which is why he'll become like a lone sword at the very least. As Will lunges at the evil sentinel without a second thought, Professor Edward Serfants barges into Werkner's office to inform him that Cyan went to the 6th floor of the dungeon without permission. Even though this normally would have been alarming, Werkner tells him that it'll be alright, because Will is there. He uses a magic device that allows them to see what's going on the 6th floor through Kiki's eyes. Thanks to that, they actually see Will brutally fighting against the evil sentinel, crushing it with his sheer strength. Edward can barely believe what he's seeing, because, just like Cyan, he firmly thinks that Will is a failure just because he can't use magic. Werkner informs him that Will is actually a true outlier, because he has superhuman strength a mage would never possess, a physique as robust as a dwarf's, and the observational skills to grasp an enemy's strategies after seeing them just once. It's true that Will can't use the slightest bit of magic, but in this world full of magic, he's the one and only warrior. During the fierce battle, Will's sword even cuts through the evil sentinel's magic, and with only a slash of his sword that surpasses even lightning, he slices the monster in half, destroying everything around. Immediately after defeating the evil sentinel, Will approaches Cyan to check on him. However, Cyan is totally infuriated, just like Professor Edward, who refuses to stand for this because he can't believe that someone who can't even use magic is able to surpass it. Now we see a memory of 5 years ago, when Will was only 10 years old and Elfaria had just become a Magiavander. The academy headmistress, Cauldron Anuv, decided to put Will to the test, despite what everyone said about him not being able to use magic. Will's skills with the sword truly left her speechless, so she decided to allow him to continue attending the academy. After all, the concept of a sword yearning to be a wand was interesting to her. Since then, Will has been trying hard, despite what everyone says, because he wants to ascend to the tower. Back to the present time, Werkner explains that to ascend the tower generally means advancing to the upper institute. To become one of the Magia Vander who reign from the topmost floor of Mercedes Kaulis, they must be recognized by the highest center of learning, the upper institute. There are two principal methods of advancement: to create a new type of magic or to earn at least 7,200 credits at their academy. Only a limited number of people can achieve the former, which means the majority of students must rely on the latter. However, Werkner warns the whole class that everyone is in danger of not making graduation, much less the upper institute. After a harsh supplementary class, Will meets with his friend Colette Loire, and as they walk through the halls of the academy, they find Cyan's friends talking about the evil sentinel of the 6th floor. They tell everyone that Cyan is the one who defeated the evil sentinel by himself, but Cyan is the only one who knows the truth, and he's completely furious about it. On the other hand, Professor Edward meets with the headmistress and tells her that Will Surfort should be expelled. Cauldron reminds him that Will is already in his 6th and final year at the academy, so they can't expel him now when he's come this far. Edward still firmly tells her that this academy has no need of anyone who is a warrior and not a mage, because there's no way someone can surpass magic without being able to use it. Despite all his complaints, Cauldron assures him that if they ignore the fact that Will can't use magic, he still excels to the degree that calling it mere excellence is insufficient. Because of that, she believes that he could become an artificer or a healer, and there are many paths open to him. Cauldron reminds him that this academy has a duty to produce learned scholars for the fated day. Edward clarifies that the boy in question doesn't seek to be a learned scholar, but a Magia Vander. Cauldron admits that that's a problem in this case, so she decides to allow Edward to give Will a test. Without wasting any time, Edward finds Will and brings him to the academy spell hall with him, saying that he can't overlook how he continues to fail spell work, so he'll give him a supplemental lesson. Edward informs him that his assignment is to land a single strike on him, and if he succeeds, he will award him 5 spell work credits. However, if he fails, he will have him leave this academy for good, because those without talent should not be permitted to even look upon the Magia Vander. Before giving him any time to answer, Edward starts casting magic spells against Will without mercy. Will can't do anything but dodge the destructive spells, knowing that he doesn't stand a chance against them, because Edward is the closest to actually becoming a Magia Vander, and his magic speaks for him. He only uses low-level dark magic spells, and yet Will is overwhelmed by his power. Despite this, he tries to use his superhuman speed to reach him and land a hit, but Edward's defenses are also impeccable. He's casting spells with no incantations, and there's not one hole in his offense or defense. Will can't even scratch him, and Edward doesn't give him a break from his constant attacks. While Will is on the floor, Edward talks about the Battle of Garzaronso Will admires so much. He mentions that the foolish dwarves incited a rebellion with a force of 10,000, but it took only one mage to quell the battle. With a wave of a wand, 10,000 dwarven warriors were annihilated, because that's the way of this world, and a sword will never reach a wand. Edward tries to discourage him, and asks him what noble reason lives in his heart for him to want to become a Magia Vander. Despite how beaten up he is, Will stands up with determination, holding the goggles Elfaria gave him as a gift once, and he tells his professor that he really wants to be with the person he loves. That answer leaves Edward completely speechless, but Will stands his ground and tells him that he wants to keep the promise he made with Elfaria. Even if his reason seems ridiculous to him, and no matter how harsh his path may be, he will go see the sunset with her. Edward is completely furious now, and he's more than ready to put an end to this. However, Colette arrives just in time thanks to Kiki, and she gives Will the one thing he needs to be able to fight his professor, a sword. Edward still believes that there's nothing he can do against magic with a mere sword, but to his surprise, Will uses his sword to slice through his spell. Despite how terrified he is, Will faces him head-on and fights, dodging Edward's destructive spells at high speed. He thinks about the Battle of Garzaronso again, knowing that there's more to the story. A brave dwarven general named Gareth fought even as he lost all his brethren, and in spite of everything, he landed a single blow. In honor of his bravery, the mages recognized the dwarves' status. After all, a sword saw a wand and reached it. Will honors that story himself, and manages to break through Edward's defenses in the blink of an eye, attacking from a blind spot overhead. Before he knows it, his sword reaches Edward, creating a small cut on his cheek. As soon as that happens, Edward turns around to leave, and tells him that he's earned the 5 credits. Sometime after that, Will reads in the newspaper that Elfaria created a new original magic, becoming the first to achieve the remarkable feat of inventing 12 magics. Subsequently, the Upper Institute has passed an order down to the entire academy, and the client is Elfaria herself. As soon as Will reads about that, he goes back to his dorm to see his roommate, Rosti Noman, and asks him to make him a magic item. He explains that the order is to collect Frostwalker ice cores, because Elfaria apparently needs a lot of magic catalysts, and all contributing students will be compensated. Fortunately, Rosti already had something prepared for him, and mentions that he's made improvements to the previous version of his magic item. With that, Will immediately heads to the 4th floor of the dungeon, where a lot of students students are already working to fulfill Elfaria's request. Since there are way too many students, Will decides to go to a more secluded area, and he ends up saving a fourth-year student named Iris Churchill from some monsters. Despite knowing who he is, Iris is still kind to him, so Will asks her if she doesn't feel any kind of disdain toward him for being talentless. Iris simply tells him that she couldn't possibly look down on the person who saved her, and explains that even if he can't use magic, she has a heartfelt respect for people with their own gifts. That aside, she mentions that she's also here for Elfaria's request, because she wants to be of use to the Magiavander and become one of the people holding up the sky. Will remains silent, knowing that she's not joking about that. They actually don't know the real sky, and even now, their world is hidden, because the tremendous magical energies of the Magiavander cloak everything, creating a false sky known as the Great Barrier. According to the lore, when the barrier falls, the world will once again be enveloped in darkness, and the calamity will begin. The students strive to meet orders not only because they admire the Magiavander, but also because they believe it will help to support the sky. Iris mentions that everyone else must have defeated all the remaining Frostwalkers at this point, because she can't find any even with her location magic. Despite this, Will notices a great amount of ice fragments, which leads him to a powerful Frostwalker no one else could detect. Iris tries to stop him, because she knows that he can't use magic, but Will thinks that magic isn't absolute, especially not inside the dungeon. He also has some knowledge and wisdom, and he believes that experience can make up for the rest. To their surprise, they don't find a normal Frostwalker, but a giant Frost Rex, the highest form of Frostwalker, which is worth 6 credits. This over 5 enemy is a special monster specific to floor 4, but despite how dangerous it is, Will manages to defeat it, using the magic items Rosti made for him. Later, at Mercedes Cowlis, the Wizard's Tower, Iris meets with 4 of the Magiavander: Cariot Incendia Wiseman, Eleanor Leos Alf, Zeo Thorzeus Reinbolt, and Elfaria Albus Surfort. There, Iris informs them that in her observation of the Academy, she discovered one interesting prospect, and she recommends Will Surfort for a position in the tower. Elfaria remains silent, while Cariot and Eleanor refuse without a doubt, and only Zeo finds the idea interesting, since he'd even take a dwarf if they're useful. Even though Eleanor disagrees with him, Zeo reminds her that it's nearly time for the Grand Magic Festival, so they can wait to make a decision until after they see those results. Later, it is explained that of the 12,000 total credits available at the Academy, 7,200 credits are required for a student to advance to the Upper Institute, an absolute condition for becoming a Magiavander. Rihanna Owensaus, Wignall Lindor, and Julius Reinberg are the only ones with over 10,000 credits. A student's credits are like an index by which their skills can be judged, so it's clear for everyone that those 3 are going to the Upper Institute. On the other hand, Will doesn't even have enough to graduate, since he only has 5,405 credits. Because of that, Colette tells him that he should participate in the Magic Festival, since there's a precedent for a student being scouted and ascending the tower on the spot. She reminds him that the Grand Magic Festival is a contest between students from the different tower factions, so this is where advancement to the tower is decided. The factions are the Lightning Lord's Wand, Thorzeus Fash, the Sacred Elf's Wand, Eliaf Cannon, the Flame Emperor's Wand, Incendia Barham, and the Ice Maiden's Wand, Albus Vina. Setting aside the Light Sovereign's Wand, Mysteria's Noah, the current Magiavander lead these 4 major factions. Despite how tempting it sounds, Will reminds her that skipping the requirements for graduation and going straight to the tower hardly ever happens. Plus, he already tried to participate once, and since he can't use magic at all, people didn't take it very well. Even though he decided not to go, Will changes his mind that night after trying to defend his dwarven friends from Julius. Long ago, when the dwarves' world was destroyed by the celestial host, they escaped to their world. Unlike the elves, dwarves are treated with disdain, so if a dwarf were to lay hands on a mage, their standing would instantly be in danger. However, the dwarves are very dear friends to Will, and he's really fond of them, so when Julius enters the tavern he works at just to insult them, he can't stand it. He tries to make Julius take back those insults, and ends up throwing a drink on his head while taking down his friends. Julius covers the whole place in ice out of rage, and asks Will to enter the Grand Magic Festival, because he wants to humiliate him in front of everyone. Will accepts without a doubt, because he's seriously angry this time, and if he wins, he wants Julius to apologize to Donnan and his other dwarven friends. A few days later, the Grand Magic Festival finally opens, and Colette somehow finds a way to get Scion on her team, leaving out the fact that Will is going to participate. Scion is not really happy when he finds out, but Colette explains that in order to participate in the crown attack, the team must have at least 21,000 combined credits, so their only option was inviting him. The crown attack is the main event of the Grand Magic Festival, and unlike the other events, this is a team competition held between 3-man cells. Teams start at the outer edge of the field and make their way to the central stadium, where the first team to take the crown wins. The elite professors have arranged a veritable mountain of traps for them, though, so it won't be an easy task. As soon as the event starts, the public is left speechless when Will completely crushes a golem with a magic gauntlet Colette made for him. They can easily advance thanks to that, but Scion is still very displeased by the situation. He still thinks about the time Will saved him that time, but he feels like he'd rather have died than forgive himself for that. Everyone is surprised by how easily they go forward thanks to Will, because because he moves like someone who spends all their time in the dungeon. His knowledge and experience have purged him of any inefficiency, and his reflexes bestow him the opportunity to break through. In no time, his team reaches the final area before the central stadium, the Enchanted Woods. However, even though they have the lead, Julius takes them by surprise with an ambush. All of his ice attacks are melted the second Cyan starts a powerful fire incantation and attacks him with a dangerous Iflam Berdelion. This spell is also directed to Will, and if Colette hadn't protected him in time, he would have been burnt to a crisp. The attack is so powerful that the shockwave even reaches the central stadium, shocking everyone in the public. Will is still trying to process what just happened, and to his surprise, Cyan asks Julius to leave, saying that he's in the way. He then asks Will to fight him, and before Colette can interfere, Julius suddenly blocks her. She doesn't understand how he escaped the bombardment, but she's forced to fight Julius alone. Will tries to reason with Cyan, but he soon realizes that there's just no way, so he'll have to fight him here and now. In a fragment of the past, we see what Cyan really used to think about Will. He thought he was pathetic from the very beginning, and that's why decided that he'd make him less painful to watch. To take away all the constant bullying towards Will, Cyan tried to offer him being one of his underlings, because that way he wouldn't feel so wretched all the time. To his surprise, Will simply ignored him and walked away. He never even once saw them blotting the landscape, because to him, they were the invisible ones. Ever since that day, Cyan has despised him, so now he's fighting him with everything he has, hoping that Will finally acknowledges him and fights him back. However, Will only dodges his attacks and refuses to fight back because they're on the same team, and there's no time for this right now. Cyan still stubbornly insists and warns him that he'll just burn him to cinders if he's not going to fight. While he attacks him with another blast, Colette tries to escape from Julius, but she ends up falling into a trap. Soon the public realizes that there's something weird going on because they can see Julius in different locations of the map at the same time. Meanwhile, Will tries to understand why Cyan is acting like this and why everyone has always mistreated him, since he knew better than anyone what a failure he is. He didn't want to ask them to accept him because he'd never asked something so selfish, so he just wanted them to leave him alone. That's why he pushed Cyan away at first, because he didn't have time and he couldn't afford to look away from his goal. However, he can't look away now that Cyan is fighting him with all his might, getting to the point of summoning a guardian, Halcon Gardinus, a falcon made of flames. Will thinks fast and cuts the falcon's wings before trying to reach Cyan, but to his surprise, the falcon has high-speed regeneration. Guardians are mainly used to defend and buy time for an incantation, but this one is attacking from all directions. While he focuses on dodging the guardian, Cyan prepares a high-level fire spell and attacks him with Iflam Berdelion. Will somehow manages to block the attack with his gauntlet and barely redirects the blast behind him. The sheer power of that explosion leaves the public completely speechless, and some of the watchers in charge of recruiting students for the tower see potential in Cyan. Will can tell that he's become a lot stronger, but Cyan isn't satisfied and tells him that he was better than this when he defeated the evil sentinel. Cyan can't understand how he doesn't resent him after being so ridiculed and suffering such humiliation for so long. Will clarifies that he does resent him, and he's actually furious because he's lost count of the times he's imagined getting back at him, but right now, he has to beat Julius, so he doesn't have time for this. Cyan gets even more angry and frustrated by that, and confesses that watching him refuse to give up even though he's just a no-talent infuriates him, and yet, he doesn't understand why he's always looking everywhere but at him. Will is stunned into silence at that, and he finally understands how Cyan really sees him. In truth, even though he refused to let people accept him because he thought it'd be selfish, somewhere deep in his heart, that's actually what he wanted. That's why, if it means Cyan will acknowledge him, then Will is going to meet his challenge with everything he has. Cyan is glad to see that Will is finally going to fight back, so he immediately attacks with wide-scale destruction magic and a guardian strike simultaneously. Even so, Will gives up on defending against his destruction magic and slices through the guardian's core with his sword instead. However, right when they're about to land the decisive strike, Colette interrupts them and blocks their path with a giant earth wall. She explains that she beat Julius, but he suddenly disappeared on her without a warning. Without wasting more time, Colette asks Will to go on ahead because she knows that he's got a score to settle with Julius. Cyan tries to protest, but Colette keeps him at bay, so Will thanks her before leaving and tells Cyan that they can have a real fight next time. Julius's team is first to reach the central stadium, but just as they're about to claim the crown, Will lands on the stadium with great force and challenges him without a doubt. Julius congratulates him for making it this far, saying that if he won a landslide victory without humiliating him, it wouldn't satisfy him in the least. Will reassures him and clarifies that until he apologizes to Donnan and the others, he has no intention of losing. As soon as the battle begins, Julius covers everything with a smokescreen, and Will soon realizes that the three of them plan to surround him. After blocking an attack that comes from behind, he immediately starts running, because he knows that they'll get him if he stops. Even with his vision obscured, he can judge their locations by their attacks, or that's what he thinks. However, when he finally finds Julius, another attack suddenly hits him from the side. Will soon realizes that Julius's teammates are right next to him, standing on their initial spot, and Julius lets him know that they haven't even moved a single step yet. When the smokescreen finally disperses, everyone is shocked to see several copies of Julius in the arena. Julius casually mentions that his other copies explode, so Will immediately braces braces himself when the copy right in front of him suddenly bursts. His body ends up mostly frozen, but the audience is still trying to process the magic Julius used. After all, it's the secret arts discovered by the peerless genius Elfaria, Elglas Frost. Those 12 spells are Elfaria's masterpiece, for which the term serial magic was coined. Will knows that Julius is using one of those 12 spells. L1, Ars Weiss, a spell that creates icy copies of its caster. He immediately asks him how he's using Elfaria's magic, but Julius just starts laughing and tells him that it's natural talent. He explains that he learned this secret art by studying on his own, and though only in part, he's reached the heights of a Magiavander, so he thinks Albus Vina isn't so impressive after all. Will's reaction lets him know how much that comment really affected him, so Julius continues talking and says that he'll expose Elfaria for all to see one day. That statement alone is enough for Will to break free from the ice out of rage, but he's soon attacked by the other copies of Julius from different directions. Julius warns him that his doubles move exactly as he wishes, and they can use magic. Before he knows it, Will is surrounded by his doubles, but they suddenly stop attacking him and enclose him in a cage Julius crafted just for him. He then lets a giant block of ice fall on him, shocking everyone in the public because he won without taking a single step. Julius doesn't waste any time and addresses the scouts in the crowd, saying that after acquiring Albus Vina's secret art, his ice magic is utterly indomitable. That way, he will prove to them that he is Elfaria's successor. Iris soon realizes that Julius did all of this as a demonstration, and he played Will, who's as quick and agile as a monster. Rosti doesn't look concerned at all, though, and he mentions that Julius would look pathetic if he doesn't win now. After all his bragging, Julius suddenly hears a crack, and soon, Will breaks through the giant block of ice and thanks him, saying that his magic helped him cool off. He admits that it's a bad habit of his, but when it comes to Elfaria, he always gets hot-headed. Julius gets frustrated and tries to end him right there, but Will easily dodges his attacks and tells him that his Ars Weiss isn't perfect. He then takes down Julius's teammates, leaving him alone, and all his copies soon crumble apart. Will explains that Julius was controlling his doubles with his teammates' support. He can use Elfaria's magic briefly, but no more than that, so he's nowhere close to being her match. His Ars Weiss isn't perfect, because unlike Guardians, which can act on their own, Ars Weiss must be actively controlled, so Julius relied on his teammates to help him maneuver the spell. Julius gets furious by his words and attacks him while saying that a no-talent like him has no right to speak as if he knows everything. Will uses his sword and speed to dodge and block all of the attacks, but Julius is still able to control 4 of his doubles, which are identical to him. Despite this, Will can easily tell which one is the real one, and he finds him right away, taking him off guard. Will explains that the internal temperature of Ars Weiss is the exact opposite of its caster, minus 36 to 37 degrees, and it can go lower depending on other magic cast. If the doubles aren't controlled perfectly, the cold leaks out, and just like with Frostwalkers, ice crystals form at their feet. Julius suddenly notices that the doubles he created indeed have ice crystals at their feet, proving Will's point. This makes him feel even more frustrated, so he asks him how a no-talent like him knows the spell better than he does. Will explains that Elfaria and he are childhood friends, and they were raised at the same orphanage. That's how he knows her magic so well, because he admired it and studied it, though he just couldn't catch up to her. Will informs Julius that he knows all the strengths and weaknesses of Elfaria's magic because of that. Julius explodes in rage and asks him to stop spewing nonsense, saying that she's Albus Vina, so this is the secret art of a Magiavander, and no lowly no-talent could ever hope to best it. He attacks again without thinking, but Will easily cuts through his spell and admits that he's incredible, because until now, no mage has been able to reproduce Elfaria's magic. However, he clarifies that Ars Weiss is a spell she invented when she was only 2 years old, so it isn't perfect and it has its weaknesses. Julius completely freezes in shock after hearing that, trying to process the unbelievable information. After all, he was elated when he grasped this spell, yet Elfaria invented it when she was only 2 years old, which means he's on the same level as a toddler. Out of sheer rage, Julius casts Ars Weiss again, and he increases the number of his doubles to 8, saying that control doesn't matter. Will isn't intimidated by this in the slightest, and he explains that he recalls being tormented by 10 Elfarius when they were kids, so this is no challenge for him. Blinded by his anger, Julius attacks him non-stop, trying to crush him, but Will destroys each one of his doubles one by one until he finally reaches the real Julius and ends him with a crushing blow from his fist. Everyone in the crowd is thrilled by Will's incredible victory, but just then, Wignar Lindor claims the crown, saying that while they were busy with their duel, he took the liberty of winning this game. Just like that, the crown attack comes to a conclusion, and even though they didn't win, Will is glad that he was able to keep his promise. Soon after that, the dwarves hold a celebration to thank Will, because he was victorious and they got their apology from Julius, who's now forced to work at their tavern under Gina's command. Now, it's almost time for the all-student praxis, a whole week of exploring the dungeon. After his display at the Grand Magic Festival, Will has become popular at the academy, and now plenty of students are trying to get him in their party for the all-student praxis. Colette tries to get him out of that situation, but Will is actually beaming in happiness, wondering if this is what having friends is like. Despite this, she still drags him away from them and makes up an excuse, saying that they have to go shopping. Even though it was the perfect opportunity to have a date, Rosti invites himself to get in the way, and he makes sure to push all her buttons by getting as close to Will as he can. Colette loses her composure in no time, so so Rosti decides to have a chat with her alone after Will leaves to give his sword some maintenance. However, before he can get to the forge, Will runs into Lihanna Owenzos, who's known as Miss Perfect for acquiring every credit in writing, spell work, and praxis. Without giving him any explanation, she just asks him to go with her and takes him to a room where Julius, Wignall, and Sion are waiting for her. There, she explains that in the latter half of their final year at the academy, the all-student praxis will take place, so she would like the 5 of them to form a party. Sion and Julius are obviously against this, but Wignall decides to listen to her, and Lihanna explains that, in addition to the greatest mages of their year, she'd like to add Will. After all, he is the boy who stood out so prominently at the Grand Magic Festival, and he possesses something that they don't, which will prove useful in the dungeon. Julius questions her judgment and says that someone who can't even cast Search in the dungeon will only hold them back. Sion agrees and says that he doesn't want to be in a party with him again, but Wignall tells them that their pride and hostility is completely pointless. He tells Julius that the fact that he dares to look down on someone who has defeated him makes him doubt his character. Julius reminds him that in terms of credits, Lihanna has outdone even him, but Wignall doesn't deny it and tells him that that's why he has the utmost respect for her. So, if this is her determination, then he will defer to her even in the selection of the talentless. Lihanna clarifies that she wants to use all of them, including Wignall, to be the top of their class and ascend the tower. She seeks even greater renown than her current standing, and her eyes are on the future. Lihanna explains that those who still remain at the academy are leftovers, so they're inferior, and that's why she wants to push so hard right now. She mentions that she comes from House Owenzos, and in general, they are short-lived, so she must achieve overwhelming accomplishments to forestall her family's ruin. Simply ascending the tower isn't enough, so what she needs is to become a Magiavander. She knows that all of them are ambitious as well, so if they see the benefit to be had, she'd like them to place the coin by their hand into the cup. Wignall agrees without a doubt, and the others also place their coins into the cup, knowing that no other party could possibly reap better results in battle. Of course, Will also decides to place his coin into the cup, so he soon informs Colette and Rosti that he'll be doing the all-student praxis with Lihanna's party. Soon after that, Werkner informs the class that the all-student praxis is 10 days away. For a limited time, floors 7 through 10 will be unlocked, so they'll be able to defeat over 5 enemies and other monsters worth even more credits. This is their only chance to earn over 1,000 credits at once, and in particular, defeating floor keeps will net them a tidy sum of credits. That's why they should use this to make up for any credits they're missing, or show what they're really made of and use it as a stepping stone to the tower. Edward warns them that some of them will die in the process, and just last year, 4 students were eaten by monsters. He explains that during the exercise, professors will be stationed within the dungeon, but that won't prevent violent deaths in its depths, so they must know their place and steel their resolve. The day of the all-student praxis finally arrives, so all the students head to the base camp on the 6th floor of the dungeon. Colette decides to stick with Will, even though she wasn't invited to Lihanna's party. On the other hand, Rosti stays on the 6th floor, because the students in the artificing track are stationed at base camp. He still made a lot of magic items for Will, though, to help him through the all-student praxis, also known as the field intensive. Before they begin, Edward reminds them that their time limit is a week, and unlike usual praxis, they will dive into the dungeon and try to survive. Werkner mentions that there's a base camp set up on each floor, so they must make sure to check their locations on the maps they've received. At the conclusion of the praxis, or if they choose to retire, they have to make sure to evacuate to a safe area, and professors will be on standby. Once this is clear, the all-student praxis finally begins, so the students dive into the dungeon. In another scene, a mysterious man complains about his job in the dungeon, saying that he can't believe that he was sent here when the kids are holding that festival of theirs. That leaves him with no choice but to slaughter his way through after all. Meanwhile, even though Will tries to do everything he can to be of any help in the party, the others don't even let him, overwhelming him with their power. He soon finds out that the Owenzoses are a line of knights, and Lihanna is rare among mages because she specializes in close quarters combat. Will can't sense enemies fast enough, and Julius and the others are using search magic to perceive a larger area than his senses can. At this rate, they'll clean up all of the monsters before he can intercept any. Just when he finally manages to kill one, Wignall casts a spell that wipes them all out in one go. He then tells him that he's more of a burden than he thought he'd be because he hasn't even fulfilled his role as a shield. Lihanna clarifies that he simply hasn't had time to act as a shield, but he will show his true strength against over 5 enemies, probably. Her uncertainty hurts Will more than she realizes, and Julius still thinks that he will only hold them back. After a while, Lihanna decides that it's time for them to take a break, so Will distributes the rations she gave him before. Wignall doesn't let him get any close though, and he clarifies that elves only allow those they deem worthy to touch them. Like dwarves, elves come from another world, but they're magic users, a gifted and highly revered race. They value their own kind over others and can be insufferable, but their talents surpass most mages. At the head of one of the Magiavander factions is none other than the Elven Queen, Eleanor Leos Alf. Leaving that aside, Lihanna informs them that their priority target is the Luminous Nabarus, a monster worth 110 credits. There's only one, so they will be slaying the floor keeper of floor 10. She clarifies that she built this party for the purpose purpose of slaying the Nabarus, because she wants to show the tower that they have the skills to fell a 110 credit monster. In order to achieve that, she wants them to challenge the Nabarus in top form with their magic reserves intact, so they'll take the shortest route to floor 10. The idea of fighting a floor keeper surely intimidates Will, but he only has earned 5 credits until now, so he knows that he has to do this. As they advance through the dungeon, the group finds monster corpses scattered all around for some reason. Will inspects the corpses and notices that there's no evidence of magic, so the monsters were ripped apart with brute strength alone. Lihanna informs them that the chamber where the Nabarus appears is up ahead. However, when they reach the chamber, they only find the Nabarus's corpse. Everyone is instantly alarmed, and Lihanna orders all members to cast search to see what's going on. The Nabarus's magic traces haven't fully dissipated, so it was only just killed, and they have no idea who did it. Search is an all-purpose spell, but it isn't all-powerful, because mages can use hide to cloak themselves from it, and there's a type of monster capable of evading search magic. Will knows this very well, so he remains alert to their surroundings to detect any noise. The moment he looks up, he warns everyone about the beast just above them, and with his sword, he blocks the attack that takes them by surprise. Wignall suddenly receives a blow, and before any of them can even cast a spell, the monster breaks through the floor, making them all fall in different areas of the dungeon. Will realizes that he's even further below floor 10 now, so they're outside Academy territory, and he's only with Wignall right now. Cyan and Julius fell to floor 11 on their own, and only high mages are allowed to set foot down in such a treacherous place. In addition to this, they were really injured from the fall alone, so the situation couldn't be any worse. Lihanna realizes that she's in the Nightmare's Maw, a vast region that stretches all the way to floor 15. The complexity of its structure and strength of its monsters are on another level from all the previous floors. Colette is with her, but they know that if they don't reunite with others, the dungeon will eat them alive. Meanwhile, on floor 8, Professor Eliza Nosferat informs Werkner that a stampede has destroyed their base camp and the other professors have been killed. She doesn't know what killed them, but it looks like something twisted their heads off, and all of their handheld masers have been wrecked. They don't know the situation on floor 9 and below, but she'd wager they've fallen into the same chaos. Werkner knows that all of this can't be a coincidence, so it must be some kind of scheme. Edward informs him that the all-student praxis is cancelled, because these anomalies are jeopardizing the students and they have to go in right away. Will and Wignall continue advancing through the dungeon, following Kiki's steps. Wignall can't understand how Will can stay so calm under the circumstances, so Will explains that, in order to ascend the tower, he has no choice but to take credits by force. He's researched all he can about the dungeon, and he's tried everything he can too. It's not something he's proud of, but he's been stranded on different floors over 100 times, so with that experience, he just knows how to deal with this a little better. Kiki warns them about some monsters ahead, so Will stands on guard, and Wignall takes care of the monster in the back. Will easily slices through the other monsters with his sword, and Wignall is completely blown away by his skills. Another monster suddenly approaches him, so Wignall decides to cast an illusory spell to hide himself, since he doesn't have time to attack. However, Will warns him that that won't work, and Wignall realizes that the monster simply ignored the illusion. He has no way to fight back, so he just screams as the monster is about to kill him. Fortunately, Will takes care of the monster and saves him just in time with only one slash from his sword. He then kindly approaches Wignall to make sure he's okay, and explains that these kind of monsters don't have eyes, so their sense of smell is extremely developed to compensate, and illusions won't work on them. Wignall can do nothing but just laugh and speak with self-deprecation, saying that he's the only one still at the academy after 6 years. The other elves, without exception, have all ascended the tower, so they told him that he's talentless and a disgrace to their kind. The reason is his illusion magic, because it's actually meant to give illusions physical form, but he produces immaterial phantasms, so they can't actually defeat an enemy. Even if he's one of the top 3, Lihanna was right to say that those who still remain at the academy are leftovers, so they're inferior. The first one to teach him despair over his inferiority was a milk sibling he was raised alongside in his homeland, the pride of their people, their exalted queen. Eleanor and him grew up together, and he held a deep affection for her, but she's a mighty high elf, one powerful enough to create Kingswood. She became a Magia Vander, and he, in order to reach her, continued to work his hardest on his own, but he's nothing more than a laggard. He desperately tried to hide his own inadequacies, but he's a disgrace of an elf. To his surprise, Will only smiles and tells him that he's always felt like they had something in common. He tries to reassure him, saying that he's an amazing elf, so he'll protect him until he can stand again. Having no other choice, Wignall continues advancing through the dungeon, but he's shocked to see Will defeating over 5 monsters in a flash over and over again like they're nothing. However, to make things even worse, the dungeon suddenly gives birth to a dangerous monster, a deathly Taurus Navaldi. Will immediately uses one of Rosty's magic items and runs with Wignall as fast as he can to evade the explosion. The other monsters around are Balkars, a special type specific to this floor, a variety of notorious monster, worth 11 credits. Physical attacks do nothing against their flaming bodies, and they're also strongly resistant to magic. The only thing effective against them is elven illusion magic, so Will asks Wignall to lend him his strength. Despite the critical situation, Wignall starts crying out of frustration and reminds him that his magic is defective, so he will get it wrong for sure. However, However, Will tells him that they're not geniuses, so if they don't make mistakes, they'll never move forward. He also reminds him that the two of them share a dream, so he won't die because he's going to the tower where Elfaria is waiting. Will doesn't waste any time and starts fighting the Balkars, but his sword isn't having any effect. Wignall tries to help him, but even though his illusion magic doesn't work, Will steps in the way with Kiki to defend him, saying that he has to keep trying. Will assures him that all that effort he's put in until now hasn't been for nothing, and he believes in him. Those words really have an impact on Wignall, because until now, no one ever has believed in him. Will's trust is the one thing he can never betray, so he decides to give it his all, because he'll never give up on Eleanor. For the very first time, Wignall's illusion magic takes a physical form, defeating all the Balkars at once. To Will's surprise, Wignall kneels before him to apologize for his prior rudeness, and tells him that he's now a warrior worthy of his respect. Later, thanks to a special map and Kiki's sense of smell, Will and Wignall advance through the dungeon, though it's been 16 hours since they fell to floor 11. They finally reunite with Cyan and Julius, but Colette and Lihanna don't have the same luck, and they find Professor Bruno instead, who's supposed to be dead. His head suddenly falls, letting them see Headless, an enemy who works with the other assassin, Marze. Headless crushes Bruno's head and informs the girls that they're just their average villains, and they want to destroy the false sky. Just after saying that, Headless throws an attack to slice their heads off, but Will suddenly steps in the way to save them, saying that they found them thanks to the crystals Colette was leaving behind. Headless mentions that it wants to add their heads to its collection, but Marze drags it away, saying that they have to go grab the goods, so there's no time for this. Feeling a little disappointed, Headless decides to let Duke take care of them, so it uses the Mage Queen's secret transportation magic to summon the monster that appeared on floor 10, an evil Grand Duke, worth 270 credits. The group immediately retreats to think about a strategy, but they're all utterly exhausted, battered, and in the worst sort of irrational situation. Despite this, Will tells them that their only recourse is to slay the Grand Duke, because when a lord of Baron rank or higher is present, the evil-type monsters establish a domain that can span across multiple floors. But if they take out the lord, they lose their leader, which should open up a way for them to escape. Wignall decides to trust him, and Lihanna realizes that she was mistaken from the beginning, because Will wasn't meant to be their shield, and he was meant to be their leader instead. Everyone puts their trust in him, and Will convinces Julius to help them, saying that he'll teach him a secret magical trick of Elfaria's. This trick allows Julius to cast advanced spells with long incantations thanks to the doubles he creates with Ars Vice. While he does that, the others simply act as decoys, keeping the Duke occupied until Julius begins his bombardment. Everyone follows Will's strategy, and even though the Duke blocks Julius's bombardment, the effects of the ice slows its wings, so Lihanna jumps into action. With her high-speed maneuvering, she's able to slip into close quarters striking range. However, the enemies from before apparently inscribed a spell in advance to create a barrier around the Duke. As soon as she makes contact with it, the barrier turns into offensive mode, so Will quickly moves Lihanna out of the way, and Kiki casts a magic barrier to protect them. Despite this, the attack is so strong that it even breaks through Kiki's barrier, and it completely destroys Will's goggles. Will enters a state of shock after this, and he only snaps out of it after Cyan beats him up. When he sees that Lihanna and Wignall are risking their lives to buy them some time, he immediately runs straight to the Duke to fight it, despite how terrified he is. Everyone joins the battle, fighting with all their strength, but no matter what they do, it isn't enough to defeat such a beast. Will soon realizes that a wand isn't enough to defeat it, and a sword can't slay it. Just then, Rosti remains hidden and throws a crystal at Will, hoping that he remembers, and saying that it's a wand and a sword. Will picks up the crystal, and the memories suddenly flood his mind, making him remember the words from a woman who said that one day, wand and sword will meet and join. He immediately grabs his sword and asks Cyan to use his magic on it. Cyan's fire fuses with Will's sword, leaving everyone in shock, and for a moment, Will's field of vision turns red, and strength wells up inside him. The torrent of power rushing through him prompted him, and before he knows it, he invokes its name, Ignis Weiss. With only one slash of his sword, Will completely cuts the Grand Duke in half. The sword goes back to normal right after that, and it's clear to everyone that Will defeated the Grand Duke himself. However, he doesn't have any strength left, and a horde of sentinels and guards suddenly attacks. Werkner and Edward see everything through Kiki's crystal, so they try to hurry to the place. It's impossible for them to make it in time, but to everyone's surprise, a powerful mage uses a high-level annihilation spell to defeat them all at once. The professors arrive right after that, and everyone immediately recognizes that powerful mage as Aaron Mysterious Oldking, the king of the Magia Vander and the most powerful of the wands. Aaron tells them that they have fought well, and the whole group is thrilled to have his praise, because even elves tremble with elation in his presence, and everyone worships him. While everyone is fixated on the Soul Sovereign, Will's eyes are drawn to a boy in his group. This boy actually approaches him and introduces himself as Finn, saying that he's surprised to see that the sword still lives. In another scene, we see that Marze and Headless managed to retrieve a special sword, so they actually have cleared their mission. And so, the all-students praxis came to a close in an unprecedented manner. There were 11 fatalities, all of them Academy professors, and thanks to the efforts of the surviving faculty, there were no student casualties. The school put out a call for any information on the instigators behind the incident, but it has yet to produce any leads. Even though they're still unable to wipe the bad taste from their mouths, the survivors begin their respite. Will is still thinking about the feeling he got when he met Finn, and the girls tell him that he must be part of the Finn tribe. Though their kind can't use magic, over many generations, the little people have gained extensive knowledge of the dungeon. They've had a contract with the tower since the age of the Mage Queen, so they aid them as guides, helping to cover new ground in the labyrinthine dungeon. It's said that without their help, they couldn't reach the deeper floors. Several days later, we see that Finn meets with Cauldron after an expedition where he reached floor 49. He gives her the weapon from the report, the Mage Slayer, the same sword Mars and Headless had retrieved. It is torn to pieces now though, and Finn explains that they ran into an unsavory group on floor 40 and immediately clashed. They killed around 20 of the expedition's high mages, so they took care of them, but he's willing to wager that Mage Slayer wasn't created by the dungeon naturally, which means they're most likely experimenting down there. They began collecting materials deep in the dungeon. Then, by combining different pieces, they created this weapon. Finn mentions that Aaron ordered him to go back into the dungeon to investigate, so he'll leave analyzing that weapon to her. Cauldron accepts the request, but Finn then changes the topic and asks her why she didn't tell him anything about Will, since swords are supposed to be his territory. Cauldron explains that Will actually yearns for a wand, and he intends to ascend the tower to become a Magiavander. This information surely takes Finn by surprise, because he's never heard of a sword aiming to become a wand. Finn decides to entrust Will to all of them for a little longer, but he warns her that he'll be sticking his nose in from now on. 2 months after the incident, some of the students still haven't come to terms with what happened, but the school year is once again coming to a close. Werkner informs them that for the 6th years, it's time for their actual final exams, so today commences the first day of their graduation exams. 2 months after the all-student praxis, Will and the others finally face the Nabarus. This time, now that everyone has recovered, they're able to defeat it in no time by working together, and Will gives the final strike to take it down, saying that he'll keep moving forward with everyone else. The day before the final day of graduation exams, the professors see that Will has a perfect score in every subject. They even checked his previous exams multiple times, and there's no mistake. They're still grading, but he hasn't made a single error. Even Lihanna has missed her chance at a perfect run, so the results are just shocking. The professors start thinking that Will just might do it, as surprising as it sounds, because the book learner could actually pass, fully clearing on writing and praxis, and he may make an unprecedented ascent to the tower. Edward hears all of this, and he clearly doesn't like it in the slightest, but he doesn't say a word for now. Werkner is grading another of Will's exams, and he's thrilled to see that he got another perfect score. Eliza approaches him to tell him that it seems the student he took under his wing is about to have his dream come true, which is truly wonderful. Werkner clarifies that he still has one more exam to go, and they never know what may happen before the end. Leaving that aside, Eliza asks him where this book learner everyone is talking about is, and Werkner lets her see that Will is, of course, studying right now. In the Rigarden Magical Academy study room, Will studies endlessly with Rosti and Colette's company. Rosti is currently working on fixing Will's goggles, and Colette is simply worrying about Will, as always. She knows that he didn't sleep much last night either, and Will admits that he's not fine, but he reminds her that the last written exam is tomorrow, so he can't possibly sleep now. Colette still insists, saying that since they postponed praxis, that's also been happening on top of their final exams. She also mentions that he only just defeated that Nabarus yesterday, and Will clarifies that he was able to get all his praxis credits thanks to Lihanna and the others, so he can't let everyone's kindness go to waste. Colette tells him that that's not what she's worried about though, and Rosti mentions that he's only received a handful of spellwork credits. Will affirms this, and explains that he only got the 5 from his lesson with Professor Edward. The remaining tests are worth 6 credits, and if he can get just one more, he'll be able to ascend to the tower, so he can't let his guard down now. Rosti suddenly plucks a gray hair from his head and tells him that he'll get more of these if he works too hard. Colette immediately protests and asks him what he's doing, but Rosti simply plays dumb and states the obvious, saying that he's plucking gray hairs, since he always does that for Will. Rosti notices how worked up she is over this, so he decides to tease her a little, asking her if she wanted to do it instead. Colette flushes bright red and instantly tries to deny it, but it's clear that she actually wants to do it. In the meantime, at the headmistress's office, Cauldron tells Cyan and Julius that it's very impressive they defeated a floorkeeper amidst their busy schedules, so they've done truly magnificent work. Julius clarifies that he merely got caught up in things, but even without defeating that Nabarus, he'd still be able to ascend to the tower, and yet Colette and the others dragged him into it. Cyan agrees with him and says that they would have been just fine without Julius, because that ice he's so proud of kept melting, and it wasn't much help at all. Julius gets really offended by that, so he reminds him that he hid in the shadow of that no talent, and all he did was pathetically play with fire. Cyan asks him not to insult the flames of the Ulster, and tells him that he's just a show-off of a Rheinberg. Cauldron isn't fazed at all by their bantering, and she is actually kind of amused, so she decides to tease them both by saying that it sounds that the two of them just can't stand to leave Will alone. In the meantime, Wignall and Lihanna walk through the breezeways of the academy. He mentions that with this, both them and Cyan's group have completed all their praxis credits. Lihanna agrees and explains that when they have the proven ability ability to defeat a floorkeeper, they can show off just a bit to the tower. Wignall admits that all of that felt a little anticlimactic after defeating a Grand Duke. That comment makes her chuckle, so Wignall tells her that she's changed because she's now a touch softer than she was before. Lyanna doesn't deny it, but she tells him that he looks as if his sharp edges have melted away. After all, in the past, he always wore an unruffled smile, yet the truth is that he was feeling the most pressure of all. Wignall agrees and says that he's sure he has Will to thank, because he learned it's all right to fail as many times as it takes, and that's what he taught him through that adventure. Lyanna tells him that she learned things too, because she discovered that her sense of inferiority and her cowardly heart can be transformed into that magic called courage. She wonders what Will is doing right now, and Wignall tells her that he's obviously studying, because this is the final push, and Will is a hard enough worker that even an elf recognizes his efforts. That night, despite how late it is, Colette knows that Will is still studying, so she decides to bring him a late-night snack. When she enters the study room, though, she notices that Will has fallen asleep on the desk. Colette leaves the snacks aside and quietly approaches him to cover him with his cloak. She then tries to talk to him, but when he doesn't respond, she truly confirms that he's deeply asleep. Without thinking, Colette slowly leans closer to him, but before she can try anything weird, Rosti lets her know that he's also there, and he asks her what she's doing. She immediately screams in panic, but even after that, Will is still peacefully sleeping. Colette quickly tells him that she was worried about Will, so she was just putting a cloak over him. Rosti simply smiles and tells her that it looked to him as if she was going to kiss him, so he apologizes for getting the wrong idea. Colette can sense his obvious sarcasm, so she tells him that it's true that she's worried about Will, because he's all worn out, but he still pushes himself so hard. He's constantly battered and bruised, and that actually makes her hate the Magia Vander. After all, because of the spell Albus Vina cast, Will is always chasing after her, yet she doesn't do a thing, and she's merely waiting in the tower. Rosti actually agrees with Colette this time, and he admits that he feels the same way. In a change of scene, we see Elfaria walking in the tower with an unusual, serious expression. Sarissa asks her if something's wrong, but she simply denies it. However, that's when Eleanor approaches her, calling her idleness incarnate, and saying that for a recluse like her to come out is unprecedented, so it might even rain spears of hail tomorrow. Elfaria calmly faces her and asks her if it was really that distressing to lose to her in the magic competition. Eleanor quickly clarifies that that's only because it was restricted to ice magic, but if she'd been allowed to use other magic, she would have crushed her for sure. Just then, their conversation gets interrupted when Zio shows up and asks them to get out of the way, because they're on his walking path. This time, both Elfaria and Eleanor come together to reject him, calling him barbarian and saying that he's the one who should leave. Zio just walks past them and asks them to look in the mirror, calling them brazen harridans. Elfaria asks both him and Eleanor what they're doing here, but Zio clarifies that it's the same story for them. He explains that he has to get ready for that annoying ritual of Terminalia because the barrier is about to disappear since it's the end of the year. The next day, it's finally time for the History of Magic final exam, and to everyone's surprise, Professor Edward is in charge of the last day. A lot of students feel discouraged just by this, because having that snake's tests for 3 periods is the worst, and it makes them feel like they might not make it to the tower. Edward finally enters the classroom to silence them, and he informs them that they will now begin their final exam. Before that, he warns everyone that he will only be putting to them a single question, and everyone who can answer said question will be rewarded all 6 credits. This obviously surprises all the students, and while Edward hands out the exam papers, he warns them that he will not be taking any questions, so they must show him what they have cultivated in their 6 years at the academy. The exam finally begins, and the single question for everyone is a simple-looking question: what is magic? With their own magical affinity as the foundation, they must explain using the following terms: tele, connection, manifestation. Lyanna soon realizes that this is about describing the activation of and prerequisites for magic. It's a process that they usually conduct unconsciously, and Edward is asking them to explain that sensation by putting it into words. Wignall knows that if they're a mage or an elf, they'll be able to produce an answer, but no one else could. Because of that, they all soon realize that this question alone was directed at Will, so he would fail the exam. There's nothing they can do about it, though, and Will already knows that he can't possibly answer this. His knowledge is pointless, despite how hard he studied, because this isn't in any textbook, and it cannot be taught. Their sense for it and their talent is everything, and since he can't use magic at all, he has no business answering this. Will knows that he can't solve this himself, so he wonders if this means it's over, and if he won't reach the tower. He starts spiraling when he remembers his promise to Elfaria, wondering what'll happen to that. Elfaria's memory fills him with determination, so Will decides to write down what magic is to him. To Will, magic is aspiration, a miracle he can't grasp no matter how far he stretches, and it's beautiful but cruel at the same time. Magic is what lies at the end of all their hard work, and if they refuse to ever give up, he believes there's a power power that can surpass even magic. Soon after the exams come to an end, Werkner confronts Edward about his exam, asking him what that question was. He's clearly not happy at all, but Edward tells him that he merely asked their tower hopefuls about the most important foundation for a mage. Roughly 40% of the students got it wrong, and he thinks that's exasperatingly deplorable. Werkner grabs him by the collar of his shirt and clarifies that that's not what he's asking him, because he knows for a fact that that question was directed at one specific student, and he doesn't understand how he can do something so wrong as a teacher. Edward suddenly pushes him away and tells him that he's the one in the wrong, because he can't let someone who can't use magic into the tower, knowing that he couldn't possibly do anything in the wand graveyard. Edward reminds him that this isn't a joke, and in their world of magic, a sword can't become a wand. He clarifies that nipping a dream that can never come true is the greatest kindness he can show him. Werkner feels frustrated, but he knows that he can't do anything at this point, because Will's name is already on the list of failed students. Will earned 7,199 credits total, so with only one missing credit, he got disqualified from the tower. That night, Will sits alone outside, and Rosti approaches him to inform him that he's finished repairing his goggles. He soon notices how defeated he looks, and Will tells him that Professor Edward is really mean, because there's no way someone like him could answer that question. Will can't help but get his frustrations out, so he starts crying as he apologizes to Elfaria because he couldn't keep his promise. Rosti is the only one there for him right now, and he knows that nothing he says will reach Will, but he decides to comfort him and lets him know that he's always here with him. Meanwhile, Colette, Lehanna, and Wignall are still looking for Will, but they can't find him anywhere. Wignall mentions that he isn't in his dorm, so he's likely left the academy grounds. Julius suddenly approaches them, saying that a student who can't ascend the tower and disappears from campus heartbroken is a common occurrence this time of year. He clarifies that being forced to look for a no-talent is a major nuisance, since he's just a disgrace of a man who's up and run off. Wignall raises his wand at him without a doubt, and immediately asks him to take that back, saying that he can't insult the friend of an elf. Julius isn't intimidated at all, and he mentions that he's been corrupted by Will, apparently. He suddenly swats Wignall's wand away, and reminds him that in this academy and in this world, magic is everything, so no matter how capable he may be in the dungeon, a sword doesn't belong here. Cyan admits that Will really infuriates him, and he'd planned to defeat him himself, but the opportunity for that has passed, and he just can't stand it. Werkner approaches the group to see what's going on, and Colette lets him know that they were searching for Will, but they can't find him anywhere. Knowing this, Werkner tells them that he'll look for Will, so they should just go, because it's the last night of the year, Terminalia, and they should go and enjoy themselves. Soon enough, Urbis Regarden starts celebrating the annual greatest of festivals and greatest of rituals. This year, the announcer is Clary Sarah, who introduces herself as a Tower High Mage, saying that she's 26 years old and single. She also mentions that she's working today even though it's the end of the year, so she feels like she wants to cry when she sees all the families having fun in the festival. After all, even if she invites her peers out, they always end up telling her their students are more important. Clary just lightly laughs about it, but she suddenly yells and clarifies that she's talking to both Werkner and Edward. She complains in the middle of the transmission and reminds them that they were always together when they were students. When she finally stops complaining, Clary apologizes for losing her composure and mentions that before any more of her silliness is broadcast to the whole world, she'll bring them the magnificent sight laid out before her. She explains that tonight is Terminalia, so they're undertaking the reconstruction of the Great Barrier protecting the sky. Long ago, people didn't know of the sky, and this world was locked in darkness. The celestial host destroyed the wide, vast earth, and a great number of lives became a funeral procession. Just when all seemed lost, right at that moment, under their founder Mercedes, 5 great mages sealed off the sky and forced the host to retreat. Clary reminds everyone that that was 500 years ago today, and the Magia Vander's Great Barrier was cast to serve as their sky to this very day, so it has continued to protect them. Iris observes the whole celebration from afar, knowing that the barrier is effective for 1 year's time. Every year, at its close, a new Great Barrier is erected to shroud them, and the dissolving of it would mean their legends becoming reality. That's why everyone is on guard, making sure there's nothing unusual on the ground and no abnormalities in the air either. There are no suspicious shadows or reactions to magic seen, so every situation is all clear and all preparations are complete. A minute before midnight, the Magia Vander begin the barrier celebration, so Clary asks everyone to welcome them with a song of glory. All the people at the festival instantly cheer for them, and Clary says that she's sure some of them must be sunk in despondency, and there must be some trapped in despair. However, she wants them to lift their heads, because they must never forget that even now, the celestial host still targets their world, and this paradise is under a threat even now. That's why, no matter how down they may feel, they must uplift the sky and drive back the wickedness. Everyone in the festival raises their wands to help to support the sky once again, and when the clock strikes 12 a.m., all the Magia Vander use their magic to cast a new great barrier. Cariat uses the flame crown, Elfaria uses the water orb, Zio uses the lightning throne, Eleanor uses the wind scepter, and Aaron offers the earth altar. With their power combined, they cast a supreme spell, the 5 Wands Great Barrier Partitioning Paradise, Vendes Terminalia. Once the spell is completed, people celebrate the new year, welcoming a new world. Just when they thought everything turned out all right, people see weird words written in the air wishing them a happy new year, signed with Headless' typical creepy smiley face. The environment suddenly shifts, but people are completely clueless and confused, so they assume that it's some kind of festival performance. Several magic circles appear in the sky, and dangerous monsters soon begin to descend, bringing chaos and destruction everywhere they go. Somewhere where no one can see them, Marzi tells Headless that by activating the Great Barrier, the Magia Vander used up all their magic, so they're out of commission for a while. With that, while chaos reigns, Headless decides that it's time to let the party from hell begin. Will sees the magic circles in the sky and notices that they're magic circles for gates like they saw on floor 11. The monsters that come out of the gates soon destroy everything near them, and innocent people in the festival fall victim under that destruction. Some mages from the Fire faction warn them that these monsters are Dinoboroses, monsters from deep in the dungeon. Clary immediately flies to the place to communicate with Raj Holland from the Fire faction. She lets him know that she'll cast some barriers, so they must incant on the double. Raj tells her that they're counting on her, and then orders his faction to prepare to counterattack. Without wasting any time, Clary summons Caridos Gardinus, sending several guardians into the sky to try and counter the Dinoboroses. The Fire faction begin incantations, and Raj orders them to leave the front line to Clary's guardians. All of them cast a powerful spell called Fried Rachel, combining their magic to create a giant fire blast. Meanwhile, Lihana, Cyan, and Wignall observe everything from afar as they keep some kids safe. Wignall is clearly shocked by Clary's power, since he doesn't even understand how there can be so many guardians. Cyan is also surprised by the Fire faction's might, because they have crushed this surprise attack in an instant. Lihana tells them that this is just the real power of the high mages of the tower, so it was to be expected. After that attack, Raj orders his faction to investigate the origin of the magic circles, because someone was behind setting these monsters loose, and they must capture them without fail. Just when they thought it was over, the smoke disperses, letting them see that the Dinoboroses are alive and completely unharmed. Raj can't believe that they survived that simultaneous attack, but he wastes no time and casts an even more powerful fire blast. He really thinks that will be enough to reduce it to cinders, but the monster comes out of the flames, entirely intact. Raj then casts a spell called Eltorius Gardelshing, but the fire doesn't let him see what's going on. On the other hand, Clary, who is watching everything from the sky, tries to warn him and asks him to run immediately. Before he can react, the monster suddenly jumps at him and cuts his body in half with its sword. Everyone stands in shock for a moment, and Clary soon realizes that magic doesn't work on this thing because it's nullifying it. To make things worse, not even her guardians stand a change against the Dinoboroses' brutal strength. Before she knows it, one of the Dinoboroses suddenly appears right in front of her to attack, but Clary dodges it in time, and that's when she notices the sword it has, a Mage Slayer. Meanwhile, at the Rigarden Magical Academy, some mages inform Cauldron about the situation. They tell her that they can't stop the monster invasion, and tower guards are headed into the city, but they're already half wiped out, and there are also civilian casualties. While they panic, Cauldron calmly assesses the situation, now realizing that the Mage Slayer Finn and the others brought back is probably a weapon that has been mass-produced and deployed directly into battle. Given that the enemy is using gates, this could be the same culprit who appeared during the all-student praxis. Still, this could not have been carried out by a lone perpetrator because it's far too systematic to time the attack right at the conclusion of Terminalia. One of the mages interrupts her thoughts and tells her that the academy should send forces into town, but Cauldron immediately refuses. She soon realizes that, just as she thought, the horde in the capital is a diversion, so she wastes no time and orders them to defend the tower at once. In the meantime, the Magia Vander in the tower soon find out that they are the enemy's true objective. After casting the Great Barrier, Elfaria's magic is largely depleted, the same as the rest of them. Eleanor mentions that Terminalia is the only day of the year when all of the Magia Vander are weakened, and she doesn't know where these monsters have come from, but that must be why they're here. Logwell, an aide-de-camp from the Fire faction, tells Cariot that it would be prudent to serve as reinforcements, because as things stand, innocent civilians will be sacrificed. Aaron cuts him off and asks him to be silent, asking him if he wants his windpipe gouged out like his eyes were. He harshly tells Logwell that he's a disgrace to them, so he must do nothing he is not asked to do. Zio asks him if they're supposed to watch from afar and pass judgment in that case. To everyone's surprise, Aaron clarifies that they'll do just that, and he forbids the Magia Vander from leaving the tower. After all, if a wand falls and the Great Barrier is lost, the celestial host will invade, and then it won't just be Rigarden, but all the world rendered ash and dust. That is the one thing that must not come to pass, so they are not leaving the tower. Meanwhile, Marzi complains and tells Headless that the Magia Vander aren't coming out, even after all the bait they set out for them. He wishes they would just saunter on out here, so they could finally take them down. Headless tells him that they must enjoy what they have for now, because it's a magnificent spectacle. As the chaos progresses, Iris is horrified when she sees the people of the capital, who have the talent capable of confronting the sky, being torn into pieces. Just as she's thinking that they can't let something like this happen, the cry of a little girl catches her attention. She sees a little girl trying to help her mother out of some heavy debris, while a monster quickly approaches them. Without thinking, Iris casts a spell and attacks the monster, but to her surprise, her magic is redirected to its Mage Slayer sword. Iris panics, not wanting to see innocent people getting killed by her own magic in front of her eyes. She can't possibly reach the monster in time, but just as the Dinoborosis is about to attack, its entire arm is suddenly cut off by Will's sword. Will is still wondering why this world is so unkind and so cruel to swords. He's had those thoughts before, and he'd be lying if he said he didn't resent it, and yet he has never wished for anything like this to happen. That's why he decides to use his strength to protect the innocent, and he forces himself to wield his sword without fear. After all, the more scared he is, the more people will die. Will repeats that in his head as he runs to fight the Dinoborosis with determination. Rosti chases after him and asks him to go for the ones with weapons since they have Mage Slayer swords. One of the Dinoborosis suddenly approaches him, but Rosti reacts in time, casting Crystal Wreath to easily take it down. He then informs Will that the mages can handle the ones that aren't carrying swords, so he must focus on the others. Will follows his instructions and runs directly towards a Dinoborosis that's wielding a Mage Slayer sword. They immediately clash swords, and despite the Dinoborosis' monstrous strength, Will manages to slice the Mage Slayer and the entire monster in half with a single strike. Iris stares at him in shock, realizing that if he's here, then he can defeat the Mage Slayers, but he can't possibly take them all by himself. Aaron suddenly communicates with her and informs her that he hereby grants her his authority, so she must call the dwarves to action and put a stop to this savagery. Without wasting any time, Iris follows his orders, and she informs everyone that on behalf of the great Mysterious Noah, she, a Watcher, will command them. She gives the order called Gordvir, announcing that the ban on combat by dwarves is hereby lifted, so the mages must coordinate with dwarves and eliminate all monsters. The official order is heard all over the city, so Werkner immediately runs to find the dwarves and asks them to lend them their strength. Donan just complains about mages because they're putting them to work right after the start of the new year. Gina asks him to stop complaining and go, and she tells everyone in her tavern that they're going to go save Will and the others. While the dwarves are on their way, Edward casts Dax Darbicans against the Dinoboroses that are not wielding a sword, easily taking them down. He then asks the other mages to leave the armed monsters to the dwarves and to target all other attackers. Edward warns the students that they're putting them to work as well, since they're short-handed, so he doesn't care if they're a burden to the rest of them. They must become a wand that protects the people. The students are still hesitant, of course, because these monsters can take down high mages, so they don't even know what they're supposed to do. While they stand there in fear, Lihana is surrounded by 3 Dinoboroses, but she attacks without hesitation, using a powerful enchantment. The students observing her are shocked by her strength, but Lihana sees how powerful these monsters truly are, because even using enchantments, she couldn't take it down in one blow. Despite this, she continues attacking, and after analyzing one of the monsters that's wielding a Mage Slayer, she understands that any magic that comes within a certain distance of that weapon gets dispelled. She doesn't know if it's nullifying her magic or absorbing her magical energy, but either way, she knows that it's lethal for mages. With this in mind, Lihana opts for a different strategy and asks Colette for help, explaining the situation. Wignall also tries to help, but even his illusion magic gets negated when it comes near that sword. Julius says that they can't hold out here until the dwarves arrive, so once Lihana and the rest of their vanguard is exhausted, they'll be done for as well, so running is their only option. Sion disagrees and tells him that when the enemy disperses their magic, it slows them down for just a moment. In which case, they must fire off magic at random to pin them down. Wignall and Julius follow Sion and decide to do as he said, firing off magic without a rest against the Dinoboroses. They increase the intensity even more when they see that it's working, because if they keep this up, then the other monsters are forced to act as shields. With that, Colette proceeds with Lihana's plan, though she feels completely guilty about it, because she has to take down the monument of a former Magia Vander, Viola. Colette cries and apologizes as she uses her magic to achieve this, toppling the monument so it falls on the Dinoboroses. Julius admits that doing something like that to the monument of a former Magia Vander is sure to bring divine retribution. Wignall soon understands Lihana's plan, realizing that these monsters can't nullify physical objects that carry no magic. Now that they know that the plan worked, Lihana asks everyone to throw stones or anything else they can, and she asks the Earth Mages to begin a barrage. She encourages all the students that were doubtful just like that, asking them to turn the unknown back into the known. Clary observes everything from above, and she admits that those little Academy fledglings do good work. This year's Tower hopefuls are incredibly talented, so she gives them a full 100 points. Without wasting more time, Clary orders them to organize around the Earth Mages and form a resistance, because the dwarves will be here soon. Headless is clearly entertained by the whole situation and mentions that they're already back on their feet, apparently. Marze admits that their expedition running across the people working on the Sleem really hurt them. Mastery is Noah, and that one member of the Little People made off with a Mage Slayer to top it all off. Headless tells him that their dwarven support aside, one portion of the mages adapted very quickly, so word about their secret weapon must have gotten around. Mars mentions that if the Upper Institute had managed to analyze the Mage Slayer and devise some countermeasure, he couldn't bear to watch. They were forced to jump on the plan without being able to produce them at scale after all. If they hadn't seen their hand, it would have been the perfect surprise attack. Headless tells him that there do seem to be a few other factors at play, so even though though it's a little early, they truly have no choice but to send their special treat now. After Will takes down another Dinoboros, a gate suddenly opens right in front of him. He doesn't know what's going on, but before he can react, a dangerous Devander emerges from the gate and spots him right away. A single step from that monster breaks through the concrete as it jumps at Will and punches him right in his stomach, sending him flying and making his body break through several buildings. The Devander doesn't give him any time to recover and follows right after him, though Will's body is already all hurt and battered. Meanwhile, Finn finds the people responsible for the production of the Mage Slayer deep in the dungeon, and after taking down the others, he decides to interrogate the last one. However, the man simply laughs and tells him that it's already too late, because their role was to draw him into the depths of the dungeon. Finn ends him before he can finish his sentence, and realizes that something is happening on the surface. After a bit, Will finally manages to stand, only to see the Devander jumping at him from the sky. Will is sent flying once again, but he manages to stand his ground this time, still holding on to his sword. He doesn't understand how this monster is so strong, and even comes to think that it's stronger than a Grand Duke. Clary sees the monster from the sky and recognizes it as a Devander, a notorious monster from Floor 40. This creature has even killed previous generations of Magia Vander, so it's the most dangerous threat in this situation. Marzi tells Headless that beast killed 50 of their guys just shoving it through a gate. It was quite a task to take it alive, and now it is going to go on a rampage for them. Will tries his best to stand his ground, but even if he dodges a direct hit, he gets blown aside like a scrap of paper. This isn't an opponent he can cross swords with head on, so right now all he can do is run. Despite this, when he sees two students about to be killed, Will doesn't hesitate and steps in the way to save them. The students are able to escape thanks to him, but the Devander then attacks Will with no mercy. Before it can land a lethal blow, Donan attacks the Devander and manages to push it aside to save Will. The rest of the dwarves soon step in to help, because Iris gave the order to focus all fighting power in the south part of the city around Will. Before they can do anything, the Devander suddenly starts pushing out its core and absorbs the traces from the other monsters. Edward soon realizes that they've been caught in a trap, but it's already too late. Headless explains that the Devander has an unusual ability, and it can collect traces from other monsters, consuming its own kin to get stronger. The dwarves try to stop it from gathering anymore, but a powerful attack from Marze stops them, and he asks them to just sit and watch as this monster is born. Soon, the Devander's body morphs after absorbing all the traces from the monsters in the city, and it suddenly unleashes spikes in all directions, piercing through the dwarves' bodies. Will soon realizes that a whole horde of monsters served as sacrifices for this, and they use the attack on Rigardan to strengthen their secret weapon. Headless confirms it, saying that the party is a ceremony and the city is an altar. With the stage set, the killing of the Magia Vander is at hand. Will knows that the mages and dwarves don't stand a chance because that monster is way too strong. If he's going to stop it, then the power he used to defeat the Duke is the only way. Rosti doesn't even need him to ask, and he already knows what he has to do. But when he raises his wand to lend Will his magic, the Devander suddenly shows up and cuts his arm off. After witnessing this, Will instantly rages and attacks the Devander without thinking, taking it all out on the monster. The Devander kicks him and sends him flying away, and while they fight, Rosti asks Kiki to search for Colette and promises that he will protect Will. What he has to do is perfectly clear now, so he won't back down on this. Will continues fighting the Devander, but no matter how angry he is, he just can't best it. And no matter how level-headed he is, no plan works against it. Not even his wits or knowledge, and not the skills he's drilled into his body, nor his pitiful feelings. In the face of this outrageous situation, nothing he has is of any help at all, which tells him that, after all, he really is just useless. The Devander stands in front of him and attacks him once again without mercy, but just before receiving that lethal blow, Will is pushed away and saved by Rosti, who reminds him that he'll always be by his side. Will stares at him in shock as he sees Rosti's body getting torn apart by the Devander's Mage Slayer. When he tries to reach for him, Rosti's hand simply vanishes in the air, leaving Will with nothing but the memories of all they've lived until now. When nothing of him is left, Will screams and falls off the building, but Werkner catches him in time with the help of his familiar. However, even as they get away, Will is still hysterically screaming for Rosti, wondering why it had to be this way. Meanwhile, the Magia Vander do nothing but to observe everything from the tower, and while Elfaria is reaching the limits of her patience, Zeo is the one to lose it first. As he walks away, Cariot quickly asks him where he's going, and Zeo tells him that it's obvious that he's going to the battlefield. He thinks crying and wailing and dying pathetically by the wayside is deplorable, which makes every last one of the people out there useless. However, the most useless of all is themselves, for sitting here and watching them die. Despite Zeo's rage, Cariot remains calm and reminds him about Aaron's orders, saying that he already explained his reasons. If the Magia Vander fall, the Great Barrier will vanish, and in that event, there is but one outcome. The Celestial Host will utterly destroy this world, reducing it to ash. Cariot lets him know that at the moment, even they are at a disadvantage against those things, so they should at least wait until their magical energy has recovered, and he should be more conscious conscious of his position as Magia Vander. Zio tells him that he can keep his feeble wand title if he wants, but as he tries to leave the place, Cariat shoots a fire arrow right in front of him as a warning and asks him to get back. He warns him that if he doesn't, it will become necessary to pin him in place by force. Zio smiles through his rage and threateningly asks him to go ahead and try if he dares. An elf faction aide-de-camp, Lafia Veritas, uses her cape to keep Eleanor from watching them, saying that this may turn into a disgraceful spectacle. Eleanor just says that this is preposterous, but she will remain a spectator because this is the mage's land. Filvis Chalia, another elf faction aide-de-camp, reminds her that there is one of their kindred at the academy, so she'd like to know what her orders will be. When Eleanor sees Wignall fighting out there, she can't hide the anger from her face, and she simply asks her to go. Just like that, Filvis immediately vanishes from the place, following her orders without a doubt. Sarissa remains silent as she witnesses the whole thing, knowing that the battle above ground is already desperate, and the Magia Vander just aren't in step with each other. So nothing good will happen if things continue this way. Just as she thought things couldn't get worse, Elfaria's patience finally reaches its limit, making her stand up and walk directly towards Aaron. Without a hint of hesitation, she demands that he rescind his order at once because they're wasting time right now. Aaron calmly tells her that she will not change his mind, so she must stand down. Despite his warning, Elfaria doesn't budge, standing her ground with fierce determination. Her gaze remains fixed on him with defiance, and the whole place suddenly grows colder. Before they know it, everything is covered in ice, and Elfaria warns him that she's going to save those who are dear to her, including Will, so if he gets in her way, then she will knock him down as well. Sarissa panics at that threatening and bold declaration, but Elfaria keeps her gaze fixed on Aaron, making it clear that she's serious about this, and she won't back down. Meanwhile, Werkner flies away with Will, knowing that the Devander's arrival has spelled the collapse of their front line, and the surviving Denoboroses are starting to drive back their mages. Even the dwarves can't keep this situation in check, so Will is their last and only hope. However, Will's spirit is completely broken after losing Rosti, and he's still devastated because he has confirmed once again that he can't protect nor save anything. He feels like it's just like it was back then, and this is no different than when they took Elfaria away. Will starts wondering if this is all because he can't use magic, and he blames himself for it. After all, because he can't use magic, he can't protect Elfaria or Rosti or anyone else. He starts shouting it, exclaiming that everything is because of that, because he's just a laggard that can't use magic. Werkner hears him crashing out and tries to make him calm down, but Will looks at him with a devastated expression and asks him why he's the only one who can't use magic. Will starts sobbing, and despite how painful it is to see him that way, Werkner asks him to pull himself together. Just then, he stops abruptly when they run into Marza, who's floating in the air and saying that Will reeks, and his stench is telling him that he's even more of a pain than the dwarves, so he's decided to kill them both at once. Without waiting for an answer, Marzi launches a massive attack at them, so Werkner has no choice but to try to avoid it to save their lives. Meanwhile, Wignall, Colette, Julius, Lihanna, and Cyan are still fighting against the remaining Denoboroses, using the same strategy from before. However, Colette suddenly stops moving in the middle of the battlefield when she sees an explosion in the distance. Lihanna quickly approaches her to ask her what she's doing, since she can't just stop like that when there are enemies nearby. Despite this warning, Colette is still focused on that distant explosion, having a bad feeling about it. Just then, Kiki somehow manages to find her, though she's all beaten and battered. Seeing Kiki calling for her is more than enough of a confirmation to know that that explosion has something to do with Will. Without wasting any time, Colette grabs Kiki and runs, asking her to take her to Will. Cyan sees her running and immediately goes after her, asking the others to figure out what to do about all this. While all of this happens, Headless just observes everything and mentions that Marzi seems to be quite excited. Headless admits that it would love to go hunt some heads, but unfortunately, today, its job is to be the conductor. Just like that, Headless sends the Devander directly to the tower, and Clary knows that they can't let it get near Central Floss, the heart of the city. After all, that monster is capable of killing the Magia Vander. Without a doubt, she casts multiple spells against it, but the Devander immediately traps her in an explosion. Edward witnesses this, but he knows that there is no time to lose, so he asks the dwarves to sacrifice their lives to launch a fatal attack. He asks them to make for the city center right away, to destroy that mage slayer the Devander is using by any means necessary. Gina immediately protests, and reminds him that her people are already battered and ragged from serving as shields for his kind. She tells him that Donnan and the others have fallen, and now he's telling them to just go die. Much to her shock, Edward shouts back at her and clarifies that he is indeed asking them to go die, for the sake of the capital and to protect the children. Wignall, Lihanna, and Julius arrive just at that moment, hearing as Edward harshly asks the dwarves to give their lives and die. Just then, a Denoboroses jumps at Gina from a building, but right before she's crushed by its attack, Edward immediately pushes her out of the way and receives the attack for her. Without wasting any time, he stands back up and defeats the Denoboroses with a destructive spell. Gina is still shocked by what just happened, and she can't understand why he did something like that after asking them to go die. Edward explains that they're up against an enemy impervious to magic, so right now his life is worth far less than any of theirs. He clarifies that he will pay the same price, face, so he asks them to lay down their lives as well. With this, Gina stands up with determination and asks all dwarves to gather their brothers because they'll make for the city center. In the meantime, Colette continues running to find Will, but Cyan chases after her, saying that she can't just run off alone. Colette stubbornly keeps running for Will's sake, but that's when the Devander suddenly shows up right in front of them. She attacks without thinking, and the Devander takes no damage from the first attack, but when she tries to cast a second spell, her magic fails her at the worst moment. The Devander doesn't give her any time to react and lunges at her, so Cyan tries to use his magic to save her. Meanwhile, Mike Myers, a student from 6th year, uses his magic to announce that the western front line has fallen, and the High Mages units in the northeast have been wiped out. The Dinoboroses can't be stopped, so all civilians must be sent south while Organo's team, the Lightning faction, holds the enemy at bay. The members of the Fire faction continue attacking, asking all units and mages to keep fighting and to resist to the bitter end. Despite that order, Rose is already beaten and battered, walking through the battlefield and thinking that resisting to the bitter end is going to be impossible. Even though she's beyond exhausted, she faces several Dinoboroses at once and wonders where Colette ended up, because she would have liked to see her one last time, though it looks like things might be too far gone for that. While people run away towards the south, Lyral stubbornly stays behind and tries to attack one of the Dinoboroses. Gordon tries to make him hurry because they must get out of there, but Lyral refuses, reminding him that Will is the one who saved them, so they can't be the ones who just get away. Gordon asks him to quit it with the heroics when his knees are knocking, but before Lyral can respond, a Dinoboroses suddenly breaks through a wall to attack them. They don't have any time to react, but that's when Professor Eliza intervenes, completely tearing the monster apart with a single destructive spell. As soon as she does that, she asks them to transport the wounded, and clarifies that they won't pathetically flee, because this is aid only they can provide. Both Gordon and Lyral follow her orders at once, running as fast as they can to find any survivors. In no time, they run into a 6th year student, Emma Cleaver, but she refuses to move from her spot, holding the hand of a fallen student with tears in her eyes. She explains that this girl said that she has a much younger brother back home, and she was finally going to see him. However, now that's simply not possible, so she thinks that this is way too cruel. Gordon and Lyral can't blame her for feeling that way, but while they're just standing there, one of the Dinoboroses finds them, taking them off guard. Meanwhile, Cauldron listens to all the chaotic reports from different positions. She finds out that Edward is injured, and they've lost touch with both Werkner and Clary. The fires in the developments keep spreading, so they can't guide the residents to evacuate. Cauldron knows that the situation couldn't be worse, and it's taking all they have just to defend the civilians. They can't turn the enemy back, and the Devander is still alive and well, while the horde of Dinoboroses is headed for the city center. Thanks to the dwarves, they've been able to whittle away at the Mage Slayers, but they can't stop the Devander. Iris knows that that's the heart of the dilemma on every front, and they simply can't scrape together enough of a fighting force. With only a few of the dwarves left, the best they can hope for is to die honorably, and at this rate, the tower will fall. As she thinks about what to do, she hears an explosion through one of the communication devices, so she asks for a situation report at once. Before they can say anything, the answer walks towards her himself, and Finn simply asks her how the sword is. Iris instantly recognizes him, and Finn repeats his question as he grabs Will's fallen sword, wanting to know where he is. Meanwhile, Marze admits that Werkner is pretty good, because he can't imagine being in that situation and still try to return a killing blow. Even so, he knows that he hit pretty deep, so this is the end for him without a doubt. Will tries to recover from that attack after crashing against the ground, not even knowing where he is, but Werkner soon informs him that they're on the west side of the city. Will is still a little disoriented, but when the fog disperses, he sees the giant hole in Werkner's abdomen, as he tells him that this is all he could do to protect him. Despite his state, Werkner keeps a smile on his face and apologizes, saying that the only thing he can do now is depend on him, because he's sure that he can save this city. Will is instantly in denial, saying that he can't do it because he let Rosti die, and now the same is happening with him. Someone is always saving him, but he can't protect the people who matter to him, and he can't change a thing because a sword can't overturn the order of the world. Even when Will starts crying, Werkner keeps a smile on his face and falls to his knees to hug him, confessing that he's been lying to him as a teacher. Just then, he reveals that he can actually use magic, and one single magic spell will show everyone that there's hope. As soon as he finishes that sentence, Werkner's body goes limp, so Will panics and asks him not to die, wanting to know what his magic is. Despite all his insistence, he gets no response from him, but that's when Finn finally finds him and tells him that Werkner is alright, because once his pulse kicks in, he'll breathe again. Will soon realizes that Werkner's body is slowly healing, and Finn clarifies that what's more important right now is him, so he must hurry up and get on his feet. After all, the stage has already been set for him. Will doesn't understand a thing, so Finn explains that Werkner wasn't talking about literal magic, but where his willpower comes from. He could even call it his emotions, or a type of self-suggestion when he raises his voice and shouts, stirring himself to action. It's a tremendous roar that turns the unreal into reality. Will isn't very convinced by this, because he thinks that that's just a childish trick, and something like that won't help him save everyone. To his surprise, Finn easily loses his patience and yells at him, trying to make him snap out of it as he asks him to stop spouting such foolishness, saying that it's the most important thing of all. He clarifies that those who can't transform themselves will never change the world, and that's exactly what he's aiming to accomplish. Finn points his sword at him and asks him to remember his roots and take back his origins. He then buries the sword on the ground and tells him that the lock has already been opened, so he must take his sword now and set out on a journey over the Hill of Darkness to pass beyond the false sky. Finn closes his fist over the sword, letting a drop of his blood fall on it as he tells Will that he already knows the answer. The sword suddenly starts glowing, and Finn asks him what the name of the magic that lives in his heart is. Will then remembers everything he's gone through until now, and Finn asks him to cry out the name of his spell and bring it into being. As he thinks about the people who matter the most to him, Will feels a rush through his body that tells him the answer he's been looking for. With no hesitation, he grabs his sword and pulls it out of the ground, exclaiming that the name of his spell is Courage. As soon as he says that word, his hair suddenly turns white and the limiter is off, so Finn asks him to unsheath his spell. In a fraction of a second, Will runs through the whole city as fast as lightning, completely annihilating all the Dinoboroses he finds in the way. Edward, Julius, Wignall, and Lyanna manage to see him for a split second when he rushes past them, and they almost can't believe what they just saw. Will is so fast that the people he leaves behind don't even know what's happening, but the only thing they know is that something is wiping out the monsters in less than a second. Iris observes everything with her magic devices and realizes that this light vanquishing the monsters one after another will soon circle the entire city. Elfaria just smiles from the tower, already knowing what's going on. Meanwhile, Sion continues fighting the Devander to protect Colette, even though she asks him to run away. He tells her that he can't run because Will would never run away, since he's a coward who's braver than anyone. That's why he wants to do this too, because he won't let him beat him, not even now. As he faces the Devander, Will suddenly arrives in a flash, thinking that Sion got it all wrong because he was actually jealous and bitter of him. He was desperate, and he's been chasing all of them all this time because he's just a pathetic wretch. That's why from now on, he will be like a lone sword. As soon as he makes that decision, Will clashes swords with the Devander, activating the Mage Blade Whiz, which is powerful enough to push it back. In a change of scene, we go back in time to see a witch named Mercedes talking to Finn many years ago. Finn sees the baby in her arms and asks her if the tower really has perfected the hope of this world. He mentions that the doomsday clock must be mistaken, and Mercedes clarifies that this baby is like a twig that might snap at any moment. She reminds him that the celestial stairway has been sealed, so that will provide them some respite. A short spell before the celestial host lays waste to this world, and in that time, she will see to many wands. Mercedes gives Finn the baby and tells him that he must see to a lone sword. He asks her if she's truly certain about this, but Mercedes is tired of his stubbornness because he's asked the same question many times. Despite her determination, the baby extends his hand towards her and holds onto her finger, not wanting to let go. Mercedes hesitates before fully pulling away from the baby and clarifies that all of this is part of the deal he brought her, so this is their pact. He will, without fail, produce someone who can use the fifth element, and this time, he must find the key that will tune this world. As Mercedes leaves without another world, Finn promises to do his part, saying that in order to protect this world, he will find his way to the wand and sword. Now, back to present time. He sees Will after he awakened his power, enveloped in a silvery light as he slashes through the monsters in the capital in a flash. Finn knows that there have been a lot of twists and turns, but he's made it this far, and he can just wonder if what began just now will be the musical they hoped for or a merciless tragedy. He thinks for a moment that it will perhaps be an exceptional comedy, but he hopes to see where the pact he made with the esteemed witch will lead them. Now Will is targeting the Devander, a mage slayer wielding monster alone, and right after the first attack, both Colette and Sion are shocked to see that it's really him. Despite their disbelief, Will wastes no time and lunges at the Devander again, providing a strike that sends it flying across the capital until it reaches the central floss. Some mages tell the headmistress that they have to evacuate right now, but Cauldron doesn't move from her place and instead casts a spell called Caridos Aquilum. This spell creates a powerful barrier that withstands the Devander and prevents it from crashing against the building. Cauldron knows that they have managed to forestall an incursion into the academy, but she has no idea what's going on right now, and she's as surprised as the other students witnessing everything. The mages warn her that they must leave this place as soon as possible, but Cauldron stubbornly insists on staying a little longer and asks them to wait. In the midst of all the chaos, she manages to see Will calmly walking towards the Devander. Despite the powerful blow it received, the monster soon stands back up, and Will decides to find out who's going to win. Without waiting another moment, he starts running straight towards the Devander, and the monster also runs straight towards him. As soon as they meet, the impact creates a powerful explosion, sending a shockwave through the entire capital. The students who are too far to see the battle can only wonder what all that noise could be, since it's coming from the heart of the city. Donnan and the dwarves also have no idea what's going on, but Julius considers for a moment that perhaps Will is fighting. Lyanna and the others think just the same, and it makes them realize that Will is actually up ahead of them. Without thinking, Wignall runs directly to the heart of the city, where everything is happening. Lyanna follows right after him, and the two of them leave Julius behind, who runs after them as he complains, saying that he's got no magical energy left. The other mages from the fire faction are still wondering what that that sound was, and Edward just hopes that it isn't Will. The students around can't help but wonder if Will could truly make a stand against that beast, and the thought makes them run to the heart of the city as well. While disbelief reigns in the capital, the Magia Vander and the tower are also having a hard time believing what they're witnessing, but Elfaria is completely captivated when she sees Will fight. Clary falls from her broom and lands on the roof of some building nearby, and when she sees what's going on, she recognizes Will and realizes that he's fighting on even footing against a foe that bested him before. She sees Edward nearby and falls off the roof when she tries to call for him, but he's just surprised to see that she's alive and tells her that her only forte is her rotten luck. Clary quickly silences him and asks him what's going on, wanting to know who that boy is, but Edward hesitates before answering. In the meantime, the students from before quickly reach the heart of the capital, where they find their classmates, Renese and Jarua, who are witnessing the battle from up close. Despite this, they still don't know what's going on, because Will and that monster are just moving too fast. Jarua clarifies that even though they don't fully understand what's going on, they can tell that Will is holding his own. Emma tries to leave to go to the battlegrounds, saying that they have to get out there and provide support. Palm immediately stops her and reminds her that magic doesn't work on that monster, so they can't do anything to help in this case. Besides, if they hit him, they'll only be getting in his way. Renese agrees with Palm and explains that magic like theirs won't do any good. He also reminds them that the one fighting right now is the no talent, and up until now, they have looked down on him and made fun of him. Everyone goes silent after that reminder, and they're left wondering what they can possibly do for Will after all this time. Lyral decides to speak through their silence, saying that Will saved all of them, and even now, he's still fighting for them, so there must be something they can do. Just then, while no one else knows what to do in this situation to help Will, Cyan decides to step forward and cheer him on, shouting his lungs out as he asks Will to beat that thing because he knows that he can do it. Colette and Kiki decide to do the same, trying to motivate Will and letting him know that he can do this. Wignall and Lehanna also join them, asking Will to keep pushing and to never falter. Even Julius decides to cheer him on, saying that he's come this far already, so he has to make it happen. The other students are surprised to see them shouting like that for Will, but they're more shocked to see that even Julius and Cyan are cheering him on. All of them soon realize that this is the only thing they can do to help him right now, so they all decide to also root for Will, trying to encourage him with their words. Edward stubbornly tries to go to the battleground, despite how wounded his body is, because he refuses to leave this to someone who can't use magic. Clary quickly approaches him, saying that he really hasn't changed one bit, but even so, now is not the time for that, and he knows it. She clarifies that this isn't when he protects his student, but when he believes in him. Edward finally stands back after hearing her words, but he still doesn't look happy about the situation. Meanwhile, Donnan and the dwarves obviously also root for Will, and they try to encourage him to pummel that thing. Everyone in the whole capital is rooting for Will now, wanting him to win and save them. Iris witnesses the whole thing, and she's shocked to see that the entire world of magic is cheering on a no-talent who can't use magic. She doesn't understand how this can be possible, but the answer is right in front of her eyes. Will is doing what no one else can do right now, protecting the city and fighting the feared Devander with only a sword. As he fights, Will remembers the fact that he's been miserable for so long and it's hurt for so long. People have disdained him, and they have made fun of him for the longest time. There were times he hated this world right back, and yet somewhere in his heart, he wanted them to acknowledge him. That's what he's wanted all this time, and now everyone around him is rooting for him, wanting him to win. Even if this is the only time they ever cheer for him, this world has given him the courage to fight, and he wants to protect all of them. Will fights the Devander relentlessly as he realizes all of this, encouraged by all the people who believe in him right now. He circles the Devander in a flash to throw it off balance and immediately jumps right above it to strike it with his sword. However, the Devander reacts just in time, and as soon as they clash, Will's sword breaks in two. Elfaria sees this from the tower, and everyone witnessing the battle knows that this is bad. After all, without a weapon, he'll be thrown off balance, and that puts him in a huge disadvantage. Will quickly blocks the Devander's attack with what's left of his sword and stands back, wondering what to do. Meanwhile, Elfaria wastes no time and leaves her seat to go outside, not explaining a thing. Carriot quickly asks her to wait and reminds her that they are not permitted to leave this place. Elfaria briefly stops after opening the door, clarifying that she has no intention of leaving the tower and she simply wants to watch from the balcony. Everyone inside stares at her expectantly, noticing the small shards of ice descending from above her. Elfaria looks back at them and raises her hand, saying that her hand slipped. Just then, a huge sword of ice created by her descends from the tower at high speed, landing directly where Will is. Elfaria smiles, and even though he can't see her, Will smiles back at her, already knowing what to do. Without a doubt, he raises his broken blade, letting Elfaria's sword fall right on it. This powerful clash alone sends a shockwave all around the place, and Will soon lets everyone see that he now has a fully charged Albus Weiss. The sword that was broken before has transformed with Elfaria's magic, so now he's wielding a powerful magic sword of ice. Cyan realizes that it's just like that time with the Grand Duke, and the others soon understand that Will's sword has the ability to take on others' spells. However, that isn't ideal in this situation, because the Devander is wielding a Mage Slayer, and magic shouldn't work on that thing. Julius tries to warn him about it, saying that no matter how strong that spell might be, it won't work against a the Mage Slayer. Despite their warnings and concern, Will confidently wields his sword, knowing deep down that this power is one that will never stop. With this belief firm in his heart, Will attacks the Devander without a doubt, and everyone is shocked to see that he sliced right through it. Iris can't believe what she's seeing, because Will fundamentally just ignored the Mage Slayer. While everyone tries to process what just happened, Mars completely crashes out, wondering what's going on. He doesn't understand what kind of logic this is, or how Will could get through a Mage Slayer. Even Headless is in disbelief, and the Magia Vander in the tower are trying to understand what just happened. Zio simply laughs loudly, saying that Will is incredible, but Eleanor seriously tries to understand Will's power, knowing that he didn't use magical energy. Carriot thinks the same, and he's sure it was actually the fifth element, which is written of in the lore, the primeval key that began the world. Aaron remains silent, but deep down, he realizes that Finn has finally found what he was looking for. He made a vow to the Mage Queen after all. About the joining of wand and sword, Will continues fighting the Devander, landing a strike to freeze part of its body and taking the opportunity to step back. He immediately jumps back and starts running on the walls, dodging one of the Devander attacks and then gaining momentum to jump right towards it. Will then slides across the ground at high speed, not giving it any time to react as he attacks the Devander from underneath, freezing more of its body in a second. The Devander soon manages to break free from the ice, and in a desperate attempt to survive, it wildly attacks Will from different directions at the same time. Despite this, Will reacts just in time, remaining completely calm, and manages to dodge the simultaneous attacks in a flash, turning it all into ice and then making it break. Wignall stares at him in shock, realizing just how powerful Will truly is, and Lihanna thinks the same, noticing how merciless that overwhelming power is. Colette seems to think the same thing, and even though none of them are able to even utter a word right now, they all realize that this power is just like Albus Vina, so it's like seeing Elfaria and Will fighting together. The Devander is already exhausted, and it won't last much longer against Will, so Marzi immediately asks Headless to do something about it. In a matter of seconds, several gates appear in the sky, letting everyone know that there's still more monsters coming. As all the Dynabaroses descend from the sky, Cyan and the others wonder what they're supposed to do about all of those. Will is completely surrounded by these beasts now, but Elfaria keeps a smile on her face, knowing that it doesn't matter, because with the two of them together, they have nothing to fear. Just then, Will fixes his sword in the ground for a moment to activate Overload, attacking all the enemies with a full burst. This initial attack is just the beginning of it, because he later uses Glace Frost, L7, which creates a whole ice castle behind him. Without even moving his sword, Will makes several ice stakes come out of the ground, impaling all the Dinobaroses in a second. Finally, he uses Fruzal Cardinea to make them explode, getting rid of all the monsters in a flash. Everyone, including all the students, Edward, and even Marze and Headless, stare at the whole scene in shock, unable to even utter a word. Despite how furious he was just a moment ago, Mars doesn't even know how to react to this, and he's completely speechless. Will decides that it's time to end this already, and since he got rid of all the obstacles, he can now focus on defeating the Devander once and for all. With Elfaria's power, he's able to elongate his sword, and without any doubt, he leaps directly towards the Devander to slash right through its body. With a single strike, the Devander's body gets completely frozen, and the next second, Will makes it burst into small pieces alongside the ice castle he created. There's no trace of the Devander left now, so everyone lights up when they realize that they have been saved. Colette cries tears of joy, and the others look completely happy to know that Will didn't let them down. Even Scion can't help but shed a few tears, and everyone soon realizes that they did the right thing by believing in Will. Lyral immediately cheers for the victory, and Colette happily hugs Kiki, saying that Will has done it. Clary loudly cheers while Edward remains silent by her side, unable to deny the truth before their eyes. Even Iris is having a hard time trying to process what just happened, but the only thing she knows is that Will really won, and he saved them all. Donnan cheers with the rest of the dwarves, because they always believed in Will, and they know that he's just that amazing. Gina never expected less of her part-timer, so she's not surprised, but she's really proud. Eliza is just relieved to know that everything is over, while Werkner lies somewhere in the capital, barely conscious enough to know that Will saved them at last. Meanwhile, Finn just laughs in delight, saying that Will is magnificent, and he is even better than he ever imagined. That's just what he could expect from the hope left to them here at the end. Finn smiles and speaks to the sky, apologizing to Mercedes for keeping her waiting all this time. He clarifies that it is already time for him to make good on their pact, and it only took 500 years, though he thinks that is just the slightest miscalculations. Despite that small detail, Finn announces that their long prologue ends here, and he asks the false sky to just wait, because the curtain is rising. After everything that's happened, Finn says that it is finally time for them to begin the tale of the joining of wand and sword, the story of all of them, Wistoria. Now, we go back 3 years in time, to the day people experienced rain for the first time under the false sky thanks to Elfaria's spell. Will can't bring himself to enjoy it. He just sits under the rain as he observes the tower, which feels so incredibly far away. He reaches to the sky, thinking that he wants to stand by her side, but he can't control even a single drop of water. As he wonders if he will ever be able to catch up to her, Rosti shows up with an umbrella to shelter him from the rain, saying that he could catch a cold. When he sees Will's surprise, surprise, Rosti explains that he invented this umbrella himself since he wants to become an artificer. Will can only ask him who he is, so Rosti introduces himself and informs him that he's his roommate from now on, and he'd like to be his friend as well. Back to present time, Will dreams about that moment with tears in his eyes while he's unconscious and under Cauldron's care. Cauldron manages to bring his hair back to normal, and Finn mentions that she seems to have mastered the use of the Mage Queen's legacy. She reminds him that she's the one who kept Will here at the academy, so she has a duty to guide and support him. Cauldron informs him that editing Will's memories is progressing smoothly, and this way he can return to being his usual self. Finn knows that in exchange for that, Will remains asleep, rocking in a cradle of memories, though he can't help but wonder what he's dreaming right now, especially after seeing his tears. While Will is asleep, Worker finally wakes up, and Edward scolds him for regarding his own wounds as a secondary priority, saying that he hasn't changed at all since their school days. Clary actually agrees with him and reminds him that even if they won't kill him, he should still value his life a little more. Werkner just sits up to try to understand where he is, and that's when Eliza shows up with a basket of fruit, saying that he's in the school infirmary. She explains that he collapsed on the academy roof last night, so she decided to bring him here. Eliza gently approaches him and tells him that she's glad he woke up, but as her hand reaches to caress his face, Clary suddenly stops her, keeping a tight grip on her wrist as she asks her why she's acting like she's the lawful wife here. Eliza calmly reminds her that she's the one who should quit brazenly two-timing, because misunderstandings can do great harm and are painful to watch. Clary stubbornly tells her that she's bound to Werkner and Edward by passionate bonds of friendship, so she should stop trying to weasel her way between classmates like a thieving wench. Werkner is not surprised to see them bantering like that, but he suddenly remembers Will and decides to ask about him. Edward informs him that Headmistress Cauldron is looking after him, so they have nothing to fear. Once that's clear, Edward pushes him back into bed and tells him that for now he just has to be good and sleep since he still hasn't recovered. Soon enough, Lyril finds out about the news and immediately goes to inform the other students that Professor Werkner is alright, and so is Will. He quickly corrects himself and calls Will the book learner again, saying that Eliza told him he should be able to make an appearance at graduation. Everyone is glad to hear that because he worked the hardest out of everyone, and if he hadn't made it, that would sour everything. Julius interrupts their conversation to call them naive, and he reminds them that Will has that incomprehensible power at his disposal, so there was never a need to worry about him. Emma asks him why he would say something so spiteful, but Julius cuts her off as she tries to bring up the old hymn, reminding them that not long ago, all of them scorned the laggard themselves, so they're the ones pulling a convenient about-face. Everyone goes silent after that, and Julius mentions that the whole lot of them have been corrupted, just like the elf and the others. Wignall shows up just then to tell him that it appears to him he's the one being obstinate here. Julius knows that he's resorting to peer pressure, so he clarifies that he would never give in to something like that. Wignall tells him that even if he doesn't acknowledge him, he surely feels a secret gratitude in his heart for his saving him. He then creates an ice rose in his hand and asks him if he has perhaps forgotten a mage's noblesse oblige. Julius breaks the ice rose with his hand and stubbornly walks away, saying that whatever the case, Will can't ascend to the tower, and it'll be such a relief. After he walks out of the classroom, Gordon asks Sion what he thinks about this, but to his surprise, Sion doesn't have a word to say, and he simply looks outside the window in silence. In a change of scene, we see Iris talking to Aaron, and she informs him that the losses suffered at Terminalia include roughly 3,000 killed or wounded. The whereabouts of the leaders behind the attack are still unknown, so Aaron asks her to divide the investigation between the factions and prioritize repairs in the capital for now. Leaving that aside, he decides to ask her about Will Surfort, since he has been a student at the academy, and he wants to know why they were unable to ascertain his presence these past 6 years. Iris tells him that it's likely Headmistress Cauldron's work, because she probably was concealing him until he fully matured. Aaron can't help but complain about Cauldron, since she makes too many decisions without consultation. That's why he decides that, from this point forward, supervision of the sword will be entrusted to Finn. Iris asks him what his thoughts regarding Will Surfort are, and Aaron just says that if this is the wand and sword of the Mage Queen's vow, then all will intersect one day. Just then, 3 Magiavander suddenly show up, and Carriot is the first to speak, apologizing for being late. Zio just assumes that this will be another boring evaluation meeting, but Eleanor calls him barbarian once again and asks him to cease his yammering. Aaron informs them that they will share intelligence concerning the attackers, so they must continue to keep information on the all-student Praxis incident. Carriot asks him if the recovered mage slayers have yielded any clues, but Aaron tells him that there's nothing about that. Zio then asks him about the monsters, because the Upper Institute has been rummaging through the carcasses. Once again, Aaron says that there's nothing about it, so Eleanor calls him an incompetent king for not knowing anything. She asks him if he has an inkling at the very least, and Aaron decides to mention the great battle of 10 years ago, because he thinks this felt the same as those destroyers who once shook the magical world. That information actually surprises them, and Carriot asks him if he thinks there were survivors on the day of Near Dune. Zio just thinks that this has turned pretty interesting, and he asks him if he thinks those filthy ghosts are coming back for more. Eleanor asks about the possibility he's mistaken, because Lafia and her people made great sacrifices to be rid of them completely. Zio assumes that she's scared, since she didn't take part in that battle, and he says that she's probably going to go running back to her forest. Eleanor gets so furious by his comment that she doesn't even hesitate to attack him immediately, and her spell is so powerful that it even sends a shockwave through all the capital and surroundings. Cariat and Aaron simply cast a barrier to protect themselves, not even fazed by this violent act. Iris can only brace herself behind Aaron's chair, saying that this is why she never wants to participate in the Magia Vander meetings. Eleanor asks Zio if he has a death wish, but he just speaks to her from above after dodging her attack, saying that that's not the best line after she tries to kill someone. Before he can continue the fight, Aaron stops them and tells them that each faction will continue the investigation, because the pruning of new buds, the bloom, is nearly upon them, and they can't neglect their preparations for that. Once that's clear, Cariat decides to ask Sarissa what she's doing there, so she nervously enters the meeting room, looking quite disheveled after being affected by Eleanor's attack. Eleanor asks her where Elfaria is, because all of the Magia Vander, without exception, were summoned. Sarissa nervously explains that Elfaria said she has a stomachache, so she won't be coming today. Meanwhile, Lihanna runs into Colette outside the academy, and she decides to ask her about the flowers in her hands. Colette explains that the flowers are for Rosti, since he doesn't have a grave yet, but she figured this is the least she can do. Lihanna then asks her what Rosti Noman was like, and Colette admits that she doesn't really know that herself. He was majoring in artificer studies, so she didn't see him much on campus, but she heard he was a transfer student from the western capital of Taralis. He appeared suddenly, and just as suddenly, he was glued to Will at the hip for some reason. Colette confesses that she was jealous of him, and she then puts the flowers in the river, letting the current take them away. She lastly mentions that Will said that he'd made such a good friend, and he seemed so happy, despite everything. As days go by, the city repairs are speeding right along with the help of the dwarves, and Finn believes that things will soon look as they did before at this rate. As he walks away, Iris suddenly shows up and stops him, calling him Inves for some reason. Finn stops as soon as he hears that name, and even though he keeps a smile on his face, he reminds her that he had asked her to stop calling him that, because he doesn't like that name. Iris clarifies that it's perfect in that case, because she truly despises him after all. Finn keeps his cheerful attitude and tells her that she hasn't changed apparently, but he leaves that aside and asks her why she's calling out to stop someone she hates so much. Iris simply asks him not to interfere with Will, because if he gets involved, the hands of the clock will advance all at once, and if that happens, there will be no stopping that person any longer. Finn admits that he's surprised, because he never thought a watcher like her would say something like that, so she must have a thing for Will for sure. Iris immediately tries to deny it, but Finn walks past her just then and informs her that he will be taking him. He then mentions that today is the graduation ceremony, so Cauldron's little games are over now. In a change of scene, we see the memories of a year ago, where Rosti asks Will if he'd feel sad if he wasn't around anymore. Will is taken by surprise with that question, so Rosti explains that after meeting him and making so many precious memories, he'd started wondering about it. After all, if he has to say goodbye and that saddens him, then maybe he never should have appeared before him in the first place. Will immediately tells him that it's not like that, and he clarifies that he's glad he met him because it has made him really happy, so he doesn't want him to say such sad things. Rosti apologizes, but he still tells him that when he ascends the tower, he may not be by his side. Will assumes that he means he won't have enough credits, and Rosti doesn't give him a clear answer, saying that it's something like that. Rosti then tells him that even when that day comes, he'll always be watching over him. Back to the present time, Will wakes up in his empty room after dreaming of that memory. When he goes to the bathroom to wash his face, he notices that his hair is back to its normal color somehow, and he wonders what all of that was. He comes out of the bathroom to see what Kiki is doing, and when he sees her on Rosti's desk, Will suddenly remembers that he's not around anymore. Will sits down for a moment, wondering what Rosti would have to say if he were here. Knowing that no one will answer his questions, he decides to finish getting ready and leaves the room. Everyone soon heads to the Academy auditorium for the graduation ceremony, where Cauldron gives a speech and says that in the Terminalia tragedy, many lives were lost, including teachers from their academy and no small number of their students, along with high mages from the tower who put their lives on the line to protect the people. Cauldron says that they offer their condolences and deepest respect to them, and at the same time, they must put an end to hanging their heads. With the tower now under threat, this tragedy was not a finale, but a warning bell signaling the beginning of calamity. Cauldron reminds everyone that it is their responsibility to carry the hope they've nurtured into the future, and with that, she announces the beginning of the Regarden Magical Academy graduation ceremony. Edward then asks the students of the 401st class to rise and line up in front of the stage. He explains that those graduates whose names are called must stand ready to accept their certificates. Without moving from his spot, Edward uses his magic to distribute the certificates to the students he names. One by one, he calls out the names of all 250 students, including Will Surfort. Once they all have their certificates, Edward announces that these students have completed the required coursework at their academy and they approve their graduation. To conclude the ceremony, Cauldron informs them that she will now announce those ascending the tower, so those whose names are called must come up to the stage. After all, they'll be granted a hat of Mercedes and the right to enter the tower. She starts off by naming their valedictorian, Lihanna Owenzaus, with a total credits of 12,000. Lihanna goes up on stage to receive her hat of Mercedes, and Cauldron then announces that the next by rank is Wignall Lindor, with a total credits of 11,989. Julius Reinberg follows with a total of 11,802 credits, and Cyan Ulster with a total of 11,801 credits. Cauldron also calls Emma Cleaver, who has a total of 10,000 credits, and Renee Ciaret, who has a total of 9,655 credits. Colette Loire is also called on stage with a total of 9,024 credits, though she can't help but worry about Will as they call all those names. Cauldron continues calling name after name, including Rose Praenight, Jarua Moraine, Gordon Beret, and Lyral Marze. Will remains downcast as the headmistress names all his classmates, knowing that he won't be able to ascend the tower. After a while, Cauldron finishes calling everyone, and she announces that these 49 students have obtained the necessary credits and will advance to the tower. They all receive a round of applause, while Will can do nothing but apologize to Elfaria because he was not able to make it. However, Cauldron then clarifies that there is one more student, one who was deemed to advance right at the very last minute. Neither Werkner nor Edward knew a thing about this, so Cauldron reminds everyone that there are two conditions for advancing. The first is to earn 7,200 credits or more, and the other is to create a new spell. Cauldron explains that the spell in question cleansed all of them of their despair, and it protected countless lives and saved the capital. It is a splendid accomplishment, a great feat worthy of praise, and the name of that spell is Courage. As soon as he hears that name, Will realizes that she's talking about him, so Cauldron calls him onto the stage. Edward immediately runs towards her to protest, but Cauldron stops him without a word, and she clarifies to everyone that there are certainly those who disagree with this, but for those who acknowledge Will's courage as magic, they must give a round of applause. The entire auditorium goes completely silent for a long moment because everyone is hesitant about something like this. After a while waiting, Will starts to lose his hope, but when he thought that no one believed in him, only one person claps his hands, and that is Cyan Ulster. That surprises several students, but of course, Colette follows right away and rapidly claps her hands to let them know that she also approves. Wignall decides to do the same, as well as Lianna, Renesse, and even Julius, because they all believe in Will. With them, several other students in the auditorium stand up to clap their hands until the whole crowd is applauding and cheering for Will. The decision is now clear, so Cauldron gives Will his hat of Mercedes, officially announcing that he'll be able to ascend the tower. Edward just stares at the whole scene in shock, and he's clearly not happy about any of this, because he doesn't understand how they can tease such a sweet dream, only to shove him into the pits of despair. He just didn't want Will to suffer the same fate he did, but Werkner assures him that he'll overcome it. After all, he's been thoroughly trained by a very scary, very kind teacher. To end the ceremony, Cauldron officially announces that these 50 students are hereby approved to ascend to the tower by the will of everyone gathered here. They are the Grim Generation, so ahead of them, trouble no doubt lies in wait, and they will face many trials, but even so, they must find their place in the heavens and drive off evil. As the graduation ceremony ends, Rosti congratulates Will, even if he can't truly see him anymore. Meanwhile, Elfaria remains in the tower as she thinks about Will, saying that she's been waiting for him. Going far back into the past, when Elfaria and Will are still just kids, she talks to him about the setting sun, which they say is at the end of a long tunnel. They have to overcome all sorts of dangers, so they'll have to learn lots of magic to be prepared. Will intently listens to her, noticing that when Elfaria talks about her dreams, her eyes glitter like jewels. She's so blindingly brilliant, and he is hopelessly weak, but even so, when he tells her that he might not be able to make it, Elfaria just jumps at him with tears in her eyes, saying that she won't do it if he's not with her. After all, if he won't be there, then there is no point at all, so she wants them to go together. Now, back to the present. Will still remembers that moment from 5 years ago, because he's finally headed to where Elfaria is. Later that day, at the Noble Quarter, in the high-end Clothier Lazele, all students ascending to the tower get their new clothes. The principles of wisdom, attunement, and scholarship are held in high esteem by Regarden Magical Academy, and only those who embody all three are permitted to wear the mark of High Mages, the colorless Gloria. The 10th proprietor of the Lassalle Boutique, Brantal Lazele, tells them that to have overseen the robes they will wear as they take flight into their futures is quite an honor. Colette decides to do a spin, testing how light and easy to move in the colorless Gloria is, and she's even more amazed to know that they're resistant to magic too. Lihanna also tests it out with excitement, saying that the Academy cloaks were magnificent defensive equipment, but these are clearly superior. Wignall agrees and mentions that mages really do excel in crafting such things, because they're even perfectly tailored. Cyan tells Brantal that he does good work, just like the previous proprietor. Brantal is honored to hear his compliment, and he apologizes for the fact that they were not ready until the day they set out for the tower. Cyan assures him that it's not his fault, because with what happened at Terminalia, everyone has been set back. Julius just stares at himself in the mirror, saying that this is the special garb for ascending the tower. Colette sees his worried expression and approaches him to ask him what's wrong, because he seemed kind of down for a while now. To her surprise, Julius just suddenly snaps at her, asking her to shut up and leave him alone. Colette gets so startled that she backs away without thinking, accidentally bumping into the mannequins in the boutique and making them fall. One of the mannequins consequently hits Julius on the head, so he blames Colette and calls her a lord of destruction. distraction. Colette quickly apologizes for the mess, but Brantal assures her that it's no trouble at all, and he asks her to just leave everything as it is. Without wasting any time, Colette apologizes again and immediately moves away from the mannequins. She then approaches Lihanna and mentions that Julius really is acting strangely. Lihanna just asks her if she's been scouted by the tower, and Colette tells her that she did receive a letter from the Earth faction some time ago. Lihanna clarifies that it was the Lightning faction for her, for Wignall, the Elves, and for Sion, Fire. They have all been scouted, so only Julius hasn't received an offer, and that's what's bothering him. Finally, Brantal adds a brooch to their uniforms as the finishing touch, saying that their shop has had the privilege of preparing more than a few Gloria for those setting out for the tower. With that, he says goodbye and tells them that he hopes the protection of the Mage Queen is with them. Before leaving, Wignall asks the others what happened to Will, since he hasn't seen him around. Brantal explains that Will visited their shop prior to them, but he seemed to be in quite a hurry and left quickly. Colette chuckles, knowing that Will is surely with Donnan right now. Just as she thought, Will is currently at Slumland Street, specifically in Donnan's forge, where he shows him his new sword since he broke the last one. Donnan explains that he took his broken Moria blade, added a Wisp gem, and reforged it. It will cut through magic, just like it always did, and it can amplify the magic stored in the gems around the capital. Will excitedly accepts his new sword, and Donnan tells him that he can call it Wisp Set Silver. He then pats him on the back and clarifies that he was confident in his last sword too, and yet he went and broke it, so his monstrous strength is enough to shame a dwarf. Will apologizes for that, and he thanks him for the new sword, asking him how much he owes him. Donnan tells him that he doesn't need his money, so he must take this as thanks for saving all of them, and do his best out there. Will gladly accepts the gift and the good wishes, so he finally leaves to go meet with the others, who have been waiting for him. Now that they're all together, all 50 students head to the tower, where Clary welcomes them, mentioning how blinding all those brand new Gloria are. She explains that they're severely short-handed right now, so she'll be the only one attending them, but she'll do the job right, so they don't have to worry. Her cheerful attitude surprises some of the students, and Lyral even wonders if she's really a high mage. Clary mentions that it looks like they're all raring to go already, so now it's time to get right to it. With a spell, she opens the gates of the tower and welcomes all 50 students to a paradise of research and a strict hell. Will holds onto his goggles as he finally ascends to the tower, saying that it's all thanks to Rosti that he made it this far, and now he's on his way to Elfaria. Despite their initial excitement, all the students are a little confused when they enter the tower, since the place is completely empty. Clary doesn't explain anything and simply activates the access with her name, unlocking the gate with another spell. Just then, the students notice how the ceiling is opening up, and that's not all, because the floor they're standing on is also moving, and they soon realize that it's actually rising. Soon enough, they all reach the first floor of the tower, the colorless garden. All the students are surprised to see an entire colorless city inside the tower, and they're amazed to see that there's a sky, a horizon, and there is even light. Even the castle there is floating, and the place is so huge that it even makes them wonder if they're really inside the tower. Clary welcomes them to the first floor of the tower, the colorless garden, and she mentions that when outsiders talk about the Upper Institute, they are generally referring to the facilities on this level. It supports the tower from the bottom up, providing the foundation for life here, and it's also an academic center for researching and developing new magic. Only those acknowledged by the Academy can enter here, so for mages, it is a realm of glory. Some of the students can't help but cry of happiness, feeling really glad to be in this place right now. Clary then informs them that whether they become permanent residents here or not is up to them. Without wasting more time, she invites them into the colorless garden, saying that they're all today's special guests, and everyone is waiting at the hall for the ceremony. As they advance, Lihanna asks Wignall about the light and sky in this place, and he confirms that there is no doubt it is elven illusion magic, likely very advanced at that. Colette excitedly looks around with Will, noticing that many people there are wearing the same Gloria as them. She mentions that there is a Mori garden, apparently, with lots of magical herbs, and there is also a testing site for magical creatures. Colette happily jumps around, exclaiming that this really is the front line of magical research. She admits that it's a little late, but this really makes her feel like she has become a high mage. Will agrees with her, saying that this truly is like a dream come true. Colette also mentions that they even have a crepe shop, but as soon as Lihanna hears that, she freezes in place and immediately uses Owen Seek, activating the Lisolde Dua spell, Algiz. In less than a second, she flies straight towards the crepe shop and orders 5 of them. The vendor even questions her order twice, but Lihanna clarifies that knights never go back on their word, and she tells him that she doesn't require any change. Colette quickly drags her back to the group and scolds her, saying that they're in the middle of the tower entrance ceremony right now, so this is no time to be eating. Despite all the reprimands, Lihanna happily eats the crepes even as Colette drags her around. Will sees the whole scene and mentions that Lihanna is just the same as always. Wignall agrees and admits that her usual voracious appetite is almost refreshing at this point. Even though Will is having a good time right now, Sion walks past him and warns him not to get too excited because the tower isn't the bright, friendly place they take it for. Will is taken by surprise by that warning, and he doesn't know what he means at first, but that's when he notices the way high mages are staring at them. After a while, they finally get to the pruning ceremonial hall, where mages from each of the factions are waiting for them. Colette admits that the way they're looking at them somehow feels a little scary. Among all of them, there's also Kreutz Harlan, director of the Upper Institute and head of the Colorless Garden. Now that all the students are there, all Magia Vander decide to show themselves before them. Everyone is excited to see them, and Wignall is happy to see Eleanor, but she doesn't return his smile and simply looks away. Will is also happy to finally see Elfaria, but for some reason, she actually looks rather sad and doesn't meet his gaze. Clary thanks all the noble Magia Vander for all they do from high atop the tower. Carriot simply tells her that this chore is a tired custom, so he asks her to move things along efficiently so they don't get bored. Clary has a hard time hiding her irritation, and she keeps a smile on her face despite her anger, saying that her dear Junior really has moved up in the world apparently, though she's already used to his condescending manner. Carriot laughs and tells her that he had delightful upperclassmen who worked him very hard after all. Putting that aside, Clary decides to proceed with the ceremony, saying that it's time to get right into the first bloom. First, beginning with the Grand Magic Festival, some students have been scouted over their 6 years at the Academy, and they will now be bestowed with what they call the Blessing of Color. Just then, all Magia Vander raise their wands, and some of the students' Gloria change their color. Cyan realizes that his Gloria has turned red, and Colette's is now dark brown, and her brooch became the emblem of the Earth faction. Unlike them, Julius and Will's Glorias remain colorless, meaning that they haven't been chosen by any faction. One day earlier, we see Elfaria throwing a tantrum and blaming Sarissa for lying, since she said that if Will ascended to the tower, she'd be allowed to scout him. She said she couldn't do it while Will was still in school, so she held back from scouting him then. If he proved himself capable, she and the rest of the faction was supposed to accept him. However, all the scouting offers she wrote to Will never reached him, and it's her fault. Sarissa clarifies that that wasn't her doing, but the Upper Institute's director, because he wouldn't interject an opinion about the Academy's decisions, but he still has doubts about letting the likes of a sword join a faction. For a moment, Elfaria considers popping over to the Upper Institute and encasing everything in ice. Sarissa immediately asks her to calm herself and explains that if Will is able to prove himself at the first bloom, then Kreutz and the others will accept him. The tower is an extreme meritocracy after all, so if she recruited him now, it would destroy people's perception of Will Surfort. As an outlier, he must first earn the entire tower's acknowledgement, and as for Clary and the legwork with the other factions, she will take care of that. With that, Elfaria finally calms down, because she knows for sure that Will is going to overcome this. Back to the present time, Clary tells all the chosen students that this Blessing of Color itself is a prestigious award, and now the factions are waiting for them. Once each one of the chosen students go to their factions, she addresses the ones who have reached the tower but haven't been blessed, saying that they're now colorless, or in other words, worthless. Only faction-aligned mages can reach the top of the tower, and none else are permitted to proceed. Those who can't join a faction remain on the first floor permanently as mere scrap to the tower, and they exist only as cogs to support outstanding high mages. Julius already knew all of this, and he mentions that the nickname for the tower in the shadow of its glory is the Wand Graveyard. However, Clary informs them that as they've made it all the way to the tower, they'll all be given a chance, so they must demonstrate their ability here and now, and a faction may recruit them. This is the main event of the first bloom, so if they haven't been able to prove themselves before today, now is the time to show their colors and burst into bloom. Right after Clary announces the beginning of the main event, several monsters show up before the colorless students. She then explains that there is only one rule in the tower, which is to prove their worth. Their task is quite simple right now, since they only have to defeat those monsters and fight using any techniques they've mastered. Clary advises them to throw bunches of flashy spells at the monsters and not to hold back in appealing to the factions. Despite how simple the task is, some of the students are having a hard time fighting the monsters because magic doesn't work on them. Kreutz explains that these monsters are called Zoctonia, and they were actually created by the tower as guardians for the first floor. If they focus simply on individual power, they would be worth 30 credits, so they rival monsters from the late middle floors of the dungeon. For mages fresh out of the academy, they are impossible to defeat because their dual shields will reflect any perfunctory magic. Despite this, Julius is able to take 2 Zoctonia down in a flash with his magic, letting them all see that since the Grand Magic Festival, his proficiency has drastically increased. Sarissa is even impressed to see that he can control Elfaria's cloning magic to this extent. Erwin Oris, the head of the Wind faction, admits that out of them all, Julius is a cut above the rest. Monica Orphan, a Wind faction aide-de-camp, admits that with all that, he would be an immediate asset if they brought him into the faction. Even the members of the Dark faction can't understand why someone of his caliber hasn't been scouted. Julius eagerly tries to show everyone that he's actually a genius, because he can use cloning magic, and he's a beautiful and brilliant young nobleman. However, despite how hard he tries to be noticed by Elfaria, she blatantly refuses to look his way, hurting his pride without mercy. Julius assumes that it's because of what happened at the Grand Magic Festival, since he was rude and tormented the no-talent. Worgen's Pre-Knight, the head of the Earth faction, admits that if he didn't have ice magic, they would have scouted him immediately. Erwin mentions that other than that ice guy, he doesn't see any promising mages. Sarissa clarifies that, for better or worse, there is one more attracting attention. Julius criticizes Will for only dodging the Zoctonia's attacks, but Lihanna and Colette know that he is actually watching. Will understands that the sad expression he saw on Elfaria earlier was because she couldn't scout him, but knows that it'll be alright, because he'll make it to where she is on his own 2 legs. Now that he's observed the Zoctonia long enough, Will doesn't hesitate and uses his sword to cut one in half with a single move. Everyone witnessing soon realizes that Will is not only fast, but also strong, because he split a Zoctonia in 2 from above its shields. He's even seen through every one of his opponent's moves, and in so short a time. Will easily dodges the Zoctonia's attacks because he's already seen them, and he can see his opponent's moves more clearly than before. This Gloria he's wearing is also flexible and light, which makes it easy for him to move around, and the blade Donan forged can cut through everything. Even more Zoctonia show up before them, so Julius wastes no time and uses Glace Etier against them. However, a stray shot heads directly towards Elfaria, and that's when Will jumps in front of her right in time, saying that he will borrow it. He stops Julius' magic with his sword, letting it absorb it to activate a fully charged Glaus Whiz. Elfaria looks at him in awe right at that moment, but Will doesn't waste any time and jumps straight towards his opponent, activating Glaus Mill. Thanks to that, his sword slices through the Zoctonia with ease, letting him move faster than before as he takes each one of them down. Unlike the last time, his hair doesn't turn white again, but he is fully able to use his own magic with confidence, demonstrating his worth. In no time, his sword goes back to normal as he finally wipes out all of the Zoctonia in a matter of minutes, and Elfaria just happily looks at him because she knew from the beginning that he could overcome something like this. Everyone witnessing this is left wondering what just happened, because for some of them it's the first time they see Blizzard and Swordwind magic, and they still wonder if it really was magic in the first place. They soon realize that this is the Whiz they saw at Terminalia, but they're still just as confused. Clary only complains about Will beating all the Zoctonia, since she doesn't know what they're going to do about this now, and there are still other students waiting to prove their worth. Will takes his goggles off once he's done, and his blue eyes soon go back to normal. Not even a second happens, and Elfaria happily bestows him with a blessing from Albus Vina. Lihanna is surprised to see that he's been scouted by the Ice faction, but Colette lets her know that that's not all, because Incendia Barum, the Fire faction, also chose him. Wignall then realizes that the Earth, Wind, and even the Dark factions are bestowing Will with their blessings all at once. Kreutz observes everything in silence, while his assistant, Charles Lauer, is just as surprised as everyone. He mentions that Will is not a Multos with multiple affinities, yet 5 different factions have given him their blessings. Will just stands where he is in shock, noticing how the magic circle under his feet changes color, indicating the colors of each faction. This is completely unprecedented, so everyone is having a hard time believing this. Cyan refuses to comment anything about what's going on, but Julius doesn't hesitate to complain about Will stealing all the credit. Clary breaks the silence to say that in the event that multiple blessings are bestowed, the individual gains the right to choose, so now Will must choose which faction he wishes to join. Of course, Will doesn't look at anyone but Elfaria, knowing that he's now closer than ever to finally being by her side. However, as soon as he opens his mouth to speak, Kreutz interrupts the whole thing, saying that his magic isn't the sort of thing they should call magic. He explains that his contributions during the Terminalia incident were taken into account, and he was allowed to ascend the tower in their honor. That is all well and good, but he doesn't know if he's truly qualified to be accepted into one of their glorious factions, and he can't help but wonder. Elfaria immediately stands up with an annoyed expression, asking him if he wasn't watching what happened just now, since Will really used a magic spell. Kreutz clarifies that he was indeed watching, however, while she might say he used magic, all he saw is that Will merely repurposed someone else's spell. His true nature is not that of a mage after all, but of an extremely violent warrior. They would be welcoming one no better than a dwarf into the tower, so they don't know what condemnation the world would level at them for doing such a thing, and the mere thought is terrifying to him. Eleanor starts getting annoyed by this conversation, so she directly asks him to get to the point, wanting to know what he's trying to say with all of this. Kreutz then explains that if Will has even a hint of aptitude as a wand, then he must prove it to them. He suddenly snaps his fingers, and just like that, everyone is shocked to see 2 giant monsters falling from above and surrounding Will. Kreutz then informs them that they developed these magical creatures for the purpose of suppressing dwarves, and they're called Wurz Oozes. He asks everyone to observe, and then uses Christo Wreath, a simple magic spell that destroys one of the magic creatures in a second. Kreutz explains that, as they can see, contact with magical energy from even low-level spells makes them disintegrate. To put it another way, these creatures, which are made of viscous liquid, can't be felled by anyone incapable of producing magical energy. The remaining Wurz Ooze suddenly lunges at Will, so he quickly puts his goggles back on and prepares for another fight. He quickly dodges the monster and steps back, not before slicing its body with his sword. Will soon realizes that his sword has no effect against this creature, because even if he managed to split its body in 2, it simply fused back together. It's just like that time with the Balkar, so he wonders if these nullify any and all physical attacks. As he tries to figure out what to do, he continues dodging the creature's attacks, but no matter how many times his sword slices through its body, it simply keeps fusing back together. Elfaria is clearly worried about the situation, and Clary asks the Magia Van Evander what they're going to do about this. Cariot is the only one to speak, saying that there is sense to what Kreutz says, so they should have him demonstrate one such battle. As a Magiavander, he must say that the tower is the apex of the magical world, so a sword who can't use magic of his own will not be permitted to advance here. While he speaks, Will continues dodging the monster's attacks, trying to figure out how to defeat it for good. No matter how many times he cuts its body, it simply does no good. But he knows that creatures like this always have cores, so if he can just crush that, then he might be able to defeat it. He quickly steps back to gain some distance and observe the creature's body, easily finding its core. With no hesitation, Will lunges at the monster and aims directly at its core with his sword. However, Kreutz only criticizes how short-sighted he is, because if their bodies could be made liquid, then he doesn't understand why he thought the same wouldn't be true of their cores as well. Will realizes this as soon as he stabs the creature's core, so Kreutz harshly asks him not to underestimate them, because this is magic perfected, and this is the tower. To make things worse, before Will can pull his sword out of the creature's body, a strong electric discharge suddenly runs through his body. He still manages to withstand that, and quickly jumps back, staying away from the Wur's ooze. Clary notices that that was a stunning shot capable of stopping a dwarf, and she mentions that the stuff Kreutz makes is always so nasty. While Will tries to recover, both Lyral and Gordon witness the whole thing, realizing that this is really bad, and at this rate, Will won't be able to overcome this. He's already exhausted after fighting non-stop, and Lyral can't help but feel frustrated when he remembers the times Will has saved them. All this time, they've done nothing but hide or run away, but Lyral refuses to do the same here, because they're high mages now too. Gordon agrees with him and mentions that if their magic will let him use that whiz thing, then they might be able to help him. Before they can try anything, Kreutz simply stops them with a spell and asks them not to do anything uncalled for, because this is not an audition for the two of them. He clarifies that the aim is to excise alien elements, and this is an inquisitional hearing. Will starts feeling overwhelmed by this whole thing, while Cyan can't hold back his frustration, to the point that he slams his fists against the railing in anger, because he knows that Will is more than this. The Wur's ooze lunges at Will, so he quickly dodges the attack and runs away from it. Once he's far enough, he turns around to attack one more time, but the creature's body fuses back together as soon as he cuts it in two. Before he can react, the Wur's ooze hits him with its head, sending him flying away. Despite this, Will quickly recovers and stands back up, full of determination, because he's not giving up just yet. However, before he can do anything, he only observes in shock as his opportunity is crushed before his eyes when Kreutz gets rid of the creature with a snap of his fingers. Kreutz simply explains that watching any more of this would simply be a waste of time, and just as he thought, Will is not qualified. That's why he thinks he should remain colorless and have his name entered in the lowest ranks of their upper institute. Kreutz admits that this whiz power that defeated the Devander was, without exaggeration, truly tremendous, so he will reveal the unknown within him and ensure that such power serves the magical world well. Cariot easily understands that Kreutz just wants Will as a lab animal, but he says that if it means they may understand the fifth element and make use of it, then he sees no problem with any of their organizations taking charge of him. Before he can continue speaking, Elfaria's magic breaks through the floor around her, letting them all see just how angry she is right now. Cariot tells her that this isn't something to throw a temper tantrum over like a child. Elfaria straight up ignores him and talks to Kreutz, saying that this isn't what they discussed. With a terrifying expression, she warns him that she is very close to snapping right now. Even Will is surprised by this, because it's the first time he sees her acting that way. Zio interrupts them with an insult, saying that he finds all this squawking really annoying. No one says a thing after that, but he breaks through the tense silence to remind them that they'll be holding another bloom anyway, so they can leave all their tedious talk until then. Will is surprised to hear this, so Clary explains that if this were any normal year, the next bloom would be in 6 months' time. However, after the losses they suffered at Terminalia, restoring the lost manpower of each faction has become urgent business. Hence, this year will be an exception, and the second bloom is scheduled for a week from now. After overcoming such tragedy, they have more room for growth than anyone else in the magical world, so not only the tower, but the whole world has high hopes for them as the Grimm generation. In fact, if they're not working hard enough that they vomit blood, they'll have a problem. So to those of them who didn't receive blessings today, they must stir themselves to do better at the next bloom. Clary clarifies to Will that that includes him, so he'll have a second chance to prove himself. That should work for everyone, Upper Institute and Noble Magiavander alike, because there is but one rule in the tower, which is to prove their worth. Kreutz has no way to argue against this, and he's clearly not happy about it, but Cariot easily agrees. After all, he knows that even themselves continued to prove their worth, which is how they came to be Magiavander. Elfaria's ice finally melts after she calms down, and Eleanor assumes that this farce ends here, so she decides to leave the place with her faction. Soon enough, all the other factions do the same, returning to their place in the tower. Kreutz is still really annoyed by the whole thing, and he thinks it was just a waste of time, so he decides to leave the place as well. Julius is left thinking about the fact that they'll have to face this test again in a week, but his thoughts are interrupted when he sees Will collapsing on the floor. Will simply covers his eyes with frustration, so Julius hesitantly asks him if he's crying. However, Will denies it and clarifies that it's just just too funny. Things like adversity and tough situations. As soon as he feels like something is within reach, he always gets knocked down somehow. Despite all the bitter memories, when he thinks about Elfaria and what Finn told him, Will quickly recovers and shouts with determination, saying that no matter how many tries it takes, he will overcome this. Later that night, Gil, an aide-de-camp from the Lightning faction, tells Zio that it was really unexpected that he didn't bestow his blessing on Will Surford after all that. After all, he thought that liked people like him. Zio just laughs and tells him that he still doesn't understand him, and he then explains that the guys that dragged themselves up from rock bottom are more entertaining, not to mention stronger. The next day, Will is at the temporary quarters on the first floor of the tower, writing down every detail about everything he learned at the First Bloom. He studies all magic elements, knowing that, excluding elven magic, he must look to these 7 elements to find a new approach. A no-talent like him, if he had to say, possesses no magical affinity, but even though he can't cast magic, that doesn't mean he can't use magical energy, and his ability to wield the power known as Wiz proves that. If he can analyze this phenomenon and harness its energy, then he might find a way to overcome this. The other mages in the room just observe him, a little weirded out because he's been studying like that all night, since the bloom ended yesterday. They all confirm that there's definitely something wrong with him, but Emma decides to approach him, calling him by his name instead of Book Learner. She introduces herself and informs him that they're thinking of heading into the dungeon to train until the next bloom, since they even got permission from the Upper Institute. Emma explains that they're technically high mages now, so they can go deeper than the 10th floor. Gordon mentions that defeating that floor keeper seems to be the only way for all of them to practice working together. Lero then explains that they want to get into the Fire faction so that they can follow after Cyan. Emma asks Will if he'd like to go with them, though she clarifies that she knows this won't undo everything they've put him through before now. To her surprise, Will easily accepts, but Julius suddenly barges into the room to interrupt him, exclaiming that he won't do that because he'll be training with him instead. Everyone is seriously confused by this, so Julius clarifies to Will that playing at being friends isn't what he needs right now. What he truly needs is getting control over that power called Wiz, and he will help him do just that. Will admits that it would be a big help, but he asks him why he would go through the trouble. Julius tells him that so much has transpired up to this point, but he, just like Wignall and the others, thinks of him as part of the team. That declaration immediately fills Will with hope and illusion, so he quickly thanks him and says that he'd love to have his help. He's just happy to know that he's considered part of the team, so he doesn't realize Julius's ulterior motives. Julius is satisfied to see that it was that easy, and he really thinks that no one would really put themselves out for the no talent. He's only doing this for the sake of his own future, because he'll earn a few points with Elfaria if he gives her childhood friend a little push. This should certainly lead to redeeming himself in her eyes, and he'll be able to join the Ice faction, so he'll use this pseudo-dwarf for all he's worth. Julius wastes no time and exclaims that they're starting his training immediately, so Will quickly follows after him, leaving everyone else stunned. They soon go to the east end of the first floor of the tower, specifically to the Fields of Solitude. There, Will activates Glauswiss with Julius magic once again, and Julius just tells him that he now has to maintain it. He then casts a spell called Frida Gardinus to summon several Icebird guardians named Kotori. Will is surrounded by them, and Julius clarifies that even though they're low-level guardians, a goof bit of magical energy went into them, so it'll take more than showering them with weak magic of the same element to get rid of them. Starting now, to keep from destroying these guardians, he must keep his energy in check as he goes about. Will doesn't fully understand what he means, so Julius explains that he's going to take his Wiss and learn how to activate it himself. He reminds him that he attended the academy for 6 years, yet he couldn't even learn the most rudimentary of magics. Even now, instead of trying to pick up a pre-existing spell, it'd be far more constructive to harness the power he already possesses. Will admits that he's probably right, but he asks him how he's going to do that, since he has to get his charge from others' magic precisely because he can't use his own, and he's stuck relying on outside magical energy. For him to prepare magical energy to activate Wise on his own is contradictory, because it's like trying to produce a 1 from a 0, and it's no different from trying to create new magic. Julius just silences him and clarifies that there is no point in settling on a harbor he doesn't even know he can reach. So what he's going to do now is extremely simple, and it's to anchor magical energy. He explains that even if the magical energy happened to be his, if he anchors it for the rest of his life, then it becomes his own. If he's currently output at 100, then 100th or 1000th of that would do, and he just has to reduce the energy he outputs and continue to maintain it. Whether he's awake or asleep, he'll maintain that magical energy all his days, and the ideal outcome is for him to control it, such that he only uses it in battle. If he can do that, then it's basically as good as magic. Julius reminds him that at the next bloom, he will undoubtedly face those oozes again. No matter how weak the magical energy is, one touch of it and they fall apart, as it was readily demonstrated. If all he needs to do is defeat those things, then rationally speaking, it doesn't matter how little energy he has. Julius warns him that there is a limit to what he can accomplish in less than a week, so he must work backward from his goal and minimize the challenges he tackles. He likes to cram everything in, so he's terrible at outlining, and that's something he has to change. Will finally understands everything, knowing that in order to keep from destroying the Guardians in this practical exercise, he needs a deft sense of anchoring magical energy in a long-lasting way. In other words, these guardians Julius created are like restraints to help him control his magical energy. It all makes so much sense now, so Will realizes that Julius really wasn't in the top 3 at the academy for nothing. Will happily thanks him, saying that he's really amazing, and it makes him wonder why none of the factions wanted him. That comment immediately stabs Julius on the back, hurting his pride, so he doesn't hide his irritation and tells him that it's all his fault. As they speak, an unknown witch quietly observes them with her magic, wondering how this special training of theirs will turn out in the end. Now, for a brief moment, we see a memory of Julius from years ago, when he was still just a kid. In the memory, he asks one of his maids if she likes him this way, and the girl, named Anna Isles, tells him that she does, and so does everyone else. She then takes off the pendant around her neck and gives it to him, saying that they all love their kind-hearted young master Julius very much. Back to the present time, Julius and Will continue training at the Fields of Solitude on the first floor, but they're both clearly worn out already. Will accidentally destroys another guardian, so Julius gets frustrated and tells him that he hasn't made the slightest bit of progress, so he's just wasting his magical energy. Will apologizes, but he knows that no matter how he tries, the longest he can restrict his output is 50 minutes. After that, the magical energy dissipates, and to make it worse, when he dispels Whis, all his stamina drains from him at once. He never realized it had such a downside, and at the rate he's going, all of this is just a waste of time. Julius raises his wand and asks him to try one more time, but just as the words leave his mouth, his body collapses from exhaustion. Despite this, he asks Will not to just stand there and get in position, because he's not planning to stop anytime soon. Will hesitates, clearly worried about him, and mentions that it'd be best if they learn more about Whis first after all, because even he doesn't really understand what this power is. He checked nearly every book in the Academy library but couldn't find anything relevant. Professor Werkner seemed to have an idea but said he didn't know the specifics. Will explains that it'll take some time, but maybe he should ask the High Mages to let him look through the tower libraries, or maybe he can find someone who knows something. Julius suddenly interrupts him to clarify that he's already doing all that, since he sent one of his clones to the libraries of the Upper Institute. At the same time, another clone is asking Professor Eliza to help find Finn from the People of the Light, who seem to know something. Will is completely surprised to know that Julius is remotely controlling Ars Vice, because he didn't know he could do that himself. Julius yells at him and reminds him that they're pressed for time right now, so he has no choice but to commit to training and intel gathering simultaneously. He gets a little dizzy just then and admits that his head is all jumbled up from seeing 3 perspectives at once, which is why he hates multitasking. Will is still very surprised, and he can't help but ask him why he would do all of this for him. Julius quickly clarifies that it's all out of calculated self-interest, of course, and tells him that he should get a clue already. He explains that as a mage from the Rheinberg family, he will rise to the top without fail, and he's using him to that end, nothing more than that. Besides, nobles are always good for their word, so that's all this is. Will only then remembers that Julius did keep his promise after the Grand Magic Festival, even to Donnan and the other dwarves. Thinking about that makes him smile, because he now can see that Julius is actually really kind, and he doesn't hesitate to let him know. That comment takes Julius off guard, so Will explains that he thinks kindness takes different forms with different people. The kindness of Colette, who's always saving him, and the kindness of Professor Werkner, who scolds him, are different. Scion has kindness in him too, so even if it's just noblesse oblige, he thinks Julius is amazing and kind. Julius suddenly remembers Anna's words, which makes him freeze for a second, but he quickly gets defensive and asks him what he's talking about all of a sudden. He then tells him that he really is creepy and simply walks away, saying that he's going to rest for a bit. Will easily agrees and thanks him, letting him know that he's going to keep working a little longer. Julius is still a little grumpy and bitter about Will's comment, because he truly believes that kindness doesn't matter at all. Now we see another bit of his memory, where he's still a little kid helping a flurry kitten, carefully tending to its wounds. He hugs the kitten when he's done, and that's when Anna approaches him to say that he's very kind. Julius tells her that he is, because helping the weak is a noble's duty, after all. Anna gently pats his head, and Julius shyly asks her if she likes him this way, to which she replies that she does, and so does everyone else. She then gives him her pendant and fills him with hope, saying that they all love their kind-hearted young master Julius. Despite how that moment felt, Julius later found out that it was all a lie, and he had to see her getting married to someone else, realizing that it didn't matter how kind he was, because he lost her in the end. From that moment on, he has cast aside kindness, convincing himself that selfishness has better benefits. He decided that he'd show off his talents and use others to his advantage, gloating and sneering at the weak. That's a decision he made long ago, but now, as he walks through the residential area on the first floor, he can't stop thinking about Will's words. Julius doesn't want him to look at him the same way Anna did and talk about kindness, because he has no need for it. After all, the Julius Rheinberg who was kind and nothing more is gone now, because he killed him long ago. While he walks away, he doesn't realize that a magic device is tracking him, and Kreutz is watching him from his laboratory. He then orders Charles to contact their fellow colorless, because he has a task for them. In no time, Julius is suddenly attacked, but his reflexes don't fail him, and he manages to block the attack aimed at him with his magic. 3 colorless high mages from the Upper Institute show up, saying that they have orders from the higher-ups. Tony Harvey informs him that they're here to punish the miscreants running amok in their garden and put a stop to their unsightly training. Julius assumes that they just want to get in their way. Also, they won't stand a chance in the next bloom. He reminds them that they're supposed to be members of the tower, but in response, Tony attacks him again with lightning magic and tells him that he can't possibly understand. He explains that they've made it to the tower but can't get anywhere, so he knows nothing of their humiliation as colorless. Julius quickly dodges the attacks, but another one of the high mages, Mary Law, attacks him with fire magic instead, saying that she refuses to remain a mere cog in the tower forever. The third high mage, Oran Cheek, explains that Kreutz told them that if they crush him, he'll send letters of recommendation to every faction for them. Julius is soon cornered by all the simultaneous attacks, realizing that this is the result of cruel rivalry within the tower. In desperation to get out of the graveyard, these wands have abandoned even their pride, but even corrupted, they're still high mages, and since he's been overusing his guardians and Ars Weiss, he doesn't have much magic left. He's already exhausted, and they've also got him outnumbered, so he only has one choice. Julius smiles wickedly and talks to Tony, his senior by only a year, Mary on her high horse, and Oran, who was cocky despite being his underclassman. He mocks them and tells them that after developing new magic and ascending to the tower so quickly, it seems they've become complete failures, so they're now simply former prodigies, which is a really sorry sight. Shackled as tightly as can be by the Upper Institute, he would rather die than end up as fettered trash like them. Tony reminds him that he wasn't scouted either, and he's colorless too. Despite this, Julius only laughs and clarifies that he's Julius Reinberg, so he will use that magically incompetent no talent and whoever else he needs to, all to race up this tower and become Elfaria's successor. And then, from the greatest heights of the tower, he will look down on everyone who abandoned him, and to that end, he'll even use the Magia Vander. Julius lets them know that none of them three are even worth using, and that really infuriates them. Mary tells him that even at school she could never stand him, so she's going to end him now. Tony and Oran decide to do the same, so they all attack him simultaneously with all they've got. Julius simply sees the attack coming at him and confirms that he's not kind, and these people in front of him who hate him are living proof of that. Julius does nothing to defend himself as that destructive magic approaches him, just hoping that Anna can see that he's not kind anymore. Right before the magic hits him, Will suddenly shows up to cut through it with his sword and asks him if he's okay. Julius just stares at him with a blank expression, really shocked to see him there. Will apologizes for taking so long and explains that he was suddenly attacked by high mages, so he thought he might be in danger too. Julius bitterly asks him why he saved him, but the question takes Will by surprise, so he simply reminds him that they saved each other a lot in the dungeon for the all-student praxis, and he's helping him even now. Even so, Julius asks him if he even realizes how dumb he made him look at the Grand Magic Festival. He desperately reminds him that this is all just self-interest, and that he's only using him, yet he still thinks he's kind. Julius clearly doesn't understand any of this, so he asks him if he's daft, but to his surprise, Will simply smiles and tells him that he is, because when people are kind to him, he just can't help liking them, so he's truly a real fool. That only makes Julius remember Anna's words again, because she said that not only her, but everyone else loves the kind-hearted Julius. Not knowing how to react, Julius simply punches Will on the face without thinking, saying that he hates him and that he positively despises him. Tony and the others have no idea what's going on, but they choose to ignore that and prepare to attack again. Will immediately stands on guard and asks Julius to stand back, but Julius only complains and asks him not to order him around. Before the three high mages can launch another attack, they're suddenly surrounded by a ring of fire. The mysterious witch from before scolds them, saying that this isn't how they use magic, and they should have learned that at the academy. She focuses her attention on Will and Julius, introducing herself as Caradwyn, and saying that for that lovely showcase of the springtime of youth, she wants to become their teacher. Julius quickly recognizes that name, because just like the Watchers, she's one of the 7 legends of the academy. Night after night, she abducts students and conducts experiments on them, so she's known as the Witch of the Hammer. Caradwyn assures them that she doesn't do scary things like that, and when she finds students who interest her, she just trains and guides them, just like the two of them. She clarifies that even though they don't know, she's been watching them too for ages. Julius is surprised to know this because he's never once met this witch before. Before he can even question her, Caradwyn uses her magic to capture them and take them with her, saying that they can discuss the details later, because if they stay here, others from the Upper Institute will find them. In the meantime, Iris talks to Elfaria and asks her why she didn't bestow her blessing on Julius Reinberg. She clarifies that when someone as talented as he is lies in obscurity, as a Watcher, she can't overlook that. Elfaria pouts and explains that he said such lewd things like he was going to lay her bare and all that, and he also bullied Will so much. Plus, he revealed her dark past to the entire academy as well, so she can't forgive him. Sarissa easily understands that this is just a personal grudge, but Elfaria ignores her and asks Iris what Aaron thinks of Will. Iris informs her that he wants to let things fall as they may, but he differs from Headmistress Cauldron, and he's not as warm to the idea of a sword joining the wands. However, if the sword means to carve his own path, he will respect that will and strength. Sarissa silently thinks about Will as we, knowing that with the advent of Whis, the tower is split on how to proceed. In the first place, they don't even know what Whis is, and even she doesn't fully understand it. The only thing she knows for sure is that it's a power that could turn the whole world on its head. While it's disrespectful towards Elfaria, Sarissa hasn't decided how they should regard him either. Iris clarifies that in any case, if Will's treatment becomes questionable, as a watcher, she will take guardianship of him, so she doesn't have to worry. Elfaria smiles threateningly and tells her that she really shouldn't sleep talk unless she's asleep. Sarissa senses the sudden tension in the room and remains silent, realizing that thanks to Will, the tower may truly fracture. Later that day, somewhere on the tower's first floor, Caradwyn welcomes Will and Julius to the Witch's Manor, a secret base for single witches. She asks them to sit wherever they want and offers them some dinner, placing everything on the table with her magic. Caradwyn informs them that she made it all herself, but Julius is reluctant about it, so he tells her that they would never eat what some suspicious witch has prepared. Before he can finish his sentence, Will cheerfully thanks her for the meal and starts eating without hesitation. Julius scolds him for trusting her so easily, but Will explains that Kiki said the food is fine, so they don't need to worry. Unable to argue against that, Julius decides to ask what this place even is instead. Caradwyn informs him that it's a hideout Clary secretly built on the first floor, so she's using it with her blessing since she's her apprentice after all. Will is surprised to know that, but it also totally makes sense somehow, so he doesn't question it. Julius agrees, realizing that Clary got that carefree attitude of hers from her mentor. That aside, he goes straight to the point and asks her what she's plotting to use this blockhead for. Will reminds him that she saved both of them, and she says she's Clary's mentor, so he shouldn't be so apprehensive. Julius interrupts him and tells him that he needs to learn to be more wary of people, because this witch could be an assassin from the Upper Institute just putting on a show. And even if she isn't, a mage perfecting their craft never gives away their services for free. Just like the Seven Legends say, she could mean to use them as test subjects. Caradwyn listens to all his ranting and realizes that this certainly is a problem, because being cautious is a sign of a brilliant mage, but this is getting out of hand, so she'll have to do something about it. Just then, Will and Julius are suddenly surrounded by a massive magic barrage, getting trapped in a matter of seconds. She cast all that instantly and with no incantations, and they didn't even see her trigger any of it. Plus, she used bolts of ever element besides light, which means she is a Moltos and has multiple affinities. Caradwyn clarifies that if she was so inclined, she could dominate them in 2 seconds flat. This isn't proof of anything, but she hopes it convinces them, because if she really had any ill intent, they'd have been gobbled up by this scary witch already. That demonstration of power truly shocks them, but Julius is still wary, so he warns her that she must say what she's really up to, and clarifies that he will never allow her to be Will's mentor otherwise. Will looks really happy to see him standing up for him, but Julius immediately yells at him and clarifies that he's the only one who gets to use him, so he shouldn't get the wrong idea. He explains that he won't let someone else just swoop in and steal him, and that's what he's objecting to, but he's not kind in any way, shape, or form. Caradwyn easily understands the situation and decides to tell them the truth, revealing that she knows just the tiniest bit about Wyss, so she may be able to help Will. That is the first reason she appeared before them, and the second reason would be the Upper Institute's fault, because their methods aren't the best, and there are powers there trying to fence Will in. The only possible culprit of that is Kreutz, who is now desperate to find Will after he disappeared. Charles informs him that according to the reports, it appears someone intervened, and both Will and Julius disappeared. Kreutz orders him to begin an exhaustive search right away, because there are no magical signs that anyone has left the first floor, so they must be hiding somewhere. Before doing anything, Charles hesitantly asks him why he would risk Elfaria's animosity just to entrap Will Surfort. Kreutz clarifies that he has no reason to hand such fine material over to those battle-crazed factions. He explains that Wyss should be used efficiently and effectively, just like the Mage Slayer they captured last time. He doesn't know what organization created it, but its potency is magnificent, because even monsters of low intelligence can wield it, and they can be mass-produced. Such a weapon could transform even inept mages into valuable soldiers, so this is where their aspirations should lie. Kreutz clarifies that power comes from numbers, and even efficiency is dictated by numbers. With just the 5 strongest blades, the Celestial host was near unstoppable, so they shouldn't be seeking lone superlatives, but rather a standardized supremacy. Turning Wyss into a power that anyone can use is undoubtedly the challenge before the Upper Institute, and to solve it, Will Surfort's body must be dissected. Charles backs away in fear as Kreutz starts butchering the Mage Slayer's body, covering the floor with blood. None of the factions, not even the Magia Vander, know about this, and they've never seen Kreutz's hidden side. Only Charles knows him as the Mad Dissector, and he knows that if Elfaria ever finds out about this, the Upper Institute would be done for. In no time, Kreutz rips the heart from the Mage Slayer's body, and while it's still beating, crushes it in his hand like it's nothing. He then asks Charles to tell the factions that they will soon have countermeasures against the Mage Slayers, because he understands the principle behind them now, and the next thing he will unravel is Wyss. Back to Caradwyn, she explains that she wanted to watch over them as they went on their own strength, but she can't sit idly by any longer, because she absolutely doesn't want Will to become a test subject. That's why she's decided to lend him her aid, and also because Elfaria begged her to. Now that she's told them everything, Will tells Julius that he wants to trust her, because he feels like she isn't lying, and although it's strange, he also feels like he's known her for a long time. Julius just stares at him for a moment and asks him to do whatever he wants, saying that he can go ahead and switch to someone who he can make more more use of, since that's the whole reason he offered to help him in the first place. Will quickly clarifies that that's not what he's doing here, and he thanks him for being kind to him, but Julius reminds him that he's not kind and he's only being efficient. Despite all their bantering, Cheridwen is glad to see that they're getting along so well now, and she knows that they'll make a wonderful party. She interrupts their discussion to inform them that now that they've reached an agreement, Professor Cheridwen will give them some training to power them up. In order to achieve that, despite how sudden it is, the first thing she asks them to do is to take off their clothes, giving no explanation whatsoever. The next thing we see is that Will is half naked and completely confused, wondering what the point of this is. Cheridwen smiles and assures him that she won't do anything bad, though she can't really hide her excitement. Meanwhile, Julius instantly accuses her of having appalling proclivities, but Cheridwen tells him that he misunderstands her and assures him that this is totally necessary. Will gives up and realizes he doesn't have much of a choice, but Julius continues with his protests and calls her a pervert. However, he instantly goes silent when he sees the giant scar on Will's back, which makes him freeze in place and wonder just how much insanity Will put himself through to ascend to the tower. Cheridwen inspects his body and sees the same scar, so she asks Will where and how he got that scar on his back. Will hesitantly tells her that he thinks he got it while protecting Elfaria when they were little. As soon as she hears that, Cheridwen slaps him hard on the back and tells him that this is probably it in that case. Will just asks her what she's doing, and she explains that she was asserting the location of the lock to open the next door. Cheridwen informs him that she was watching the two of them train, and she thinks focusing on anchoring was a very smart choice. After all, if Will can control the magical energy he anchors, it will lead him to Whis, and that line of thinking is correct. Cheridwen tells Julius that she also thinks it'd be best if he was a little more honest with himself, since he really is brilliant. Julius clarifies that he doesn't need her empty flattery, because he was wrong anyway. Cheridwen assures him he wasn't wrong, because Will actually is the very embodiment of anchoring, and the truth is that he's already cleared the hurdle of storing magical energy, because he has the blood of mages, of wands, running through his veins. However, Will's body is a little bit unique, so he can't expel magical energy from himself, and instead, he greedily hoards it all deep inside. No matter how much his body may scream, he consumes magical energy from without and stores it. Cheridwen lets him know that his assignment now is to learn how to draw on that stored energy at will. In other words, to charge himself on his own. That is the next stage he should try to reach, though Will has no idea how he's going to achieve that, since he thought he needed external spells in order to charge. Cheridwen clarifies that he's right about that, but she explains that it's not all there is to it. As proof, he's activated powers other than the spells he's charged with, so what he'll be doing now is putting that to use. Cheridwen begins to draw a magic circle with her wand, and tells him that by recalling the story of this magic linked through his blood and memories, he'll be able to charge up on his own. Without relying on the magic of others, it will be a new kind of charge, because it'll be the power of emotions. Without wasting any more time, Cheridwen pushes Will inside the magic circle and informs him that starting now, she will pour her power into the lock and guide him to a certain place. There, he must remember his roots, then carve that into his body and engrave the means to recall it. Cheridwen points her wand at Will's scar on his back and recites an oath to hide the forbidden true name of the blade and trace the esteemed bloodline. The magic circle reacts to her oath, and just like that, she opens the lock to Will's memories, activating something called Twarv Historia. Will suddenly sinks into the magic circle, falling through a bottomless hole where he can see all his memories right in front of his eyes. Everything happens too fast, and before he knows it, he wakes up in a colorful field of flowers, wondering what just happened. Just then, he sees Elfaria in her youth, running towards him and asking him if he's alright. She kindly offers him her hand, saying that the forest is dangerous, so they should hold hands while they're here. Will is still trying to process what he's seeing, but Elfaria reassures him with a smile and tells him that she'll protect him. Meanwhile, Julius meets Cheridwen to try and find out what's going on as well, because it's been 4 days since Will lost consciousness already, and he hasn't opened his eyes once. Cheridwen calmly explains that Will is now diving deep into his dreams because her magic has given him an opportunity, and he's in the midst of recalling his past. Julius asks her if remembering things like that is really going to help him obtain this new power she's talking about, but even Cheridwen admits that she's a teensy bit unsure herself, since swords are Finn's jurisdiction. That comment earns her a disapproving look from Julius, but Cheridwen clarifies that she has no intention of disputing Finn's methods. However, when it comes to commanding the heavens, she thinks there are other approaches. Julius has no idea what she's talking about, so Cheridwen explains that history fills their body and the traces of continued relations between wand and sword, so Will must follow them back in time, all the way to his origins. And if possible, she hopes one day he may reach the source. While she patiently waits, Will is still in his dream, trying to figure out why his hands and feet are now small. Elfaria is small too, so he soon realizes that they're both children again, and it's like he's gone back in time. For a moment, he wonders if he's truly in the past, and if Cheridwen's magic can reverse time. He quickly discards the idea, because no matter how amazing her powers may be, no one can travel to the past. That only means that he's being shown the past through something like a vivid dream. While he tries to figure it out, Elfaria desperately tries to get his attention, but she loses her patience and ends up jumping at him, asking him to look at her. With With a sad expression, she asks him if he was thinking of some other girl, because he's always being nice to Claire and the others at home. Will quickly denies it and explains that it's only because he's helping his father, but Elfaria still complains and shouts that she won't forgive him if he cheats on her. Seeing her like this makes Will remember that Elfaria was even more selfish back then than she is now. He doesn't say anything about it though, and simply asks her what he can do so she'll forgive him. Elfaria finally stops screaming and asks him to hug her, so Will quickly complies and pats her head. All of this makes him feel nostalgic, because back then, she was always getting him to soothe her like this. Once she calms down, Elfaria grabs his hand and heads deeper into the forest with him, happily saying that she's refilled on willpower so they can go defeat some monsters now. Will nervously asks her what she means, so Elfaria explains that they say there's a strange monster in the forest and it's causing problems for father, so they must take it down. Will quickly protests, saying that it's dangerous, and even though she's amazing, he can't use magic at all. He suddenly realizes that his voice is coming out on its own, because this is the past, and he's following what he said back then. Elfaria asks him not to worry, and clarifies that she brought the book they both love so much, and just having this fills them with courage. That's why she thinks they'll be just fine, and because she's going to protect him. Just then, Will remembers that the old him was a scaredy cat and a coward, and because he was like that, Elfaria was always protecting him. That makes him wonder when was it that she started depending on him, but he decides to dive deeper into the dream to find out. Elfaria fearlessly guides him through the forest, crossing rivers and using her magic to help them advance. After a while, she decides that it's time for a break and uses some amazing magic she thought up called Iznomi Lazli. The second secret magic that Elfaria invented was a gentle spell that only created ice candies. Will gladly accepts the ice candy she offers him, and Elfaria asks him to keep it a secret from Claire and the others. He then asks her why she gives him so many ice candies, and she explains that it's because he's always sharing his food with everyone at the orphanage. She also mentions that if he eats lots of them, then he'll be full of her somehow. Will accepts that explanation without questioning her, so Elfaria decides to read the book, saying that they must fill themselves with powerful energy before their adventure. Will remembers that book very well, a book named The Adventures of Damne. Elfaria really loved it, and it was why they made a promise to see the sunset together, so the book was precious to them. Elfaria happily reads the book, in which the mean witch said that this crimson treasure, more beautiful than any other in the world, didn't exist, and all of it was just blatant lies. The impertinent hero then replied that the sky was just in a bad mood, and when he drew his sword, the gray sky split, revealing the most beautiful crimson in the world. Will remembers the story, but when he sees the illustration in the book, he realizes that the impertinent hero sort of looks like Finn. Elfaria continues reading, saying that the witch cried, captivated by a sunset unmatched by any treasure. Will listens to the rest of the story, convincing himself that he's probably imagining it. Elfaria soon realizes that he's falling asleep, so she closes the book and decides to let him use her lap as a pillow. Will gladly accepts, enjoying this peaceful everyday life with just them two, and wanting to go back to that. He wonders if it's wrong to feel that way, but he chooses to just enjoy the moment while he can. While he sleeps with his head resting on Elfaria's lap, she suddenly begins to lean closer to him. That confuses him a little, because he doesn't remember anything like this, and he doesn't know what she's trying to do. He panics a little when he realizes Elfaria is trying to kiss him on the lips, but right before their lips meet, he finally wakes up, immediately startling her and making her pull away at once. Completely clueless, he simply greets her with a smile and asks her what she was doing. Elfaria nervously makes up an excuse and tells him that he had something on his face, so she was going to take it off for him, and that's all it was. Will notices that she's talking weirdly, so Elfaria quickly changes the subject and grabs his hand, saying that they should get going already, because it's time to protect the peace of the forest. Now that he knows what actually happened, Will doesn't know how he'll face Elfaria the next time he sees her, but he decides not to give it much thought for now. However, as they get deeper into the forest, the scenery eventually shifts, and Will's colorful dream turns very dark at some point. Elfaria continues walking and mentions that there is war in this place called Regarden, and they say bad people and monsters are running from there. That's why the monsters came to the forest from Regarden and are doing bad things. As she speaks, Will starts to remember some things, like the fact that 10 years ago, he and Elfaria came to this forest behind the orphanage on their own. It was just the two of them, even though the orphanage director said they shouldn't go there. Will knows that they shouldn't be there, but he chooses to blindly trust Elfaria, fully believing that she can handle it. He's certain they had this conversation, but his memory of what comes next is hazy. Will's dream starts to get distorted, as he realizes he doesn't know what happened after this. The memory is distorted into black and white, but everything regains color after a monster suddenly attacks them. That's when Will and Elfaria see something resembling a wolf, but the crystal in its body makes her think it's a crystal monster. However, with just a glance, Will knows that it isn't actually a monster, and he now knows that it's a mage-created creature that has been injured. He wonders if it could really be a solitary unit that fled the war, but the beast doesn't give him much time to think about it. As soon as they hear its angry roar, Elfaria jumps into action and fearlessly steps forward to protect Will, saying that she will kill this thing because she's thought up an amazing magic. Just then, she uses Ars Vice, creating several clones of herself as she confidently says that they'll beat that monster up. Will realizes that she's multicasting Ars twice, and he's surprised to see that she has had this level of control since she was a child. That reinforces the idea of Elfaria being so amazing to him, but for some reason, the dream continues getting slightly distorted as he remembers, and he feels uneasy despite how confident she seems. Elfaria and her clones prepare a spell, planning to attack the monster all at once. However, as soon as they launch the attack, all the ice spears stop mid-air due to an invisible barrier, and only then Will reacts, immediately asking her to run. Before Elfaria can move, all the ice spears bounce back at her, destroying each one of her clones in a matter of seconds. One of the ice spears pierces Will's stomach, and he finally understands that that creature has the special ability to reflect magic. Despite his own wound, he desperately worries for Elfaria and asks her to run while she can. Elfaria is still in shock, pointing her wand at the monster as she convinces herself that it doesn't hurt and that she's not scared because she's going to take it down and because she's going to protect Will. Will freezes in place, realizing that he can't move, and it's his fault that Elfaria is in this situation. Full of frustration, he desperately tries to bring himself to move, knowing that the version of him always being saved by Elfaria is who he hates more than anything. After a lot of effort, Will manages to snap back to reality and immediately runs towards Elfaria right after she casts another spell, jumping in front of her to protect her from her own magic being reflected at her. One of the ice spears she casts pierces his back, and the side of his arm is also injured. Elfaria screams in horror as soon as she sees him in that state, and she desperately asks him to stay with her, not wanting him to die. Just then, Will finally remembers that he protected Elfaria and then lost consciousness. However, that still leaves him with several questions, because he doesn't know what happened after that, and it makes him wonder who could have rescued Elfaria, considering how dangerous that creature was. Suddenly, the image of a mysterious witch appears before his eyes, and he hears her voice asking him to awaken. An intense light then comes out of the wound on his back, and Will's body starts feeling hot, like he's going to explode. That's the moment he realizes he's turning into a sword, and it makes him remember that there is more to the story, and that this adventure was the beginning of the sword. Elfaria stares at him in shock, not knowing what's going on, but Will's body moves on its own, and he simply creates an ice sword, fully charged with Elfaria's magic, the one he absorbed from the ice spear. Just like that, he uses Terra's Whisk for the very first time, which allows him to cut the monster's arm off with only a swing of his sword. As he fights that monster, Will finally understands why. Back then, he thought this power was unstoppable. It's because he knew what Elfaria's power had created, and he knew this mage blade already. The monster suddenly stops his blade, so Elfaria immediately jumps to his side to fight it with him. The scenery in his dream becomes a full-color image again, as if the last piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. With their magic combined, Will and Elfaria manage to defeat the monster together, and they fall back into that field of flowers he saw at the beginning. Elfaria smiles at him and tells him that this is his magic, and even though Will wasn't conscious to hear her words, he now knows that this was his beginning, and these precious feelings are something he won't forget again. Now that he's seen this, he'll always remember this bond he has with Elfaria. Just like that, he finally opens his eyes back into reality, and the first thing he sees is a very concerned Julius, who asks him to hurry up and informs him that he's been asleep for 6 whole days. He urgently tells him that the second bloom is about to start, so they don't have any time to waste. Will spaces out for a moment, trying to process the dream he just had, so Julius loses his patience and asks him if he's even listening to him. Chiridwen calmly asks him if he managed to grasp the nature of what's inside him, and if he thinks he'll be able to recall the paths he's walked. Will smiles, now fully certain that he can, so he confidently tells her that he can do that anytime, so he's ready for the second bloom. With that clear, Julius immediately throws his uniform at him, and Chiridwen asks him to go and write a new story. Before the second bloom, we see Elfaria in her room, holding on to a Will plushie as she thinks about Colette's words. Colette had said that she hated the Magia Vander, because due to the spell Albus Vina cast, Will is always chasing after her, yet she doesn't do a thing, and she's merely waiting in the tower. Colette feels sorry for Will because of that, but Elfaria knows that she's right, and she knows that she put a spell on Will. Because of that curse she cast, Will has been wounded and suffered so much, ever since those tears that started it all during their promise. Elfaria can't help but wonder just how much she has made him cry, and it makes her question her decisions. She wonders if she should have gone on a rampage instead, or if she should have run away and pretended not to know anything, just to go and hold him in her arms. Through a letter, Will lets her know that she's got it all wrong, and he assures her that he doesn't hate her at all. In fact, he thinks it's his fault she's all alone, and if he were to hate anyone, it would be himself, the no-talent Will Surfort. That's why he must be quick and hurry where she is, because he wants to stand beside her and fulfill their precious promise. Elfaria writes a letter for him as well, saying that it's because he says things like that, and because he smiles at her even when they're apart, that she decided to hold herself back and endure this. All so that she wouldn't break their promise, and she could say that she's waited for him. She admits that there have been times she secretly pulled some strings, like when she desperately asked Chiridwen for help to guide him. However, she knows that he's been faithfully chasing after her, so she's been wondering what is there she can do for him because she wants to be of help to him. Somewhere in the tower, Colette is sure that Elfaria is thinking something like that because she's just a Magia Vander with a head full of flowers. The night before the second bloom, Colette meets Professor Werkner and tells him that she wants to help Will too, though he just tells her that in this state, he's impressed she'd say someone someone else has a head full of flowers. Colette instantly goes silent, so Werkner speaks to the rest of them, because they were accepted by factions, but they've gone and snuck out of the tower for this either way. Wignall explains that he doesn't want to leave Will yet, so his own position is of secondary importance. Lihanna can barely stay conscious, so Sion asks her what's going on with her, since she's acting strangely. She simply asks him not to worry and explains that she merely fled the faction as though her life depended on it. As soon as she finishes her sentence, her body simply gives out, so Colette catches her before she hits the ground. Werkner can see that everyone is worried about Will, so he lets them know that the Witch of the Hammer is on the move, so if they leave things to her, Will and Julius are going to be just fine. Lihanna instantly recognizes the name, knowing that he's talking about the one from the 7 legends of the Academy. Colette quickly protests, saying that they can't just leave this to someone else, and she tells Werkner that she knows he's worried about Will too. After all, he keeps visiting the tower like a long-distance wife, even if he gets turned away at the gate. Werkner scolds her and asks her to not say it in a way that invites misunderstanding, and he questions how she even knows about that in the first place. Colette tells him that Clary saw everything and told her afterwards, so Werkner just complains about that classmate of his. That aside, Colette clarifies that they want to help Will as well, but this time, Sion intervenes and tells her that there's no need to take action. Wignall asks him if he didn't come here so that he could help rescue Will, but Sion clarifies that he only came to ensure that they didn't do anything unnecessary and to keep an eye on them. He reminds them that Will was told over and over it couldn't be done, but he's come this far already. Even when he wasn't watching, Will clumsily clawed his way through and overcame every hurdle. That's why he knows that all they need to do right now is wait, because he will overcome this too. Besides, if someone swoops in now, he won't be able to show off what he can do, not as a mage, but as a man. Thanks to Sion's words, Colette and the others decide to refrain from doing anything until the second bloom. Now all the Magiavander and high mages from all factions observe the remaining students who are still trying to show off their skills in this second opportunity they've been given. After defeating some monsters, Emma Clever receives the Blessing of Wind, getting accepted into the Wind faction. Mike Myas is recruited by the Dark faction, while Lyral Mars and Gordon Valley are accepted in the Fire faction, where Sion is waiting, glad to see that they finally made it. Clary congratulates them all, saying that everyone who has received a blessing must report to their respective factions. Kreutz observes everything with a disapproving expression, saying that while increasing their numbers is necessary, each faction's standards for acceptance are far too lax, considering those so-called mages are fresh out of the academy. Zio reminds him that that's not what's happening here, and Eleanor explains that after the Terminalia incident, those overlooked by their scouts have become more adaptable, though from her perspective they're still of an inferior race. Carriot clarifies that each of them has transformed the unknown into the known, so he knew pushing them to the brink was good. Leaving that aside, Clary mentions that the second bloom is about to come to an end, but Will and Julius haven't arrived yet. Colette and the others get worried, because at this rate, they'll end up disqualified. Kreutz quickly speaks up and says that any more of this would be a simple waste of time, and it's likely they failed to form a plan, fell into despair, and ran away. Clary gets a little irritated and asks him how he can say that when he's the one standing in their way. Kreutz ignores her and tells them that those who'd flee this hell of diligence have no right to ascend the tower, so the Upper Institute will take guardianship of them. He asks Elfaria if she has any objections, but she simply ignores him and continues calmly waiting for Will. A few seconds later, both Will and Julius finally arrive, apologizing for being late. Colette and the others are relieved that they got to the second bloom in time, but Elfaria simply smiles, because she never doubted them for a minute. Kreutz gets irritated, wondering how a mere lab rat could dare cause such unnecessary trouble. Without wasting another second, he sends 3 Wars Oozes to them, saying that the selection requirements are the same as last time, because Will's qualification as a wand is in question. All the Magiavander are fine with this decision, and Will accepts the challenge as well, feeling ready to overcome this. Julius silently wonders if he'll truly be alright, because after all of that, he still hasn't the faintest idea if he can actually control Whis now. For a moment, he wonders if it would be better if he lent him his magic without getting caught. Before he can do anything, Julius suddenly receives a blessing from Elfaria, who asks him to go to her faction and not try anything. Julius wasn't expecting such a thing, so he's clearly surprised, but Elfaria smiles at him and thanks him for lending Will his power. She then tells him that he should believe in Will too, and simply trust him right now. Having no other choice, Julius walks towards Elfaria, but before leaving, he tells Will that if he wastes all the hard work he put in, he'll never forgive him. Will genuinely thanks him and then puts his goggles on, asking Elfaria to wait for him. Caradwen observes everything from a distance, knowing that, through her magic, the path to Whis should already be open, so he should understand the process now, and she hopes he can show her a brand new world for a sword. As soon as the test begins, the first thing Will does is picture that book from his childhood in his mind. He flips through the pages to remember the exact moment he used Whis for the first time to save Elfaria, retracting the path he's traveled to reach today and recalling the fragments he needs now. By doing that, he manages to activate Terrace Whis on his own, and unlike before, this time he uses a memory charge to reload. Just like the first time, only one of his eyes turns blue, and his sword transforms into a mage blade imbued with ice magic. Kreutz can't believe what he's witnessing, because he had no idea Will was able to produce Whis Whis on his own. Will only thinks about Elfaria because she cast a spell on him, but he doesn't think it was a curse. After all, it's something they initiated together, the spell known as a promise. Right now she feels like she hasn't been able to do anything, so she might have come to hate herself. However, Will thinks that's not right at all, because she's given him so much, and she's given him infinite courage, so here at the end, he wants to hold out, and he wants to try to look good. Up to today, Elfaria has given him so much, and now he wants to come to her. With that in mind, Will launches the first strike, and with only a swing of his sword, he defeats the first of the war's oozes with ease. Sarissa is surprised to see how strong he is, and Guilford admits that he seems weaker than when he charges it from an external source, but Cariot thinks that even so, its destructive power exceeds that of intermediate-level magic. Will makes sure to keep Whis activated as he chases after the other war's oozes, knowing that he must put his feelings into it and pour them into his sword. Just like that, he defeats the second monster, and Zio even slams his fist against his seat with excitement, saying that he really likes this. Caradwen also approves Will's performance, and while she keeps watching the fight, Finn suddenly approaches her. He mentions that since it was she who sent Will up to the tower, he's respected her wishes and merely observed, but she's done very well. When he greets her, he calls her Caradwen, but Finn quickly corrects himself and calls her by her real name, revealing that she's the Magical Academy headmistress Cauldron. She doesn't correct him, but she asks him to call her Caradwen when she's in this form, because casting aging magic on herself is exhausting. After all, the truth is she's actually still young and perky. Caradwen also reminds him that this place is forbidden to anyone other than mages, but Finn only laughs and tells her that it's a little late to point that out. She clarifies that she knows he's been working behind the scenes too, because it was him who gave the dwarves that rare Whis gem. Finn doesn't deny it and explains that Will is a new user of the fifth element, so she could look the other way over such a small present. Will's capacity is still developing, and as reloading with his own power goes, his energy amplification is still sloppy. However, with Whist set silver reinforcement, it works more than well enough. Caradwen admits that when it comes to using a mage blade, Will's been too green thus far, and with his hair turning white and his loss of memory, he paid a heavy price. But now, after 6 years of growing at the academy, she can finally teach him all sorts of things. Finn just wonders if Will is going to be the one to show them the unknown Caradwen seeks, and he can't wait to find out. As they speak, Will chases after the last of the war's oozes without a rest, and in no time, he completely defeats it with his own power. Kreutz obviously doesn't accept this result, even though everyone else does, so he simply freaks out. Will notices that his sword has reverted to its original form, and he realizes that when he fuels it himself, the energy depletes far faster than a regular charge, so he needs to use it carefully. Kreutz tells everyone that they can't acknowledge him yet, because they can't call something like that magic. Clary complains and tells him that he's just nitpicking now, but Kreutz clarifies that if this unknown can't be explained, then he shouldn't be allowed to call himself a mage. He also mentions that there's a possibility that the sword is a magic item, and during a bloom, equipment other than wands is strictly forbidden. Even if they establish that he hasn't violated the rules, there is still a need to carefully examine Will Surfort. Some of the high mages kind of agree with him, and either way, they know it's true that there is no precedent for this, so they must be cautious as they get to the bottom of it. Julius can't believe that Will has come this far, and they're still arguing, but Sarissa explains that it shows just how much of an outlier they find him to be. Even the high mages of each faction can't decide how to handle him, so the only ones who can bring this place under control are those who stand at the pinnacle of the tower, the Magia Vander. However, with Will Surfort and Elfaria as good as family, it's certain that anything she does would be seen as favoritism. Sarissa can hear the ice crackling around Elfaria, so she wonders if there's any way to make an ally of another Magia Vander before she explodes. Zio suddenly steps forward, saying that talking is pointless, and if they want to see the truth of this guy, there's a simple way to do it. He tells Will that he only has to show him he can take one hit from him, and if he can make it through this, he'll serve as his proof. Will freezes in place when he realizes Zio is casting a super abbreviated chant, a low-level lightning spell. Elfaria immediately panics and asks Will to run, but Zio doesn't give him any time and casts Zalgia Saga, launching a powerful lightning bolt directly at him. Will only sees the lighting approaching him, and he knows that there's no way to block something like that, and no way to evade it, which means he'll be obliterated. In order to survive, there is only one thing he can try. Everyone stands in shock after witnessing the explosion created by the attack, while Elfaria screams in horror when she realizes Will couldn't escape. However, when the smoke disperses, Will is still standing, activating Zalgia Whis and transforming his sword into a lightning mage blade. No one understands what happened, but Finn proudly explains that Will ate the magic. The moment it struck, he charged his sword with it to have the impact, but of course he couldn't absorb all of it, so some of Zio's colossal lightning scorched his insides. Even so, he has shown that he can withstand a kill shot he could neither block nor evade. Zio laughs manically after he realizes Will survived a hit from him, clearly pleased with the result. He tells everyone that they all saw that Will took a shot from a Magia Vander and he's still standing, and there's no better proof than that. Just like that, Zio acknowledges Will and tells him that he doesn't belong at the bottom, so he must make his way to the top. Kreutz still tries to protest at this point, saying that the Bloom is a solemn event where factions are decided, so they can't advance via a method like this. Zio Zio interrupts him and appears right by his side in a second, saying that he can take a shot from him too, because there's no way Will can do it, and he can't. Kreutz immediately backtracks in fear, and he has no choice but to acknowledge Will Surfort's right to be here. With that, Clary finally announces that Will is officially eligible to be recruited into a faction. Without wasting any time, Elfaria runs straight towards Will and holds him in a hug, tearing up and telling him that she's glad. She apologizes for being unable to do anything, but Will asks her not to apologize, wanting her to smile instead, because he's finally here, where she's waited for him all this time. Elfaria stops crying the moment she remembers their promise, and realizes that Will kept his word. He promised that one day he'd make it to the tower to be by her side so they could go see the sunset together. Now that he's here, Elfaria finally tells him that she's been waiting for him for so long. Seeing the heartwarming reunion, Clary knows that there's no need to, but she still asks Will what faction he'll join. Before Will can say anything, Zio suddenly yanks him away from Elfaria and clarifies that he'll take him. Elfaria can barely contain her rage as she asks him if he can read the room, calling him a fool, a thief, a paramour, heretic, and a criminal as well. She continues insulting him non-stop and asks him if he wants to be frozen and destroyed. Meanwhile, Will tries to make her calm down, but every time he tries to say that he wants to join Elfaria's faction, he receives an electric shock from Zio. After the third electric shock, Will passes out, unable to say what he wants, so Zio speaks for him and says that he apparently wants to join his faction. Elfaria asks him to release Will, but Zio doesn't budge, and everyone else can only witness what's going on. Colette doesn't understand the situation, so Rose explains that it's like a headhunting thing. As soon as she hears that, Colette excitedly asks her if the Earth faction can get in on this too, since Will is really amazing. She quickly clarifies that it's not because she wants to be with him in the tower or anything, but Rose easily sees through her lie and asks her to calm down. Elfaria asks Zio what he's trying to do, because he was never one to try to scout him. Zio tells her that he simply decided he wants Will, and that's about all. He explains that his personal code is that one cannot shackle desire, so whether it's riches, alcohol, women, or guys, if he wants them, he just takes them. Everyone there collectively realizes that he's truly a barbarian, but Elfaria doesn't back down either. She uses Ars Weiss to appear right next to Will and hold him, saying that Will is the one thing she doesn't intend to cede to anyone, and if anyone gets in her way, she'll pulverize them. Now we go back 2 years in time to see what each one of the Magia Vander truly think about Zio. Eleanor just thinks he's an animal, and arrogant for a barbarian, uneducated, without a shred of substance to him. Just the sight of him makes her want to vomit, but she keeps herself at bay, even when Zio suddenly decides to confront Aaron Masterius, the most powerful of the wands. Without hesitation, Zio points his weapon at Aaron's face, saying that the dwarves are useful, so there is no reason not to add them as part of the tower. Cariat reminds him that they are people who can't use magic, but Zio tells him that they aren't incompetent despite that, and if they trust them enough to dig holes, they'd be far more useful running wild in the dungeon. Zio warns Aaron that if his ludicrous pride keeps him from making use of them, then he'll be the one to do it. After all, watching the world fall because they didn't tap their resources wouldn't be any fun. Before making any brash decision, Zio asks him if there is some other reason for this. However, even with the threat of lightning right on his face, Aaron just says that he will not tell him. Just like that, Zio lowers his weapon and walks away, but Eleanor gets irritated by his behavior and asks him what he's trying to do by lowering his weapon so quickly, wanting to know if all of that just now was merely a hollow bluff. Zio clarifies that Aaron didn't say that there was no reason, or even that he couldn't tell him. He simply said he won't tell him, which means now isn't the time to lay it all out in the open. Eleanor doesn't say a word after that, and despite her thoughts on Zio, she admits that occasionally his instincts are oddly accurate. Zio states that if this is to help annihilate the celestial host, then he'll pipe down, but if they can't take them down, that's where he draws the line. Without another word, he simply leaves the room, and Eleanor still thinks that making that animal sit and stay is a heavy task even for the supreme throne. Meanwhile, Cariat thinks Zio's manner is rather too provocative for the magical world, so after the meeting, he approaches him to tell him that he's gone too far this time, and his defiance of Aaron makes him doubt his sanity. Zio just scoffs and clarifies that he could say the same to him, because he knows that they'll lose if they keep going like this, so he doesn't understand why he won't change. If they hold him back, common practices and systems are just dead weight, especially this worth system mages have. Cariat tiredly tells him that he must be more self-aware as a Magia Vander, since he already explained this to him just recently. Zio boldly states that he only cares if he wants it or doesn't, because that's all life is about to him. Deep down, Cariat admits that Zio's way of living exhausts him, but also makes him the tiniest bit envious. Still, all he tells him is that it's so nice that idiots don't need to think at all, but Zio clarifies that they all just think too much, so he'll move as his desires dictate. Cariat just walks away, knowing that an idiot with no power is simply a foolish commoner, but an idiot with power is exceedingly dangerous. On the other hand, Elfaria simply thinks that it's fine enough when he's an ally, but when he becomes an enemy, the Lightning Lord's wand, Thorsius Fash, turns into the worst kind of obstacle, just like he's doing right now. Back to the present time, Zio takes Elfaria's threat as a challenge and tells her that Will belongs to the winner, so there can't can't be any complaints after that. Elfaria accepts without hesitation, but Clary starts getting worried, because a duel between Magia Vander is just insane. She asks the others if they can stop them, but Carriot assures her that it would be pointless, and even if they were to intervene, it would only delay the issue. Eleanor agrees, but she also mentions that if that shiftless woman and the barbarian were to kill each other, it would actually reduce her heartburn. With that, Clary quickly understands that they're not going to do a thing about this, so they all can just sit and watch as this madness unfolds. Elfaria calmly approaches Sarissa, handing Will's body to her and asking her to look after him in the meantime. Before Sarissa can question her, Elfaria simply disappears, letting her know it was just a clone, because the real one has her eyes set on her opponent. Everyone around starts to realize that they're serious about this, and they can't believe that something this ridiculous has them like this, when they're the apex of the magical world. Finn, on the other hand, isn't surprised at all, so he just decides to watch the whole thing next to Caradwyn. Without wasting any time, Elfaria asks what's the sign, but Zio tells her that there's no need, so she can just bring it. Meanwhile, Julius quickly tries to bring Will back to his senses, saying that this is no time to be sleeping and he has to wake up. Just then, a blast of ice is fired behind him, and he soon realizes it's just Elfaria activating El Glace Fros, L7, Fruz El Cardinea. In a matter of seconds, a whole ice palace is lifted in the middle of the arena, and most of the people witnessing this can't believe that she began with something like that. Elfaria rises on a pillar of ice, but Zio appears right behind her in less than a second, asking her what she's aiming at. With no hesitation, he uses all his lightning power against her in a single shot, not giving her time to dodge. Julius gets genuinely concerned for a moment, but he soon finds out that it wasn't actually Elfaria, but one of her clones. Zio also realizes this right away, and he notices just then that he's actually surrounded by Elfaria, because each one of her clones are standing atop the pillars around the ice castle. Julius is clearly confused by this, because he doesn't even know when she cast Ars Weiss. Sarissa lets him know that she did it in the beginning, with Cardinea, the moment Zio's vision was obstructed. Elfaria's activation speed is the fastest in the tower, and as for ruthlessness with her foes, she is also the preeminent Magia Vander. Everyone is shocked to see Zio getting cornered like that, and Elfaria warns him that she will never let him have Will. All of her clones cast countless simultaneous spells, creating sharp ice spears in a matter of seconds and shooting them right at him. Sion is surprised that she's attacking with rapid fire with no incantation, and with a high-level spell whose incantation would be more than 10 verses. Julius also can't believe what he's witnessing, because back on floor 11, he struggled so hard to cast that, and she just instantly did it in a second. After that massive attack, Elfaria uses Reveal Calantibium, Stellus Natia, a hail of attacks alongside her doubles in a heavy barrage. Carriot sees this and mentions that she seems to be doing as she pleases even more than usual today. Logwell admits that her might has always lain in projectile speed and accuracy, so as one would expect, Elfaria has the advantage in a long-range casting fight. Despite this, Finn knows that she's up against another monster, so it won't be that simple. Zio easily withstands that massive attack, and he then uses Valganflude to crush all of Elfaria's clones in a second. With that, he finally finds the last one, which can only be the real Elfaria, so he approaches her from behind before she can react and casts Zalgia Saga. As soon as he does, Zio realizes she's a clone too, and the real one is even higher than that. Caradwyn understands that all the attacking and defending up to this point was to allow Elfaria to escape upward, which will allow her to hammer down her true attack. Finn also mentions that she did it while maintaining a double so accurate it passed as a Magia Vander. Elfaria smiles at Zeo, asking him if he had fun playing dollies with her. Without wasting more time, she casts Grand Glast, Dodecra, activating chained circles all around the ice palace. Zeo already knows what's coming, so he admits that she did pretty good and doesn't move to dodge the attack. As soon as Elfaria launches the attack, some of the factions have to put up a barrier to protect themselves. Rose quickly understands that Elfaria made use of her destroyed doubles to multiply the force of her attack, and she thinks even a Magia Vander would have been blown away by that. However, Zio is still on his feet, completely unharmed, and he tells Elfaria that playing with dolls isn't satisfying at all. He finally pulls out his weapon and launches it right at her, and even though Elfaria dodges it, it allows him to reach her in no time. Now that he's higher than her, he uses his bare fist to send her straight to the ground. Elfaria manages to land safely, but Zio moves faster than lightning and appears right behind her to give her a blow on her back, this time combining it with his lightning magic. Elfaria spits out blood, and her body is sent flying across the arena, breaking through her own ice palace like a projectile. Sarissa screams in horror, but Zio has no mercy and tells Elfaria that he'll be taking that guy off her hands. He uses simultaneous spells to destroy the ice palace in a matter of seconds, forcing her into an up-close fight. Colette doesn't understand what's going on, so she asks Lihanna if he has close-quarters combat magic like her. Lihanna denies it and clarifies that he's simply letting his magical energy spill forth. Gil confirms it and asks her to look closely, saying that that's the ideal they and the Lightning faction should strive to emulate. Even without relying upon casting techniques, by just pouring out his magical energy, Zio leaves everything else in the dust. Gil explains that it is merely a form of travel for him, but the awe and dread it inspires have earned it the name Lightning Strike. Zio's lightning lightning strike surpasses even the speed of Elfaria's magic, and such an absolute monstrous aptitude cannot be gauged with reason alone. Zio wastes no time and casts Valgnar Donner, transforming his weapon into a giant lightning warhammer. Elfaria still hasn't recovered from that last attack, so since she can't stand on her feet yet, she can only try to defend herself with ice spears. Zio's warhammer easily turns them to dust either way, so when he lunges at her, Elgaria casts Frawl to create several ice walls between them. Despite all her efforts, Zio easily breaks through them, so she has no choice but to fly away at high speed to avoid his lightning. While they fight, Caradwen asks Finn who he thinks will win, and without a doubt, he tells her that it'll be Zio. After all, if Elfaria, who created 12 new spells, is a genius in spellwork, then Zio is a mighty figure in praxis. Zio easily catches up and realizes that she's just another double, but Elfaria takes the opportunity and casts Zelunia Collis, creating a huge ice sphere that crushes them both. Only her double is destroyed by that, because Zio easily breaks through the ice and walks towards her, saying that crafty sleight of hand is the one thing she's good at, since he didn't even notice when she switched places. Elfaria is clearly exhausted at this point, but she continues creating doubles with Ars Vice, desperately trying to defend herself as she flees. Despite all her efforts, Zio relentlessly chases after her, destroying all the doubles in his way. Finn continues watching and mentions that the deepest dungeon floor Zio has reached is floor 48, second only to Eren, so his abilities are far too specialized toward actual combat. He's a wand, but his natural state is very close to that of a sword, so Finn personally thinks that joining his faction would serve Will better. Carriot mentions that a long-range fight is one thing, but in close combat, Zio's strategies rise to the top, so this already has been decided. Eleanor is not happy about the situation in the slightest, so Filvis asks Lafia if she knows why she's sulking like that. Lafia explains that while it may only have been in ice magic, Eleanor was soundly defeated by Albusvina, so she doesn't want her to win, but she also doesn't want her to lose. Eleanor easily loses her composure and asks them to be silent, clearly irritated. Meanwhile, Elfaria is already reaching her limit, so Julius desperately continues trying to make Will react, because if he doesn't wake up, then Elfaria is going to lose. Julius violently shakes Will's body and tells him that if there's anything that might give her strength, his voice is all they've got. Will doesn't wake up yet, but Julius's insistence somehow makes him react, so even in his sleep, he murmurs Elfaria's name. That alone is enough to make Elfaria react, and just before Zio can finish her, she turns the ground under his feet into ice and manages to make a clean cut on his face. The attack was so fast that nobody really saw what happened, so Caradwen tells Finn that this isn't over, because Elfaria is exactly like Will. Despite how beaten she is, Elfaria holds on to Will's goggles and tells Zio that she won't give him up, because she would never give her Will to the likes of him. Zio gets fired up and tells her that this is the first time he's seen her boiling over like this, so he wants to know what's driving her to go this far. To his surprise, Elfaria tells him that it's love, because Will protected her, he pursued her, and he has always held fast to the promise they made together. That's why this time it's her turn to do the same, and her love for Will never lose to anything. Zio quickly understands that that's her desire, so he asks her to show him that ridiculous power. While he prepares to lunge at her, Finn mentions that Zio's lightning strike is supernaturally swift. He passes electric current through his whole body, enhancing his movement and reaction speed, so when he attacks, mages are unable to cope. However, if the entirety of his accelerated lightning strike gets frozen, none of that matters. Just like that, when Zio approaches Elfaria with his lightning strike, she casts El Glacifros, El10, Mirdas Fridoliet. Right before he can reach her, that spell encloses Zio in an ice sphere, stopping him completely. Elfaria then explains that the conditions to activate it are most taxing, so this is her secret weapon. Within its area of effect, once she expends half of her magical energy, she can finally create this barrier of frost and snow. The fact that she has to fire off so many spells is a drawback, and the truth is this magic was meant to trap shy little Will so that she could hug him, but now that she's used it, she won't hesitate to pulverize Zio. Everyone soon realizes that Elfaria's barrage of advanced magic was all to prepare that barrier, and Eleanor admits that this secret play of hers completely shut down her magic as well. She explains that the closer one approaches, the harder the freezing takes hold, so it prevents all movement, and Zio's speed was turned against him. Now that Zio is trapped, Elfaria makes him know that Will is hers and hers alone, and with a blow on his face, she sends him flying across the arena. Julius continues shaking Will's body, saying that Elfaria fired back at Zio, so he has to wake up now. Will finally opens his eyes just then, but just when they thought it was over, they hear Zio's incantation echoing throughout the arena. Zio rises to his feet, and the moment Carriot realizes he's actually using an incantation, he knows that he must be serious about this. Eleanor can barely contain her rage, because that barbarian has no concept of measured retaliation at all. With only a word, Lafia and Filvis already know what they have to do, so they follow her command and disappear in an instant. Everyone soon realizes the gravity of the situation when they see the lightning storm approaching, and understand that Zio used something even greater than advanced magic, prime magic. Of course, Elfaria responds the same way, so they both use incantations and prepare a powerful spell to land a decisive strike. Zio attacks Elfaria as the long incantation continues, moving from place to into place and doing everything at the same time. Filvis and Lafia observe them and understand that Zio is doing concurring incantation, but they didn't think he'd even steal secret arts from the elves. Elfaria uses Ars Vice to defend herself with her doubles as she continues with her incantation, not letting him find where she really is. Julius quickly understands that her doubles are picking up the incantation to keep the spell going while Elfaria moves around, which is the technique he learned against the Grand Duke. Will finally wakes up completely, but he's very confused to see Elfaria fighting like that. While Zeo continues his incantation, giant claws come out of the dark clouds above. At the same time, Elfaria finishes her own incantation, and two wings of frozen air appear in the sky as she summons her guardian. Both Zeo and Elfaria add words to their incantations to make them stronger, and when they're finally done, two guardians come down from the sky. Will tries to stop Elfaria, but it is already too late, and her guardian rises above her with sharp ice wings. Zeo pronounces the name of his guardian, calling it Virgus Argo Thorzeus. Elfaria introduces her own guardian as well, calling it Glacia Last Albus. Without waiting another second, both Filvis and Lafia cast Dio Grail, lifting a powerful barrier to protect everyone around from what's coming. As soon as they do that, Elfaria and Zeo's guardians clash against each other with all their might. The impact of the collision between these guardians is so strong that the sound of an explosion resonates throughout the whole tower and the ground surrounding it, making the ground shake. It even reaches the academy, where Werkner gets concerned as soon as he learns the explosion came from inside the tower. Both he and Edward know very well that the only ones capable of something like that are the Magia Vander, and they're not far from the truth. The students around the arena are surprised that they're alive after such a thing, because they honestly thought they were going to breathe their last. Will immediately runs to check on Elfaria, only to find her completely beaten among the rubble. To his surprise, Zeo is in the same state, admitting that it was a draw and that she really knows how to fight. Even in his current condition, Zeo stands back up, saying that the attack ate up all his magical energy, but he's still ready to go, and he knows it's the same for her. Elfaria confirms it and instantly stands on her feet, not ready to ever give up on Will. Both of them wield their magic staffs and immediately lunge at each other to continue their fight. However, this time, before they can reach each other, both Cariot and Eleanor stand in the way, saying that it's enough. Elfaria asks Eleanor to move out of the way, but Eleanor informs her that she's out of time, and she admits that it honestly would have been more convenient if they'd accidentally killed each other. Zeo asks them to get lost, but Cariot clarifies that he was kind enough to stand by and watch, and if they couldn't settle things, then that's on him. Besides, when the Sovereign speaks, even he will have to listen. As soon as he says that, both Zeo and Elfaria realize that Aaron Masterias has decided to show up personally, just to order them to stop. He tells them that he will not permit any further clashing between two Magia Vander, but Zeo clearly isn't happy about this, and even Elfaria protests, saying that no amount of intercession will work unless Will's place is decided. And of course, both of them think there is no way to decide this other than a fight. However, after a long silence, Aaron suggests they decide it with a game of rock, paper, scissors. The petition takes everyone off guard, but Aaron warns them that if they resort to any other method, then Will Surfort will come under his command instead. Having no other choice, Elfaria and Zeo play rock, paper, scissors, taking it as seriously as the fight. They both choose rock in the first round, so they try again to break the tie, only to end up choosing the same thing again. While they try to break the tie several times, Will simply tries to understand what's going on, and Julius tells him that he's pretty much the root cause of all of this. No one can say anything about it, so they just watch two powerful Magia Vander choose the same thing over and over again in a rock, paper, scissors game. Aaron patiently waits for them to break the tie, even after 299 throws and 299 ties. In round number 300, it is finally decided when Zeo chooses rock and Elfaria chooses scissors, instantly losing the game. As soon as she realizes she's lost, Elfaria lets out a horrified scream, immediately bursting into tears. Will worries for her, but Zeo celebrates and tells him that he now belongs to him, and he doesn't get to complain. Elfaria continues crying and clings onto Will, saying that she hates this and that she wants to stay with him. When he sees her crying that way, Will understands that Elfaria had to leave him and ascend the tower alone, and she's been waiting for him for 6 years. The truth is that he wants to stay with her too, but he knows that can't happen, at least not yet. That's why he decides to do what's best and tries to comfort Elfaria, telling her that it's alright because they'll see each other again, and he'll make sure to come and see her. His comforting words only cause Elfaria to cry more, but Sarissa doesn't give her time to say anything else and drags her away, saying that they have to leave, by Aaron's command. Elfaria throws a tantrum as she gets dragged away, so Sarissa simply scolds her and asks her not to embarrass herself any further. Even though he remains calm, Will is actually frustrated as well, even holding back tears. Zeo approaches him and admits that it looks like he understands how things work, since he really thought he was going to go berserk like a wild animal. Will calmly explains that if he says anything selfish, Elfaria will fight and get hurt again. That's why the only thing he asks from Zeo is to promise he won't fight with Elfaria anymore. Will warns him that if he doesn't promise him that, then he'll defeat him himself and run to her. After that bold declaration, Zeo only laughs loudly, saying that he likes that cocky grit of his, since that's just his style. With that, he places his hand on Will's Will's head to bestow him with his blessing, giving him the color of the Lightning faction. Zio then informs him that starting today, he is officially part of the Lightning faction, though he warns him that he shows no mercy, so he must prepare himself. Later that night, all the students who were accepted into factions celebrate together as the 401st class, the Grimm Generation. The celebration takes place in Clary's house, the secret base for single witches, which is not so secret anymore. Everyone cheers for their achievement, but Emma is reluctant to celebrate with them, so she asks them if they really think it's all right to fool around like this in the tower. Gordon and Lyral remind her that they were told they're free to do whatever they want until their guidance session tomorrow, so there is nothing wrong with wanting to celebrate. Even so, Emma clarifies that they are all in different factions now, so she doesn't know how to feel about fraternizing with rivals. Rose decides to tease her a little, saying that she's probably so happy she could jump from joy. Unable to hide it anymore, Emma admits just how happy she is, saying that she's over the moon and that she wants to be celebrated. With that in mind, Mike makes another toast in her honor, and this time Emma cheers with them, so happy that she bursts into tears. Lihanna decides to leave the celebration after a while to take a break, since she's really exhausted. Will finds her collapsed on the bed, instantly getting concerned, so Lihanna apologizes and explains that the exhaustion of the last few days has taken a toll on her body. Just as she's about to pass out, Kiki keeps her awake, so Lihanna tells him that he'll understand soon enough now that he's joined the Lightning faction. Will nervously admits that she's got him super curious, but also a little bit scared. Putting that aside, he simply offers her some food since he knows it's the only thing that will cheer her up no matter what. Of course, Lihanna immediately accepts, and while she enjoys the food, Julius suddenly shows up, just to tell Will that everything is a mess because he went and joined the Lightning faction. He explains that Elfaria kept crying, and when he tried to comfort her, she yelled that she would quit everything and then tried to run away. They all had to stop Elfaria after he left things like that, and he did nothing about it. Will quickly apologizes, saying that he truly is sorry, so Julius calms down and simply gives him back his goggles, since he forgot these. Will thanks him, but Colette comes out of nowhere to act really upset, asking them why they get along even better than they did before. She quickly clarifies that she's not angry, but Wignall calmly explains that Colette is envious, and she's jealous of Julius, because they forged a deep bond while she wasn't looking. Colette reproaches him for outing her like that, but Julius immediately tells them that he never forged any bonds, and he has no intention of joining their game of playing friends. He leaves right after that, and Colette complains about the fact he only ever says mean things. Despite that, Will tells her that he thinks he's started to understand his breed of kindness a little better. Gordon and Lyral soon enter the room looking for Will, saying that he should go with them and celebrate because he's part of their comeback club. Will hesitates for a moment, but Wignall tells him that he should go because he's worthy of far more recognition than he receives. This finally convinces him, so Will thanks him and decides to go with them to celebrate and talk to the others. Once he steps out of the room, Colette is left with a sad expression, and she confesses that it's exactly like Emma said, because she can't keep Will all to herself anymore. It just makes her feel lonely, knowing that she's not his only friend anymore, so she knows how selfish and annoying she is, because she hasn't changed at all from who she was before. Wignall decides to kindly interrupt her, saying that nothing will come of self-deprecation. He explains that he's decided to stop waiting, and it doesn't mean that he's given up, so he will use his own strength to get closer to the person he seeks, because that's what Will taught him. Lihanna mentions that when a coward fears running away, that's called courage. Colette realizes something just then, so she admits that even though she's a selfish, annoying woman, there is something she wants to tell Will. With that in mind, Colette decides to go tell him right away, but all her determination soon gets stuck at the door, not letting her take another step. Lihanna sees how much she's struggling, so she wonders if they should help her, but Wignall tells her that they should watch over her a bit longer. Meanwhile, Cyan watches the celebration from the second floor, not wanting to get involved. Julius decides to approach him, asking him why he's acting so melancholic tonight. He teases him a little, and asks him if he's lonely now that he's got no one to bully, since he's a stubborn, spiteful Ulster. Julius assumes that he just wants to tyrannize Will more, but Cyan looks at him with a serious expression and tells him that there's no longer any need for that. After all, Will isn't pathetic anymore, and even though he's infuriating, it doesn't offend him to look at him now. He never imagined this day would come, but now here they are. Will soon notices Cyan on the second floor, so he decides to tell him what he never let him say before, thanking him about Terminalia, the graduation ceremony, and so much else. Cyan doesn't say a word about that, and he barely reacts, but Will asks him if it'd be alright for him to come up where he is to thank him. However, Cyan smiles and tells him that if he wants to do that, then he just has to fight him. Before anyone can react, he summons his Falcon of Flames, saying that it's the perfect gesture in lieu of thanks. Not to anyone's surprise, Julius agrees with him and summons his Guardian as well, wanting to join in, because only with this he'll forgive what Will owes him for training him. While the situation escalates, Colette is still trying to gather the courage to take the next step. When she finally finds the determination to do it, she immediately walks towards Will, saying that there is something she wants to tell him. Unfortunately for her, that's exactly the moment Julius and Cyan's Guardians attack, creating an explosion. Meanwhile, Caradwyn talks to Iris somewhere else on the first floor of the tower, asking her if she's not going to the celebration. Iris clarifies that even if she did, it would only confuse everyone, and it would expose her true identity to Will. Caradwyn isn't surprised, because Watchers simply are always that secretive. Finn Finn shows up out of nowhere and mentions that he thinks that's the wrong move, because if she gets too fixated on maintaining her underclassman image, someone else will steal him away. Iris complains and asks him not to just appear whenever he feels like it, and she clarifies that she never asked for his advice. Finn tells her that he's actually rooting for her, but he also laughs just to annoy her. Iris tries to keep her calm and asks him to make her a promise, but he warns her that he might listen only if she calls him Finn and not Inves. To his surprise, Iris finally calls him Finn, letting him know that she's serious about this. She explains that Will has officially become a member of the tower, so he can't take him away just yet. Finn easily agrees, saying that he will respect Cerridwen's wishes and sit back a little while longer. However, if the sword fails to make good progress, he will take him, and that's not up for discussion. Cerridwen asks him to feel free to do so, because all is done to transcend the heavens. After they make that decision, Werkner arrives at Clary's house to see what's going on, and he only finds an entire mess after Julius and Cyan's attacks. Colette had used her magic to shield both Will and herself, but everything else around them was destroyed. Werkner harshly scolds them, saying that they've ascended the tower, yet they're still acting like students, so they're sorely lacking in awareness as high mages. All his anger suddenly dissipates, and Werkner clarifies that he would have scolded them like that not so long ago, but now things are different. He smiles and simply asks them not to relax too much, saying that he gives that advice not as their teacher, but as a senior mage. Once that's clear, he decides to have a chat with Will in private, congratulating him on making it through the second bloom. Will reminds him that he already congratulated him so many times after the graduation ceremony, and he even cried more than he did. Werkner gets embarrassed and asks him not to poke fun at him, because that's just what teachers are like. Putting that aside, Will confesses that he has a request and asks him if there is any way for him to see Elfaria, because he wants to see her more than anything right now. Werkner tells him that for someone from a different faction, meeting Amagia Vander is impossible, but coincidentally, there is a certain female student who wants to see him right now too. Will is a little surprised by this, but Werkner doesn't let him ask any question and asks him to go get changed, because they're sneaking out of the tower now. Moments later, Edward sees them sneaking out of the tower, so he complains and says that Werkner is taking his favoritism much too far. Eliza tells him that it's just because a different teacher, one as terrifying as a snake, rained down the lashings nearly to his breaking point. Clary ignores the obvious tension and hostility between Edward and Eliza, simply saying that it's just like back in their day. Once they're outside the tower, Werkner tells Will that he'll come back for him at 12, so he must make sure he can leave without regrets. As soon as he leaves, Elfaria sees Will and immediately jumps to hug him, making them both fall. She then throws another tantrum and asks him why he went with Zio and not her, wanting to know if he hates her now. Will reminds her that she lost at rock, paper, scissors, but Elfaria continues crying, saying that she thought she'd finally get to be with him, and now she doesn't want him to be Zio's bride. That last part clearly confuses him, so Will assures her nothing like that is going to happen. Once she calms down, he explains that he wanted to be together too, but then he asked himself if it was really alright for this to be their goal. They promised to become Magia Vander and go see the sunset together, after all, so he can't stand at her side yet, which is why he wants to get stronger. Elfaria suddenly rests her head in his lap, saying that she still hates this, because she wants to be with him and feel his warmth. Her action takes him by surprise, but Will then remembers what he saw in his dream of the past, when Elfaria tried to kiss him. He's still not sure what she was trying to do back then, so he just leans down the way she did, saying that a long time ago, she did the same and tried to play a trick on him, like a kiss or something. Elfaria immediately panics and pulls away, nervously saying that she has no idea what he's talking about. Will actually believes her for a second, and Elfaria desperately insists, saying that she's not Colette. He doesn't understand why she bringed her up though, because he has no idea Colette tried to pull the same trick. Elfaria tries to calm down and shyly asks him if he really remembers that, so Will confirms it, saying that he feels like there are things he doesn't remember yet. Cerridwen explained things to him, saying that he'll be able to move forward by recalling paths of magic he's walked. That's why if there's anything he's forgotten, he wants it back, including what they treasured together. Elfaria smiles and tells him that he's greedy, but Will agrees and admits that he's greedy enough to be a match for her. Only because of that, Elfaria decides to forgive him, but in exchange, she wants to go and take a peek at the sky with him. With just a movement of her hand, Elfaria creates an ice stairway to the sky, saying that they can see it from much closer than they did when they made that promise. As they walk upstairs together, she mentions that she cast illusion magic on the stairs, so they don't have to worry about people spotting them. Will carries her on his back, and Elfaria tells him that his back is much bigger than it was back then, but no matter how much he's grown, his warmth hasn't changed at all. Once they reach the top of the stairs, they both sit on two ice swings Elfaria created with her magic to observe the sky up close, realizing that the promise they made might be the most difficult promise to keep in the whole world. But even then, if it is still a promise they'll keep, so they'll watch the sunset together someday. The next day, everyone goes to the guidance session, expecting to hear tips about living here, since things are different here than at the academy. However, after Clary welcomes them, she admits that this is when she would give them orientation about the tower, but for their class, she's giving them a top-secret order. Everyone is obviously taken by surprise, so Clary tells them that their mission is to spy on the factions they've joined, paying close attention to conversations with fellow members, their behavior, behavior and records. If they find anything suspicious, they must investigate thoroughly and report back. Julius is a little alarmed by all of this, so he asks her to explain what this means. Clary reminds them of the surprise attack at Terminalia and explains that after investigating what lay behind the incident, all evidence pointed to just one thing: someone on the inside assisted them. The whole class is shocked when they realize what that means, and Clary confirms their fears when she tells them that there is a traitor in the tower.